21st century planet Earth era of dungeon monsters and adventurers. Donggun High School. The boys walk out of school, carefree chatting and talking about how slow time goes when classes are in session. Their musings are interrupted by a passing convoy of military vehicles. In the back of these trucks were young boys with 4 men in each. They were all dressed in strict suits. They were having fun discussing something, joking and laughing. The girls standing nearby were admiring these guys, shrieking at how cool they were. "It's just students of a specialized school, not hunters," reasoned one of the guys. But his friend noticed the logo on the car. These guys were definitely from the School of Heroes, as evidenced by this logo. One day, something very inexplicable and frightening happened on Earth. The sky turned a fiery red with red-hot objects falling everywhere. The faces of the witnesses were frozen with horror. A fierce creature with eyes burning like fire appeared from above. Huge portals like black holes began to open across the sky. Mad dragons flew out of these portals in countless numbers. They circled over the heads of the humans, galloping fiercely and scornfully surveying the new territories. One of the dragons, the fiercest, perhaps leading these creatures, landed on the roof of a building. It was quite impressive in size, as it took up almost the entire roof area of the building. People were shocked by what was happening. According to scientific facts as established later, there was a similar world in outer space. As a result of the catastrophe there, the other world was blown to pieces, the debris of which began to fly en masse towards the ground at tremendous speed. As they fell, they destroyed buildings and the city was engulfed in flames. The people observing this madness were in a state of shock. Such a phenomenon was called the merger, which led to the appearance on this planet of the laws of another world and its various monsters. Humanity has lost ownership. Now it has been taken over by monsters of another dimension. Finding himself in the epicenter of events, the guy watched one of the monsters from around the corner. He was huge with one horn on his head. In his left hand, he was dragging a poor man in a military uniform by his head. The horned horror had only one horn and was not very strong among its own. The stronger the monster, the more horns it had. When the horned one found the boy, his jaws with 3 rows of sharp fangs opened, and he went on the attack. The guy jumped out, went to the monster, drew his gun, and started shooting it. The monster rushed at the boy like a burning flame at breakneck speed. His eyes burned with fierce fire and fiery, scalding tears flowed. They came together in a tremendous blow, causing the guy to be thrown off like a blast wave. It was just driven into the wall. Even a man with extraordinary abilities couldn't stand up to this monster. The monster approached the guy again with the intent of ending the fight. With all his fury, he swung around to deliver a devastating blow. At that moment, the guy felt something rush to his arm. Fortunately, the invasion from another world brought more than just cataclysms. The guy seemed to be illuminated by an unearthly energy. He seemed to radiate it with his whole body. It was as if an unknown force had removed all the inherent limitations of humans, removed all limitations of human potential laid down by the nature of the earth. Feeling the immense strength, the guy believed in himself, and with all his might, he toppled over onto the monster. His muscular strength was so great that it was as if he could tear metal chains to shreds. With his acquired strength, he was able to topple the monster simply by lifting it by its arm. The monster was defeated and completely broken by the hands of a mere man. This tremendous power has affected all Earthlings without exception. However, the skill was different for everyone. The individuality of the person was taken into account. Through training and hardening, people mastered their new abilities and utilized their full potential. At the same time, countless monsters began to rise up from the rifts of the earth. To confront them, people began to organize elite troops to return the dungeon area to the people. These elite troops became known as hunters because they discovered hunting. Violent confrontations have begun in the struggle for survival on the planet. There was a new era of dungeons and hunters in which no one could feel safe anymore. The whole world shuddered at the chaos and violent confrontation taking place. Even before the end of the older generation, schools were established to educate future hunters. The epicenter of the events was visible even from space in the form of a huge glowing spot. The best institution for teenagers was considered the school that had been producing hunters for 25 years and was the world's most famous old school of heroes. So the guys nearby who had spotted the hunters' vehicles kept talking and discussing them. While the cars were at the stoplight, the boys reasoned that hunters take exams in the dungeon because they are confident in their abilities if they got into such a school. Near them stood a crowd of girls. They admired one of the young men sitting in the cab of the truck. The young man was quite attractive as he was half-elf in origin. One of the guys didn't understand why there was such excitement and who this young man was. The friend explained that he was a famous person and was often shown on TV. His father was a renowned hunter, and his mother was an elf. In his 17 years, he had 14 dungeon raids. He's a freshman in high school. They say he's a genius and predict a career as a top 5 trunker hunter 5 years after graduation. It's not like he's some idol they admire so much. One of the guys was outraged. The friend replied that they were much less crazy than his temper. The guy resented his friend for calling him testy. The friend decided to change his attention and told another friend that Lee Yoon had called him and his friends to karaoke. Yu Chae-ren was excited about something and was looking intently at his phone. He answered that he couldn't and that his friends should go have fun without him. My friends indignantly replied that exams were over and today would be a good day to rest. Yu Cha-ren didn't appreciate the pressure and shoved his classmate sharply with his rather powerful arm. Preoccupied with his own business, he bid them farewell until next week. The blow was pretty strong. You should think before you speak so you don't get in trouble, grinned the friend. He's in a difficult situation right now. Cha-ren was having financial problems and could not pay for his father's treatment. He urgently needed a large sum of money. Just got a message on his phone that there was a job for him. As he walked away, he passed by the high school students and Chui Dayao felt something coming from him, but thought it was just a passing thought. Chae-rin really didn't want to go to work and was depressed about the situation with his father. He went down to the underpass where his employers were already waiting for him, so to speak. 37-year-old I.M. J.E. Huang was a broker. He waited for Chae-ren in the company of two strangers and introduced one of them as the customer. The client was furious when he saw the guy. He yelled at the broker for promising to show him the most capable one. The broker claimed that Yu Chae-ren was the most capable. The customer yelled that he didn't come here to do charity work. He demanded to remove this little brat and bring a normal man. Started threatening that the broad-shouldered uncle standing next to them would cripple them. Yu Cha-ren asked this uncle if he was a hunter or an ex-hunter since he was working for this underhanded customer. This broad-shouldered guard was Li Peel Gu, a former silver-ranked hunter. 81 dungeon raids. He offered to punish the guy. Yu Chae-ryung reacted sharply negative to the threats he received. The broker advised the guy to apologize if he cared about his life. Rolling up his sleeves, the guy said he didn't know how to do that. He was a freshman in high school, had 371 dungeon raids, illegally. The essence of the proposed work for hunters was as follows. Dungeon smuggling. Hunters to this day work very hard to clear the dungeons of the monsters that swarm there. Provided they successfully mop up and destroy the monsters, they receive a large reward. But before bringing these treasures outside, they need to be tested, because some of them have tremendous power to do great harm. If they are left outside without proper authorization, they can be used for dangerous purposes. Such treasures must undergo a certain amount of vetting and registration with the Hunters Association, and also the appropriate tax will have to be paid for them. There are some craftsmen who try to violate these requirements. They're trying to coax hunters who don't want to pay higher taxes and smuggle treasure out of the dungeons in violation of strict laws. If such skillful people are not caught in time, there can be chaos in the society. Therefore, everyone is asked to call the association as soon as possible when encountering such people. Continuing their tense conversation in the passage, Lee Pil-gyu and Yu Cha-ren prepared to fight. The customer no longer thought it was a good idea and wondered if the broker wanted to intervene. From their conversation, Chae-ren realized that Lee Pil-gyu was the real culprit. He got rid of his colleague. The ex-hunter was a real piece of work. He treated people like garbage, which he disposed of calmly. Cha-ren was quite discouraged by his attitude and remarks. Apparently, he thought that he was garbage himself, so he made a lot of trouble and lost his license for it. Without long thinking, the former hunter joined the battle and struck the first blow. Chae-ren deftly dodged and said with a smirk that he was not only a bad man, but also attacked in any way he could. These words made his opponent very angry. His rage knew no bounds. Without thinking long, Cha-ren decided to strike lightly as well. The impact was quite impressive and certainly not in any way expected by the opponent. The customer watched the fight in surprise and could not believe his eyes. The broker was very pleased with his guy and marveled that he'd found the most capable one who could easily knock out an opponent. Chae-ren calmly repelled his opponent's attacks and wondered that someone so powerful in appearance should be harder. Lee Pil-gyu was only getting hit before he could retaliate. He looked like just a little kid in front of him. But this kid's reflexes were surprisingly very suggestive, and the force of the blow to the chin that Pil-gyu missed indicated that he was facing a true professional. Quite pleased with himself, the broker told the customer that he was mistaken, and Chae-ren is not the kind of person who can be so easily defeated in battle. The customer, who was surprised, said that the kid was really a good fighter, but that he could not take down an opponent with a single kick. There was a time when Pil-gyu was at its best. The broker had a rough idea of what had happened before and the power he had. He was probably a tank with such impressive physical attributes. The customer was surprised by this view of Pil-gyu, to which the broker said it was just a gut feeling. Pil-gyu realized that the boy had skills, but he was just a smuggler and didn't know what the hunters were experiencing. He decided to tell Cha-ren about it. After the merge, people had acquired skills beyond the boundaries. All of them had different figures and abilities, so their skills were also different. The same goes for hunters. They each train according to their skills and abilities. Each of them had a different role. There was a different mission and assignment. Some were good at archery, some were great with blades. Cha Ren was quite amazed and interested in what Pil Jiu was telling him. Among them were the so-called tanks with giant strength and steel skin. Their specialty was to protect team members from the dangers of the dungeon. They walked ahead of everyone else, personally clashing with the monsters and taking the full brunt of the impact. Their bodies were so trained that they weren't even afraid of bullets. There were also top tanks that could even become a shield and withstand missiles of any power. So that's what a real hunter meant, Cha Ren pondered without breaking away from reality. Pil Jiu, not giving up hope for his victory, continued his attack. Cha Ren kept the fight back and didn't let his opponent relax. Their confrontation was so powerful that the customer could barely stay on his feet. He feared he might get hurt himself in such a mess. The broker smirked and asked if the customer was okay and if he liked what he was watching, lamenting that Pil Jiu trashed the workroom with his crushing energy. Cha Ren, again and again, skillfully dodged his opponent's blows. The hunter wondered why the guy didn't show all his abilities, but rather dodged attacks. Cha Ren had his own plan and didn't want to fall into the hunter's trap. The broker thought that the hunter has a pretty good level. Its physical force of destruction is similar to a medium-sized truck. If you take a hit like that, it could shatter every bone in your body. The customer started shouting for Cha Ren to finish it quickly, because if the hunter defeats something else, he will deduct from his salary. The hunter wondered why the customer did not understand how this fight would end, because he was very confident in himself, claiming that you can't beat a pro with skills like Chang Ren. Cha Ren had a different opinion on the matter and took the object in his hands and said it would be enough to end the fight. After all, because of the excellent resistance and endurance, people think that tanks are invincible, but they are not so. They all have their weaknesses and enemies. The customer was relieved to realize that now it was finally over. Cha Ren knew one secret, that it was possible to concentrate a huge destructive force in one point. As an example, a D-Mej dealer whose skill set surpasses a tank by several levels. You can crush your opponent with one blow so that he can't even get up and will be defeated. The customer, of course, knew the outcome of this fight and calmly watched, unlike the customer who was extremely impressed by the outcome. The completely defeated hunter mumbled frustratedly and asked the guy where he had learned the twisting technique. Cha Ren didn't understand what exactly the hunter was talking about, which technique he was referring to. The hunter might have seen his father before, but he said he thought he had imagined it. Cha Ren's father was also a great hunter in the past, and maybe they crossed paths. When Cha Ren was very young, his father was the best hunter. And he was the best, not because of his father, but for great merit. His name was Yu Sung. He was from the first generation of heroes who fought desperately. The same young man who was able to defeat the Horned Terror as one of the first. These established units were the first hunters. They became legends to those who had not experienced the horror of history. In fact, those times can safely be called Hunter's Hell. First of all, there wasn't enough information about what dungeons are and what kind of monsters are there. They felt fear of the unknown and had no idea how to face it. Gecko Mullis is an immature individual, one-of-a-kind monster that today seems not particularly dangerous. Today, these monsters are considered an easy level, and even beginners can handle them. But for hunters of the time, were comparable to an unknown calamity. They had no skills to fight monsters, only a desire to rid the land of unwelcome guests. There were no normal items. We fought with whatever we had to. For example, titanium alloy blades resistant to corrosion are the lowest level. And in such a nightmarish environment, the first generation of hunters risked their own lives by trial and error. And those lucky enough to be alive gained experience and accomplishments for the sake of the next generation, so that they don't have to experience this horror, and eventually became heroes and defenders of their planet. Dragon Slayer Yu Sung. This is the nickname given to the first human to slay a dragon. He was the world's #1 dragon hunter and children's idol. I respected and greatly envied my father more than anyone else. I firmly believed that he was invincible and no one in this world could break him. The cause of his illness was poison. While hunting in the dungeons, his father was poisoned and it was impossible to cure him. As always, he did not give up and tried his best to overcome this difficulty. But over the years, his physical condition had reached its limit. Even the co-workers my father risked his life for were taking advantage of his illness. They sneakily appropriated all of his accomplishments and available assets for themselves. Thus, my father's physical and mental suffering continued for several years. When some time passed, the world began to forget the name of the Dragon Slayer Yu Song. In him, it was already difficult to see that image of the hero that everyone admired. He lost everything he had. Tormented by an incurable disease, became just a hero forgotten by everyone. As for Pil Jiu, he was not a worthy opponent for Tha Rina. The broker, looking at the depressed state of the customer, said it was not difficult for his protege. The customer couldn't believe how his hunter could lose to some green youth. At that moment, the broker's thoughts were on something else entirely. He had run out of cigarettes and replied casually that apparently PLG was not as good a hunter as he had always thought. Che Rin, seeing the hunter bragging about beating up his own colleague, thought that you could immediately guess his low level. There are only two instances in which good hunters are retired. Either they are no longer physically able to do the job due to injuries, or they died during the raid. It doesn't appear how much he can be paid, but if it's more than the lowest rate, I'd recommend firing him. If he's only after weight, anyone can do it. Cho Ren is a bit over the top, said the broker, addressing the customer, and asked for understanding from the dear customer. Also asked to keep in mind that the fees for their services will now be twice as high. Such statements made the customer very angry. Why on earth should he pay more? The broker explained that there was no need to bully them and that they don't do anything for free. The customer had no choice but to agree to his terms. The broker called out to Che Ren and asked if he had heard of the Sky Wasp. Would he have to fight the Sky Wasp? Che Rin couldn't believe it. The Sky Wasp is a monster that is known as the most dangerous monster, not only on the Korean peninsula, but also in the whole world. The area of Old Yoido, where the Nest of Heavenly Ones is located, has become the area with the highest level of difficulty in Korea. Ranchers can't easily deal with even one individual, and there's a whole army out there, so for a smuggler, it's a long shot. It's different if it's a top white-ranked hunter. According to the customer, a major raid took place yesterday, which was not covered in the media. A team of 7 white ranch hunters was assembled by the military with the support of the state. Charian was greatly surprised that the squad consisted of as many as 7 hunters. So to speak, all the Korean stars were gathered, although only a couple of them came, as it is already shouted in all the newspapers. They managed to organize a hunt for the mate. The goal of this team was to destroy the wasp, but unfortunately it didn't work out. One of those 7 had appropriated the Heaven Wasp royal jelly for himself. He bribed one of his men in the special unit and smuggled the item out. Che Ren didn't understand what jelly we were talking about. It was the nutrient the wasps use to feed the new mate, the broker explained. Did a white rank hunter decide to smuggle in some nutrient? Royal jelly has made several appearances before. According to the broker, the man who ate it was able to literally escape the death grip and come back to life. Che Ren first heard of such a substance and was amazed at its effects. All nooks and crannies leading to the dungeons must be under strict control. This is the official position of the Hunters Association and the government. The broker knew that wasn't really the case. In his opinion, one must always be careful not to get killed. Cha Rien began to realize what a daunting task he was facing. You always have to be on your guard, and this time you have to be especially careful. Che Rin looked very confused and seemed to be thinking about something. He thought about his father's illness. The broker decided to bring him to his senses. He thought the guy was thinking about something else, so he kept silent and didn't answer anything. Broker decided that the words about the revitalizing potion would not let him rest. Che Ren replied that it makes no difference whether he cares or not. It's probably just an exaggeration. Even if a cure like no other exists, it still can't cure his father. Because if there was any way, my father would never have lost the thread of hope. After the fusion, different kinds of dungeons appeared all over the land. Among them, a few of the largest in Korea stood out particularly clearly. The first place was where Jeju Island merged with the Hot Rock, and the second place was where the confluence of the Igara jungle took place. From one part of a neighborhood in Seoul, Old Boram neighborhood with a danger level of D+, this area has not yet been cleaned up. It was a huge dungeon in the center of which was the Yoido district, as well as the Mapo Yongsan and Yeongdinpo districts. It was the center of a huge dungeon in the center of Yoido, Mapo Yongsan, and Yeongdinpo. One of the smuggler's men delivered the goods to the rendezvous point. When he arrived on the scene, it looks like communications were lost. He was probably wounded or in some kind of trouble. Maybe he was wounded by wasps. Broker didn't think he took the merchandise for himself. The customer said to check the scene and bring the goods if they were there. Che Ren thought again about that magic substance and its possibilities. The broker called out to the guy again and told him to concentrate on his work. Che Ren realized that the broker was worried about him appropriating the goods for himself and escaping. But at the same time, he realized that the guy wasn't so stupid to take such a step and asked him to be more careful. He reminded that the substance is quite expensive, and it is not only people who are after it. Che Ren descended into this dungeon on a long rope without letting go of the thought of the substance. It is quite possible that the entire forest is now filled with the odor of this nutrient, at the smell of which all sorts of monsters will gather to eat. And he was right. Chin Si-ram from the High School of Heroes from freshman year. She was in the worst situation that could happen in her entire life. I thought the second semester midterms would be easy. But something appeared in front of her, a monster that shouldn't be in this place. She squeezed her eyes shut as if imagining that this nightmare was just a dream. I couldn't understand how this could happen because the exam should be quite simple. It was necessary to collect as many coins as possible that were hidden in different corners of the dungeon. It was a practice exam and the difficulty level in the exam area was at the lowest level. It's not that big. You could say it's a beginner's hunting ground. And the monsters that dwelled here were weak and had little to no intelligence. However, now other very dangerous monsters had appeared here. She had no choice but to run. If there was any chance of success, it would be a miracle. Despite the danger, Jin Se-ram thought that she should not give up and fight. The monster she caught was a Titan monkey, an immature specimen with a 3-star danger level. Se-ram attacked him with archery, but the arrows were quite tiny for him, and the durability of his hide is greater than that of an armored car, which greatly discouraged the girl. No matter how many shots she fired, she couldn't penetrate his powerful defenses. The attacks had no effect on him whatsoever, and he didn't even need to dodge and block the blows. She decided to get a little closer to make him less defensive. Jin Se-ram can apply magic to the tip of his arrows. A mage archer skilled in the special technique of fire bombardment. The kinds of magic she can put into the arrows are endless and have no limits. And for the ultimate victory, she chose to explode, putting all her strength and power into it. She felt that such a blow would work quite well on a monster with a 3-star danger level. This only applied to the situation where it was necessary to hit the target accurately. Not expecting him to react, she was surprised that he managed to duck before the shot and jump up as if he knew. She doubted if she could do it again. Finding no other way out, she was forced to flee from the monster. She ran away, even though it was not an easy task. Luckily for her, Cha Ren was nearby and noticed that the girl was in danger and struck the monster from the back. The blow hit the monster right in the chin. It was Cha Ren's signature punch. But apparently, that wasn't enough for such a monster. Then he took out some unknown object and attacked again. Jin Se-ram was amazed as he went to attack the monster face to face. He could be killed. Cha Ren shouted to her to close her eyes, warning her of the next step. The fearless guy threw himself right into the monster's face, holding some sort of plan in his head, for the realization of which this unknown object was required. Some super powerful radiance illuminated the surroundings and seemed to blind the monster. This radiance was so powerful that Jin Se-ram, being down on the ground, could not contain her gaze and covered her face with her hands. The monster was blinded and Cha Ren lamented that he had used the last of his item. This item that gave off such a blinding flash was called a stun torch. This instrument was made from the scales of some deep-sea fish. Price aside, its awesome function is that of decontamination. In its day, this torch won the great love of many hunters. However, because of the inability to use its powerful properties, there were those who lost their eyesight, and its manufacture and use is considered illegal. Cha Ren told Jin Se-ram to wait a few more seconds for the torch to expire, that he helped her in any way he could, and then it was every man for himself. Warned him that no matter what happened, he wouldn't let the hunters see him, that he wasn't helping them or fighting them. The broker waiting for Cha Ren reasoned comparing smugglers to cockroaches and that they were making good money. The guy thought that if you go everywhere, you might get run over one day. Jin Se-ram didn't listen to the guy and decided to follow him. But despite my best efforts, somehow I missed him. Cha Ren deliberately hid and watched. He didn't like her watching him. He jumped and asked who she was and why she was following him. The girl replied that she just wanted to thank him for saving her. He naturally didn't believe her and told her not to take him for a fool. Jin Se-ram told her she knew he was a smuggler and wanted to hire him for money. Cha Ren looked surprised but did not appreciate the offer. He said he had no intention of helping her again. He's not interested in that offer. He thought the rich kids at Hero School had lost their minds. Warned me if he hangs around anything, there'll be no mercy. Watching him leave, Jin Se-ram shouted that the reward for denouncing a smuggler is 50 million won, and the price for a prisoner is about 450 million won. Cha Ren was stunned by what he heard. The girl had one of these things. It was Enkill blood. Its value was very high. Even if she could take 5 prisoners, she couldn't recoup it. She offered a deal. If he helped her pass the exam, the payment would be very good and the Enkill blood would be a down payment. Cha Ren was shocked. At first, he thought she was just the daughter of rich parents, but now he thought she was crazy. The girl said nothing more important than that this thing could help completely change his life. But their musings were interrupted. Cha Ren said they didn't have much time. The monster came to his senses and without thinking long decided to attack them again. Cha Ren gave her the weapon and told her not to stand and watch, but to use her magic on him. Like last time with the bow, he asked her to put magic into the spear tip and throw it to him. Unfortunately, magic is not infinite, and it takes time to replenish. She had to do something about it because he's not going to last long with his bare hands. Against this monster with impenetrable hide and good instincts, She only had a quarter of her magic left. With such low power, it's impossible to harm the monster. The thought came to her that it might be best to run away while he distracted the monster. She put all her remaining magic into the spear and threw it to Cha Reina, not hoping for a better outcome. Jin Si-ram had a feeling of madness at what she had dared to do. Cha Ren looked at the exhausted girl and was quite disappointed. I couldn't even get a quarter of it in. There wasn't much magic. Satisfied with the result, Cha Ren said that it was still enough to strike a good blow. High school students are constantly being told what the first thing to do in a battle with a monster is. It's not just a destructive force sweeping away everything in its path, and the right moment and feeling to hit the exact target. In other words, sensation and ability together in one combination, which is a must-have for all hunters without exception. Silver class, gained after completing dungeons more than 50 times and having the ability to fight monsters of the rank of 3 stars. Allows you to enter a mid-rank dungeon without special permission. Most hunters have this class. Si-ram went to a good school and had all the advantages of that institution. She had a carefree and promising childhood and many friends. Si-ram was from a rich and respectable family. She had a private driver who picked her up after school. Even her friends envied her. She had everything she ever wanted. In fact, she did. She could get almost anything in sight. Her father was the heir to the 4th-ranked company in South Korea's business community, Chinsun Group. He married an elven woman, a member of a tribe from another world. And in this great marriage, Chin Se-ram was fortunate enough to be born. Her dream was a passionate desire to become a hunter by all means. She believed that someday her dream would come true. When Se-ram became a teenager, she and her father came to the elf who was her own uncle to enroll her in school. He didn't think it would work. Allegedly, she had too little elven blood in her. I mean, she's practically the same as a normal human. I thought her parents should have stopped her, not encouraged her to do it. The father decided to support his daughter's path. His name was Jin Seung-gyu. He is currently the head of the Special Development Department at the Jinsung Group. He believed that you didn't have to have elven abilities to be a hunter. With a smirk, the elf agreed. But for a human, such abilities would not be superfluous, he thought. However, she is not much more than the average teenager. The elf was well aware, and that Se-ram was no ordinary person after all. And for sure, she won't just give up and keep pushing for what she wants. With her stubbornness and persistence, she strongly resembled his sister. Though in his opinion, humans would not be able to compare to elves even if they died in battle with a monster and then resurrected. Maybe if she tries her best, maybe she'll make it to mid-level. To an ordinary man, even such words would be praise and recognition. But his daughter had been born with too much besides ability. The wealth of fame and genes, all of which can devalue her efforts in an instant. Might make her a laughingstock, maybe even make her an outcast. She can't take this attitude for long and will just be broken. Che-rin knew very well that abilities don't just fall out of the sky. Only hard training, constant development of abilities and skills can lead to victory and strike any opponent dead. Only confidence and unwavering belief in yourself and your abilities will lead to success. Jin Si-ram was amazed at Cha Reina's capabilities because they were about the same age. The guy was flattered by this surprise of the girl he tried to impress. Their conversation was interrupted by the customer paying attention to the object in Chai-rin's hands. It should be handled carefully so as not to break it, as it is expensive. Holding what looked like glasses in his hands, he doubted their value. He thought they could be bought at any store like Dayazo, a chain of stores offering inexpensive goods. Broker knew that these glasses had facial recognition interference and voice alteration. They also had 4 kinds of magic on them. But Cha Ren, as it turned out, was not known for his sleight of hand and accuracy. He'd had a bad day since this morning, and he wasn't having much luck today at all. The girl decided to ask if they happened to attend the same school. Without trying to hide his irritation, he asked for what she had promised for her help, leaving the question unanswered. She kept her promise and gave him the blood of the Enkill as an advance. He examined the amulet suspiciously, doubting its authenticity. Trying to be friendly, she gently inquired about his well-being. After all, the pay was not small at a hunter's school. Che-rin disliked students from fee-paying schools and was wary of them. He said irritably that he didn't go to such places. The girl was greatly surprised to hear where he had learned to master magic and combat techniques like that. He was self-taught and developed his abilities on his own without the help of teachers or mentors. Si-ram was furious at what he said. How so? Incredible movements and sense of timing. She thought he was just mocking her. To prove his point, he threw his name tag in her face for her to see for herself. The enraged girl asked what it was that he was allowing himself and what it was all about. It was his student ID card from Donggang High School. It had nothing to do with a hunting school. Che-ren's words were confirmed by this ticket. He really did go to a very ordinary liberal arts school. She couldn't believe her eyes. In response, he asked if she now wanted to prove her position, show either a student card or some other document. The girl complied with his request and provided her documents. Her student ID card confirmed her attendance at Heroes High School, and it turned out they were the same age. For the time being, he decided to clean up her paperwork, thus signaling that the deal was done. Surprised by that, the girl indignantly asked why the mind would want her apprentice. It was on the surface. The answer was that she was offering him a job and she had seen his face. And that wasn't all. He pulled out his phone and motioned for the girl to come closer. The girl in confusion couldn't understand what he was doing or what he wanted. By deploying a phone lens instead of a contract, the proof of community will be selfies. She must have realized that the smuggler's accomplices would suffer the same punishment. That selfie was insurance in case she decided to terminate the contract and turn it in. That's when S.E. Ram realized that she may well have gotten involved with a man who was far more dangerous than she thought. But it was too late to change anything. To begin, Cha Ren offered to calculate the cost of his services. He asked what exactly he needed to do. The girl explained the assignment. According to the assignment she had received at school, she had to collect coins to pass. The coins were hidden in different corners of the exam field. The time allotted was only 6 hours. She also needs to find a box with a coin pattern with which she must prove her identity. She had already found one coin on her own. She needed one more to complete the task. The girl had an idea where she might be. Che Rin thoughtfully decided to have a snack and asked where S.E. Ram thought she could be. She had information that maybe where the Eugene Mall used to be. How things are working out, he thought, while devouring a candy bar. Not quite knowing what he was talking about, the girl listened attentively. So she stumbled upon that monster for a reason, the guy said. Told her he was looking for something inside that mall too. A sky wasp. She couldn't believe it and thought he was crazy. Not a wasp, but something like her honey, said Cha Ren. She thought she heard him say royal jelly. He has a very strong odor that attracts monsters. This one probably smelled it too. Che Rin asked if she was supposed to go there personally. He didn't care, but if the coins were definitely there. They should be there. There just aren't any left in other places. The rest of the coin was collected by other teams. Other teams? Here's the thing. He didn't understand why she was here alone before. Noticing his surprise at her being alone on such an assignment, she said it was better this way. Che Rin got down to business and suggested that she get the coin herself, since that was his task, and asked how much she would pay. The girl offered 950 million won, adding that it was all the cash she had at the moment. Such a very impressive sum was already far above his expectations, and he replied that it was enough to start with. She, on the other hand, was willing to pay more for extras. Only she'd need time. If more work comes in, then we can pay for it, he said in response. A little worried, she wondered if he had any strength left to complete the task. Without answering, he rushed forward so that she could barely keep him in sight. As he ran, the thought crossed his mind that he might well have asked for a higher payment. Ram was troubled by one thought. Did he really not learn from anyone? She decided to ask him about it as she ran along. He yelled out that he couldn't say he had no one at all. He must have meant his father. Suddenly, something appeared in his path. He braked sharply and saw the monsters ahead. He yelled to her to get ready. Their path was blocked by two monsters, a species called the cluster raptor. They lived in the area of Old Boraim, danger level 2 stars. Che Ren was never trained in hunter's techniques. All his skills came from experience, when he risked his life fighting with his bare hands. Except for one exception, as a child, he watched his father's technique, who taught him the 3 simple tricks he needed to win. The first of which was the needle. It mobilizes everything available: speed, strength, and body weight. And he's aiming for the enemy's weak spot. It looks easy, but it's actually not easy. Feelings and abilities are the result of experience. Even among the highest-ranking hunters, not many can say they have mastered such a technique on their own. Cha Ren had mastered it perfectly since he had a lot of experience in battling monsters. C.E. Ram found it odd that there were 2 monsters, since cluster raptors gather at least 5 at a time. Apparently, she wasn't the only one who suffered damage from the royal jelly, said he in response. He figured there'd be a lot of monsters gathering here soon. They decided to catch their breath a bit before proceeding further. C.E. Ram couldn't get rid of the thought of where he had learned magic and started asking again. She asked him again if he'd had any individual lessons. No lessons were given, he only peeked at practice a few times. She couldn't help but wonder about Che Rin. All he did was watch and learn a few moves, and it was weird. He didn't understand why she kept looking at him so strangely. She was just annoyed that he knew how to do what they were taught in school. Suddenly, she threw something. Che Rin caught it without realizing what it was or why. Opening his hand, he found a vial. It was a Type C endurance vial worth 1,100,000 won. SERM said to drink it because he probably wasn't in the best condition either. He appreciated the generosity and said that since she gave the ampule because he annoyed her, she could say worse things about him. But he did not drink the ampule. He put it carefully in his pants pocket. Surprised, the girl asked why he wouldn't drink it. He replied that he could sell it later. Increasingly amazed by Che Rin's behavior, the girl shouted angrily that he didn't know how much this ampule cost. He knew, of course, so he decided to save the ampule for a better time. You can get about 1,000,000 won for one on the black market. What a strange fellow this guy was, more and more convinced the girl. The guy started moving and said since she'd had a drink, we could move on. He was becoming more and more convinced of how weird rich parents' kids were. At last they came to the former shopping center, not daring to enter at once, and sat down to look around. Che Ren decided to clarify the purpose of their arrival there. Their purpose was not to hunt, but to safely get what each of them needed and get out of there. Whatever monster they come across, they need to keep their cool and follow his instructions. He asked her to trust him since survival was his specialty, and she had only studied such situations from books. The girl agreed with him, not understanding why she had such a strange feeling. She spent half a year at Hero's school, during which time she failed to gain acceptance and a foothold. It was the first time she was going into the danger zone with someone together. Che Ren interrupted her musings, and they headed deeper into the mall. Inside, they saw something that horrified them. They stopped in a daze, trying to make sense of what had happened. In front of their eyes was an extremely unpleasant picture. Someone had brutally slaughtered the monsters, filling the entire space with their bodies. Man is a much braver creature than he realizes. All it takes is preparation, and he'll be able to face whatever situation awaits him. If we talk about problems, they can arise when things go beyond what is expected. Terror froze in S.E. Rom's eyes. The monsters that lived in this area were all in front of her eyes. They're of a pretty dangerous level even for professional hunters. And such was the scene at the entrance. It was cautious to imagine what awaited them inside. Che Ron was also sure that they could not relax and that something very dangerous was waiting for them inside. He thought she knew what was waiting for them. I was just surprised because I saw something scarier than I expected. Doesn't change anything though. Inside, a pitiful picture awaited them in principle expected from what they had seen before. Cha-Ren saw the monster standing in front of him and prepared to fight. In front of them stood a monster nicknamed Chopping Rib with a danger level of 5 stars. The monster launched an attack with an incredibly long tongue, tightly wrapping his tongue around the weapon like a boa constrictor, squeezing its victim. With the power of a huge wave, he easily tossed Cha-Ren upwards. He managed to wrestle the weapon out of his hands, but the boy was not deterred. He decided to attack from above, concentrating all his power in one blow. Applying all his skill, he hit right in the center of the monster's so-called head. Cha-Ren's punch was magnificent and accurate. The monster was defeated. The girl thought that everyone here was already dead. She was surprised at its vitality. He realized that it wasn't about survivability, but that he had been left alive on purpose. It served as a sort of warning to uninvited guests. The slashing rib emits a terrible scream when threatened with life, alerting other monsters. The girl could not understand who could have done such a thing and for what purpose. A voice interrupted their conversation, saying it was his doing. He could no longer wait for Cha-Ren and stay awake so long. There were more monsters than he expected, and once he had dealt with all of them, he decided to take a break, and for that he needed to leave someone to watch over him. Apparently, Cha-Ren was not happy to meet this hunter, and S.E. Rom realized from his reaction that they knew each other. Having just woken up with one eye, he said carelessly that they looked a little small for smugglers. Cha-Ren realized that this meeting would not lead to anything good. They waited attentively for his next move. He jumped down and turned to the girl, noticing the symbol on her clothes. He asked if she was a student of the hunter's school. Alarmed, she gave an affirmative answer and asked what's in it for him. He did not suppose what alliance bound them and expressed his sympathy, because that means she'll have to die with Cha-Ren now. Cha-Ren wasn't in the mood to talk to him, and she was told she didn't need to listen to him, much less respond. In his opinion, this man wants to kill them and get the royal jelly. The guy asked the hunter how he was going to deal with the consequences if he stole someone else's stuff since he didn't work for Cha-Rena's client. But the hunter was as calm as ever and felt it would only be necessary if he was exposed. He considered himself lucky in life. By chance, he heard that a colleague of his was going to steal a precious object. He originally wanted to attack the guy when he first came here, but something went wrong, plans changed, because things don't always work out the way they're supposed to. He was sorry the plan didn't work out. He saw the monster run into the mall, but he couldn't find it. He thought there must be a hiding place where the treasure could be hidden. Che Ren realized that the communication with the person in charge had not stopped because of the poison of the sky wasp. She was lost at the hands of this hunter, eager to get his hands on the treasure. Che Ren didn't necessarily need to personally fight him at all, but there was a real hunter standing in front of him, claiming that the boy's death was a foregone conclusion but could be as painless as possible. And he was completely different from the rabble he'd met before. Cha-Ren told the girl to go find the coin and run away from here as fast as possible while he distracts the hunter. Thanks to the hunter, there was now no one left inside the building, and it was now safe. She was worried about the boy. The hunter suddenly crept up and said he could hear their entire conversation. A battle broke out between them. The hunter threw the first punch, but Chae-rin was able to dodge it. Si-ram froze with her mouth open. He shouted for her to stop stomping and run away, pretending to worry about how he'd get his reward if she died. The hunter thought it was a waste to send her away because the two of them would have had a better chance of staying alive. A fierce battle broke out between them. Each was strong in his own way and both had a lot of experience under their belt. Chae-rin held his ground. He didn't give the appearance of being weaker than an experienced hunter, which surprised him greatly. How skillfully he calculated the trajectory of the hunter's sword. The guy used his signature move, kicked him in the chin. The opponent was defeated and Chae-rin took a moment to catch his breath. Suddenly, he heard a voice. In the darkness stood a hunter who had come to his senses. He said he didn't think to use the gear, and didn't take the guy seriously at first because of his age. As it turned out, Chae-rin was even higher than a professional in his opinion, and also said now we'll have to remove the girl from the School of Heroes. Young Do-gyun was a gold-ranked hunter. Fully confident in his superiority, he grinned that the battle wouldn't be long. Meanwhile, the broker decided to grab a bite to eat while waiting for Chae-rin with the customer. He offered to weld the loom for him as well, but the customer was nervous and did not appreciate the calmness and the offer. He waited for his guard to come to his senses. The broker told him to sit down, as it would not happen soon. The customer complained that it didn't seem worth the money he was paying, all muscle and no substance. Hailed himself as a great hunter, bragged about his strength. He shouldn't have been so vain. The customer thought that the hunter had lost not because he was stupid, but because he deserved to lose. But he thought to himself that he was really stupid. In the broker's opinion, the customer was wrong. Hunters aren't supposed to fight people. He was trained to hunt and scout, not to fight other hunters. He may have handled the monster, but it's no surprise that the smuggler defeated him. The customer challenged the broker's opinion by saying that he had heard that hunters also fight among themselves. Yes, of course there have been instances of hunters fighting each other. After all, the higher their level and strength, the further things can go. Even comrades and colleagues who fight together and rely on each other can betray each other out of greed. So they might as well compete with each other and get killed by their own. Anything can happen inside the dungeon. Who's to say they can't? The customer was surprised that it turns out, for example, you can say that the comrade died from the monster, and no alibi would be needed. The broker explained the higher the level of the hunter, the more they train in anticipation of battling each other. As for the customer's buddy, he wasn't a hunter of that caliber. He just beat up a coworker and got caught doing it. So this incident happened outside the dungeon. It was probably just a minor altercation over equipment. The customer couldn't believe his ears. It was over equipment. The broker explained that when hunters go hunting, they bring armor and weapons with them. If he had anything, he could fight. Chae-rin had its own weapons. For hunters, it is the equipment that is half of their fighting power. Even a gold-ranked hunter in battle can't always hold his own without proper equipment. But of course, weapons don't always decide the outcome of a battle. Chae-rin's punching technique is excellent. His strength is in defense. Young Do-gyun stepped forward and said that Chae-rin shouldn't think so much about nonsense. It's time to fight. While the broker and the customer were reasoning, Yang Do-gyun and Chae-rin fought a fierce battle. The hunter's punching power was at an all-time high. No doubt his rank meant a lot. It seemed that the opponents had a huge difference in strength and experience. Hunter, confident in his victory, asked for another demonstration of Chae-rin's abilities. The hunter was wearing a unique piece of equipment called the Shadow Jacket, armor of rank A. Through the user's blood, it provides support for physical strength and also forms a covering to protect against impact. These were the basics of Berserk that Jan Do-gun applied. Chae-rin didn't believe that a hunter couldn't have weaknesses, but if he responds ineptly to attacks, he could be killed. It seemed that such a strong opponent Chae-rin had never met before. Young Do-gyun was already preparing to end this fight and was anticipating victory. Agreed, though, that the guy had a pretty long and decent run. Chae-rin replied that perhaps today was a special day for him. The guy's clothes were in complete disrepair after such a fight. His sense of humor never left him, and with a chuckle, he said it was his favorite outfit. And Yang Do-gyunu said there's nothing special about him. It was a little scary because of the aura. But considering he's just a high school kid who came in with nothing, the hunter relied solely on his armor. I wish Chae-rin had one of those. Yang Do-gyun grinned in response to his words and did not deny being right in what he said. Chae-rin realized that his opponent was in a hurry because he had to send him to the other world, and also catch up with Si-ram before she can tell anyone. Realizing all this, the boy tried to stall for time, while the hunter, on the contrary, was in a hurry. The second technique, which could not be performed by Chae-rin alone, he had learned as a child while peeping at his father. It consisted of taking the enemy's power and using it against him, to deliver the most powerful blow he was incapable of on his own. The technique he had not fully mastered was called the ripple. Before, He never thought to even imagine using this technique against a human. I didn't realize there would be a professional hunter who would be so crazy. Chae Ren suggested that Yang Do-gyun surrender because no matter what he does, he can't win. Considering himself a great hunter, he couldn't imagine surrendering to some youngster. And no matter how it ended, he thought he'd wipe the guy off the face of the earth anyway. On the 5th floor of the mall, S.E. Ram found the right box. She put her hand in for identification. The box voiced her identification number 27037 Chin S.E. Ram. Login complied. Satisfied with her lucky find, she decided to head back. But she remembered Chae Ren's words to run away when she finds something she needs. After a little thought, I decided it wouldn't make a difference if she went back there. After picking up everything she needed, she could safely return to school, convincing himself that he probably wouldn't have fought without an escape plan. On each decision made by our heroes depended their future life. Yang Do-gyun was confident in himself and his abilities. He was a school bully. The strongest opponents fell before his unrivaled power. He considered himself an extraordinary genius convinced of his own superiority. Since he was a child, everything had been too easy and simple for him. He knew it. Aptitude in studies reached the maximum values, highest grades for any work. The adults praised him and supported him in every way possible in all his endeavors. His peers listened to his opinions and bowed down to him. But there was one thing he couldn't do. He couldn't pass the Hero High School entrance test. They said that the only way to get in was through connections, that they only looked at money, not ability. And of course, he believed those rumors to be true. After all, if this was a contest of skill and ability, he would never lose and would surely achieve the best results. In his mind was a picture of him taking a test of overcoming adversity, breaking all records and taking first place. Unlike mere worthless students, he wasn't afraid to compete with him. His megalomania had completely taken over his will, and he saw himself as the chosen genius. He did graduate from high school with very impressive results. It seemed that nothing could stop him now. He was the most talked-about senior in the class. It was whispered that he was going to be a ranker. Soon there was a congratulatory ceremony, awarding and graduation of students. The professor personally congratulated Yang Do-gyun on his brilliant graduation. He said that he would definitely become a first-class hunter. As an admonition, he bequeathed to never turn up his nose and move only forward. Black thoughts swarmed in his head, thinking the professor was a loser who was retired from teaching kids, dreaming of looking down on him from where ordinary people can't reach. But fate was not as favorable to him as he wished it to be. Reality turned out to be not so colorful, and the role of the hunter is so great that being in a real battle with a monster. He felt not omnipotent like in school, but just a teenager looking at a real hunter coming to the rescue. A hunter who single-handedly defeated the monster that killed his entire team. It wasn't as simple as he thought it would be. Deep down, there was an acceptance. He began to recognize in himself those who had once looked at him with the same eyes. Once on the other side, the real meaning of the professor's words came to him for the first time. The old man's words were not advice or counsel, but only consolation. No matter how much he wanted to, he wasn't the chosen one, despite his best efforts. Do-gun's plans collapsed in an instant. Dreams of universal greatness shattered on the rock of reality. He was only human, maybe just a little better. The outfit that Do-gun wore was a jacket made from a living monster bloodsucker. He let it consume his blood that flowed straight to his heart. That was the price to pay for the opportunity to win the battle and ruin Chae Ren. The guy didn't want that outcome, but the hunter's words sounded pretty dangerous. He noticed that weakness Do-gun. His speed wasn't all that great. It wasn't an easy fight that weakened the hunter a bit. His opponent exceeded his expectations. Chae Ren skillfully evaded the hunter's blows and masterfully blocked the attacks. The hunter wondered why the boy had become a smuggler and praised him for such a superior ability as extraordinary reaction speed. Chae Ren was surprised at the praise. He answered that it was none of his business and decided to drink a vial of stamina, as his strength was running low. Do-gun was glad that he had a very worthy opponent in front of him and could crush an equal. Feeling a surge of energy and replenished physical strength, he began to advance even more determinedly. This made the hunter even more excited. He was amused and asked for more. He had to be completely exhausted because he wouldn't be able to keep throwing punches. Chae Ren thought that if the monster protecting the hunter feeds on blood, it will definitely reach its limit someday. We have to make him waste blood and then use the needle technique. Suddenly, a blow of great force flew into the hunter from the side. Se-ram decided to go back and help Chae Ren after all. She didn't give in to the urge of fear. The guy was quite surprised and glad that she didn't take his advice and leave him. Her shot did quite tangible and impressive damage to the hunter. From the last of their strength, the rivals merged in the glow of their magic in a decisive attack. Yang Do-gyun was finally defeated. Neither equipment nor experience could help him fulfill his promises. Se-ram was worried that he would come back to life. Chae Ren thought that people like him usually live a long time. After taking a photo on his phone, he said he would no longer be a nuisance to them. Otherwise, he will have to say goodbye to his career and reputation. He looked at the girl and said that you had paid your debt to me. The girl asked in confusion what debt. He replied in surprise that he had saved her life more than once, recalling previous events. The first time he met her in the woods, running from a monster. And then when she chased him into the woods trying to thank him. The girl was furious, but at the same time felt a kind of awkwardness. As he left, he said he forgave her both times, and a thank you would suffice. Now they had a broker's assignment to fulfill, and they were close. The closer they were, the more they smelled the sweetish flavor of jelly. As they got closer, they saw a man sitting on the floor firmly holding a suitcase of jelly beans. The girl shrieked at what she saw. But Chae-rin said sadly that there was nothing to be surprised about. He had warned her that there was nothing good to see here. The goods needed to be checked, and they decided to open the suitcase. Blinding light and acrid odor enveloped the room. They had never seen such a thing with their own eyes. The jelly was in a lamp-like object. It gave off a light, sweet scent that made me forget all thoughts. Intoxicated by the aroma of Chae-rin realized that it was impossible not to come to this smell. In the suitcase, apart from the jelly, there were some bags with unknown contents. They wondered if there was jelly in there too. After examining the goods, Chae-rin said they'd better get out of there as soon as possible. There's no telling who might show up again. Going downstairs to the first floor of the mall, they were horrified to find that Do-gyun had disappeared. Suddenly, they noticed some movement behind them. There was a man standing in the distance. It was Do-gyun. He was furious and running away threatened them that he had memorized them and would take their lives at the first opportunity, that they'd regret what they'd done here and what they'd done to him. But alas, while running away, he ran into an old acquaintance of the boys whom they met entering the forest. Seeing this picture, they breathed a sigh of relief and decided to go out the emergency exit. Once out of the mall and into the safe zone, Cha-ren was able to relax. He asked Ram if she had enough time for the exam. "There is still plenty of time," the girl replied. All tasks were fully completed, and it was time for them to say goodbye. Cha-ren admitted that it was a pleasure to meet him, and he was glad they were able to finish their business safely. Having endured and experienced a lot, they said goodbye and shook hands. Leaving, Cha-ren shouted for her to remember privacy and bank transfer if she didn't want to meet him again. Ram shouted after him to see if he wanted to meet her again. Having completed the task, he returned to the broker to drop off the goods for the customer. The broker saw the exhausted state of the guy and realized that he had a very difficult time. The broker looked at the goods and reasoned that if they were sold on the black market, there would be a fuss, and it's worth an incredible amount of money. He praised the guy and said he would transfer the money tomorrow, but Chae-rin was hovering somewhere and was very pensive. The broker, seeing the guy's denial, even got worried and asked if he was all right. There was nothing wrong with him, but something was going through his head. The broker wondered if the hunter was worried about the hunter who had died in the fight with him. Cha-ren replied that he didn't die because of the fight with him and he doesn't have to feel guilty. The broker sensed something was wrong. Maybe something else happened. "There was nothing else," he said in reply, and asked if he could take what was in the bags. The broker said yes. Smugglers could take anything that wasn't part of the order. That was the rule. The broker was curious what kind of kid would eat that jelly. After all, it could bring even a dying man back to life, but it had a more appealing property. They say it can expand the abilities of whoever eats it, though not many people know this. Jelly is more effective when eaten as a child, so such a thing will not be fed to someone who has no hope. It must be at least a student of the Jier school. Chae-rin said goodbye, and the broker said hello to his father. The guy answered well if he could, because lately his condition had worsened. As he walked out of transition, he suddenly remembered what Ram had told him about Hero High School. She jokingly suggested he go to school with them. She said exams are held in the winter to transfer to their school. Every year they recruit a minimum of 1 to 2. She thought he would definitely do well. She held out her hand to meet him and once again repeated the invitation to attend their hero school. The symbolism of Heroes High School, where the best of the best were trained. No hunter can mop up a huge dungeon alone. Whatever superior qualities and talents he may possess, it is almost impossible to cope with the endless waves of attacking monsters alone. That's why it takes a team. While one reflects the other, each hunter applies a different skill. In this way, team members make up for each other's shortcomings and overcome obstacles. With proper team preparation and teamwork, the monster is killed. Teamwork and having each other's backs is what dungeon sweeping is all about. Heroes School creates factions every year. Cha-ren clarified, "It's when you pick one side and fight the other." Ram replied that she wouldn't talk about such childish jokes. There are 2 factions in her course. They are led by 2 students who are in the top 3 on the course. Chae-ren got the point and said that teams are recruited from these factions, so she couldn't get into any of them. The girl bashfully confirmed that he was right and the teachers weren't doing anything about it. Finding a team most likely depends on the ability of the participant, clarified Cha-ren. Se-ram thought he was trying to tell her that she lacked ability. She knew she couldn't be an excellent student. In her opinion, she wasn't bad enough at school not to make one of the teams. There are those who are not in factions, but they have formed their own team. She had already specified that there were two factions. The leader of one of them didn't like her. Although outwardly she doesn't show it, just weaves her scheming behind her back to keep Se-ram from being accepted anywhere. Cha-ren wondered if she stole a guy from this leader. Not at all, replied the girl. So now she kept to herself, but she wouldn't be able to do that in the second and third year. That's why she wanted to hire him. With his abilities, if he's around, she can handle anything. You could tell by the guy that he was confused. Without giving any answer, Cha-ren said he understood and said goodbye to the girl, leaving her completely confused, not realizing if he would accept her offer. When he got home, he did give her suggestions some thought, saying she was very funny. They bid farewell in the barrier of the Kanam 12th branch dungeon. As the girl was heading towards the school to confirm passing the exam, she met her teacher. Kang Jong-guk was the classroom teacher of a one-to-one class at Heroes High School. He was a close combat instructor. The surprised girl asked what was the matter because the time for the exam had not yet passed. The teacher replied that there was a problem. There were monsters in some areas that weren't supposed to be there. It's a good thing no one was hurt. But it has been reported that some places can no longer hold exams. The spot where Se-ram found the second coin was in just such an area. The teacher asked the girl if there were any problems during the exam. She replied that she had not had any problems and had not seen anything out of the ordinary. Suddenly, a monster similar to the one she had met suddenly appeared from behind. Only this one looked a lot stronger than that one. A Titan monkey is a mature individual with a danger level of 3 to 4 stars. Jung-guk was extremely surprised. Such monsters shouldn't be here. Se-ram wondered if he had come upon that strong odor of wasp jelly. The girl followed the teacher at what he told her to be behind his back. All of the teachers at the school have worked as hunters in the past, and most of them graduated from this school. Being retired due to injuries, they could no longer defend the dungeons. Although it was just an opinion from the side of those not knowing the truth, a fighter against tyranny. When he was in his early 30s and a ranker, he got that nickname. In normal life, he had to restrain himself. The teacher said that Se-ram was very lucky because something terrible might have happened to her. Of course, he had no idea what was really happening to her. He was worried about the girl and said how lucky she was to be alive. Jung-guk said they should go back. He wasn't the type to pay attention to other people's opinions because he was a hero himself. He trained future heroes. At one of these camps, Hero High School Basic Skills Training Camp, the students speculated about what would happen to those who sent in a request for help. Apparently, they'll be retaking it. In their opinion, all those who went that way were weaklings. They saw Se-ram and her teacher coming back from the forest and thought she was one of the weaklings. The teacher said to go and wait for the others to come back, check that everything was in place and change into the school uniform. As soon as the teacher left, the girl was able to exhale. She was worried that someone might have seen her with Chae-ryong. The leader of one of the factions was waiting for her at the camp. She said that, as expected, Se-ram was fine. The exasperated girl's quick grasp of the situation. The leader of this group was named Anisha. She hypocritically said that she was worried and how happy she was that everything was all right. Of course, Se-ram didn't believe she was worried and only got more angry. Anisha acted like an angel and said she was hurt to hear such words. Se-ram thought about it and was reminded of a few moments from the past when they were still children. 6 years ago, she struggled to master her magic. She was trained by Zik Eskrim's uncle Se-ram. He was an elf by birth. At the age of 11, she practiced her stamina hard. She learned to hold a red-hot cannonball in her hands. Uncle saw her trying, but realized it wasn't enough and tried not to push too hard. While Anisha Eskrim, at the same age, was 5 times better at these abilities, although she was half-elf in origin like Se-ram. Her father, watching her practice, realized that she didn't look like a half-elf at all, and it wasn't just an appearance. Her ability to control magic was higher than most pureblood elves. He held his daughter up as an example to her cousin Se-ram. He said she was a genius, and if the girl followed the hunter's path, they would be constantly compared. Claimed even good if she does, but she needs to be careful if she backs off, then Anisha might crush her. Anisha pretended she didn't understand why Se-ram wasn't on the team. After all, she had enough qualities. I got the answer that I could have joined the team with her myself. Anisha continued the pretense, saying that she would certainly like to since they were both distance fighters, but it would be too much if it were one level. And why put 2 people in the same position? She thought Se-ram would be better off that way, and that other members of her team would be hurt by it. Anisha told Se-ram not to worry because they might have a retake soon. She was told that she had nothing to worry about because she had already passed. The snarky cousin, through gritted teeth, praised Se-ram and told her not to overdo it because she would still get her father's company. Such an attitude did not suit Anisha. She was worried that she was struggling hard. Meanwhile, after taking a break, Che Ren went back to visit his father in the hospital. He entered the room and saw that there were medical personnel standing by his father's bed, but his father was not there. They asked if he was a relative. As it turns out, my father had a sudden seizure. He had a very rare case. You might even say it was the only one in the world. Doctors explained the reason for the uniqueness of the case of Cha Reina's father by the fact that no one has ever survived dragon poisoning before. He realized one thing: with modern medical technology, there is no complete cure. There is only the possibility of suppressing the disease with painkillers. The doctor agreed, but the problem is that these painkillers contain milk. That's what the super dangerous creatures feed their pets. It's the only cure for poison. The monster that had the right ingredient was a heavenly tiger with a danger level of 5 stars. Cha Ren took umbrage that it was very rare raw and everything would be about money. The doctor parried and said that this was not the only problem. There are rumors of a new potion among hunters. Even a small dose of it can increase muscle strength and resistance power for a long time. You used to be able to get it for money because it wasn't used much anywhere and there was no demand as such. However, now the situation has changed. Entrepreneurs and hunters are buying it up in huge quantities. Strongly angered by the doctor's words, Che Ren was outraged that it was impossible to get a small dose to save one person. The doctor justified that the problem was that their one dose, which is required for the father, can be made a few dozen shots of the potion, if there were a large number of people in need of this potion. That the government made some rules, but for one single patient in the world, all those people won't give up their profits. All the doctor could offer was that they'd do their best, but not without a lot of connections. He was at a complete loss and feeling of helplessness, and had no idea what to do now. Accepting that he had no other choice, he remembered S.E. Ram's offer. He picked up the phone and dialed her number. The girl, of course, was very much looking forward to this call, but still did not expect him to agree to her proposal. When she answered, Che Ren apologized for the late call and asked if she was in the way. The guy said he might be willing to take her up on her offer, but there's one thing. The girl inquired about possible conditions for the agreement. Cautiously, he asked if she would be able to provide him with a vital ingredient. She understood the ingredient in question and said that her father's company made such a potion and she would solve the issue. When he heard the positive answer, he breathed a sigh of relief. Now he had hope. Gladly, S.E. Ram invited him to meet on Sunday. I wanted to get down to business quickly and start preparing for the exams. Once the world began to change and people developed abilities beyond the canons of nature, they needed to be studied and measured. They saw each other outside the Chinsen Group Special Defense Research Institute. S.E. Ram inquired about his well-being. The scope of the institute surprised me by asking what exactly they do here, and I found out that this is where hunters measure their abilities. Before the merger, normal humans had D-ranked abilities, except for magic. When the indicators increased by 1 step and reached the rank of C, people were already called geniuses. And indicators above the rank already allowed us to talk about a person's superpowers. In addition to magic power, a minimum of 5 stats had to be level C. Then they were allowed to become hunters. If 3 of the indicators reached rank B1, could apply to the hero school. Che Ren suggested that he would have to undergo some sort of physical. The S.E. Ram responded that these are only done in childhood and for adolescents the measurements are a little more complicated. Che Ren was intrigued and anticipated exactly what was going to be done to him. After putting on the suit, he realized the point and resented why he hadn't guessed it earlier when S.E. Ram asked him how he was feeling. For the test, he had to fight the training Golem Geo Kron Pro version 9.22. Cha Ri tuned himself that if he was here, he should fight properly. He was curious about his own stats. In the chest of the training, Golem was a chamber for observing the test and counting the reading. S.E. Ram was also quite curious to see how good he was. The girl who helped take the measurements was surprised at how confident he was, because almost everyone is afraid of golems when they first meet them. S.E. Ram, when asked to help with the measurements, said he wanted to transfer to Hero High and thought he was well prepared. The test was conducted by Young Yo Min, Golem Summoner. She was a former hunter and worked at the Chinsen Group Research Center. Without much thought, they began the test. The golem began to use the first attacks. Measurements of aptitude scores are usually taken at 6 to 7 years of age. Special devices were worn for such measurements, which stimulated the body, pushing it to the limit in various areas. The more unique abilities and the more trained a person is, the more difficult it is to measure. After all, it is difficult to stimulate them to their limits. Such indicators were also shown by Cha Ren. S.E. Ram realized that it would be difficult to measure them. Although his physical strength from the recent incidents must have been at its limit, the girl thought. Even the experienced staff member was astonished. She could not believe that he could fail the exam and not get into a specialized school. The result spoke for itself. He dealt with the golem in no time. She had originally lowered the difficulty level because she was worried about the guy, but even with that fact, she could see that he looked like he'd had special training. At first, he dodged a few times, managing to make Golem's tactics count, and then waited for the right moment to strike a very precise blow. He was amazing, better than any professional in terms of feeling. C-Rom was burning with curiosity, wanting to know the results of the measurements as soon as possible. June. Min found it difficult to give an answer. She did not know how to take measurements from him. After completely defeating the golem, he had yet to reach his limit. The difficulty level might have to be raised. She had no other suggestion. C-Rom felt that there was no result from this action unlikely to make a difference. However, Ye Ming believed that one could get normal results if one removed the safe mode and ran the golem at full power. The SE-ROM knew that it was illegal for the average person who was not a professional hunter to remove the safe mode. Nothing occurred to the girls except the use of the forbidden technique. Ye Ming, meeting such a case for the first time, couldn't think of anything. Quite suddenly, their reasoning was interrupted and they became very frightened. C-Rom's uncle decided to visit the laboratory. He was indignant and asked why Eamon was using the premises without authorization. He had every right to reprimand his subordinate because he was the director of the Research and Development Department of the Chinsen Group. Being disappointed in the employee, he reminded of the punishment they would suffer for their actions. Ignoring his niece's explanation, he waited for a response and an explanation. C-Rom tried her best to defend her and explained that it wasn't Ye Ming's fault that she was the one who asked her to help. Pulling my niece aside, I told her not to forget, reminding her that this was her father's company, not hers. She's not responsible for anything here. He sternly reprimanded her, which confirmed the rumors that had been circulating among his subordinates that he had treated SE-Rom very coldly since childhood. Even though she had done nothing wrong and hadn't done anything wrong in front of him, Eamon sympathized with her. She thought that she had not done anything wrong, as there was no one around on weekends anyway, and other hunters also used the premises. As he continued to reprimand the girls, he heard someone's voice coming from the testing room. Che Rin, who was waiting for the next step, decided to find out what he should do next. He asked if anything was wrong. On the monitor's screen, he suddenly saw a guy thinking it was just a classmate of SE-Rom. The confused girl tried to explain, but she couldn't find the right words. Ye Ming dared to explain that that guy really wants to become a hunter, but last year, he failed his exams and lost his measurement readings. These measurements are quite expensive. How could you lose them? He agreed to help. Extremely amazed at this decision, the girls froze with surprise. He knew that measurements could not be made while Golem was in safe mode. Incredibly, his solution was to go down in person and fight Cha Ren. Events of this kind are rare, but when it becomes difficult to measure the limits, there are competitions between hunters. Naturally, in such a case, the opponent must have skills exceeding the abilities of the one who measures the stats by several levels. Zig Eskerm entered the room. Rolling up his sleeves, he said that he understood the unexpectedness of the situation, but did not want to introduce himself due to lack of time. For Che Rin, his arrival came as a complete surprise. He had no idea that he would have to fight a live opponent. He didn't know who his opponent was, but he clearly sensed the danger. Zig Eskerm saw the guys got a rough idea of what's going on. He said he'd try to replace Golem. Cha Ren thought to himself that he was much stronger than that hunter, and this was the first time he had seen such a thing in his life. The deepest feeling told the boy that he was unlikely to survive this fight. Zig Eskerm asked to attack and not to worry about his safety. Trying to tune in, Che Rin paused for a moment, thinking through the options. Their fight was quite spectacular and promising. The department director was unfazed. Zig Eskerm would not only be a director but also a white hunter, ranked 7th in the South Korean ranking. A hunter entering the 100 becomes a ranker and is assigned a color. It depends on the place. Downgrading or upgrading occurs when the ranking is updated. Cha Ren was trying to see the right moment to strike. His strategy was quite simple, a punch with all his strength from which the only thing left to do was to dodge. And when the opponent ducked, he used the momentum of the hiccup, but not with this opponent. Zig Eskerm held an unflappable confidence. He fought off Che Rin's attacks with his bare hands, not taking him as a serious opponent. Such an unrivaled opponent in terms of strength the guy had never met before. Zig Eskerm, catching and firmly gripping his opponent's weapon, said he was extremely inattentive. Grabbing his weapon and tossing it aside with a powerful kick, Che Rin repeated over and over in his moves, so the director couldn't understand he wants to constantly get because it's not a real fight. Thinking that the guy looks pathetic, thinking this kind of trick will work. What's more, he only lost his weapon, not his consciousness. The enemy was expecting a more serious attack. Che Rin, in the director's opinion, made the same stupid mistake for the second time and made no effort to change tactics. Warned him that if he did anything stupid like that again, he'd send him home, and he'd better give up his dream of being a hunter. Cha Ren said that he feels some kind of animosity from the enemy, but He doesn't know what it's related to. Having decided that this is not really important, I went on the attack again. Frustrated Zig Skirm thought again the same technique. The approach was too fast, and this time, the director made a mistake. Che Ren did not repeat himself and chose a different technique. Zig Skirm kept his distance, which was standard procedure. But such a distance is not enough, counted the guy and warned that there was only a warm-up before. Clutching his weapon tightly, he concentrated all the magic and released it into his opponent. Zig Skirm had a pretty good reception. He even had to move around a lot. The girls watched what was happening from the monitor screen and noticed that the sensors seemed to go crazy. It was impossible to read what they were showing. Yiming was thrilled to watch the two pros battle, and Che Rin was crazy about it, not understanding how he couldn't get in anywhere. However, Yiming was an expert and noted that she found not only pros but also cons. C-Rom couldn't believe her ears. What disadvantages could he have with such indicators? As it turned out, the disadvantage in the opinion of the former huntress was quite crushing. On that part, S.E.Rom was far superior to him. She couldn't believe it, that a man fighting on equal footing with her uncle could be inferior to her. What faults there were to be found, he was quite adept at mastering the situation. Finally, Che Ren was able to retake the lead and inflict damage on the enemy. Zig Skirm again praised the guy for being able to hold his weapon this time, and apparently he needed to do just that so he couldn't deflect the attack. Yiming wondered about the guy's safety and worried whether the boss was controlling his power. The boss looked dejectedly at Cha Reina and said that he would not comment on his defeat since it had been predetermined from the beginning. He thought the whole process leading up to the guy's defeat was pathetic. Zig Skirm couldn't understand why he didn't have the basics. Yiming wondered the same thing. The sense of combat and skills were excellent, but the steps of the way of attack and defense. Everything gave away the lack of basic training. After all she had seen, she was disappointed that with his abilities he would have been much stronger if he had been trained in the basics. C-Rom remembered his words when she asked him where he had learned his techniques so well. He replied that no one had taught him anything. As Zig Skirm left, he told Che Ren that he had seen a lot of pathetic guys who had unique abilities but made no effort to develop them. C-Rom was very disappointed and frustrated because this was not what she was looking for at all. Now it's time to pay for the measurement, said the director, but it's better if he admits his hopelessness. If a lazy man relies only on his own abilities. Che Rin didn't want to back down and said he didn't know why he was being so mean. In his opinion, the guy is lazy and he doesn't like lazy people. Zig Skirm turned around, seeing that the guy would not calm down, and replied that he had struck the last blow to end the battle. Che Ren did not calm down and shouted that he does not care about the payment and that he wants to fight again, and then he will show the result of his efforts. While the opponents were competing in profanity, the girls were getting a tally of the measurements. Yiming shouted that striving to go all the way is fine, but there was no point in fighting anymore since they got the results. C-Rom also cried out that the measurements were over and he did great. Zig Skirm says he doesn't understand what he's trying to accomplish. Everything is useless and he must realize that the result will not change no matter how much they fight. The director thought that maybe Che Ren wanted to be recognized to be told about how amazing his willpower was and that it was enough, replying that he was just really pissed that it was ending and he hadn't really thrown a punch. He had a reason. No one taught him. He did everything on his own from scratch. However, due to his outstanding abilities and hard work, he was able to completely fill in any gaps in his education himself. If you add to that his vast experience of risking his life many times, allowing his skills to develop to great heights, achievements akin to miracles. But even so, he never considered himself an exceptional genius. I just looked with pity at the real hunters I met along the way. For example, such scoundrels as John Do-gyun and Pil Gyu, who could not be called hunters. Zig Skirm still agreed to repeat the battle to trample Che Reina before he could even get angry, but it was a different man. It was a monster capable of surpassing him, and he had no need to hold back. It was the first time Che Ren had met a real hunter other than his father. He didn't immediately notice the youthful blood in him. Yiming didn't understand what was going on and why the supervisor was acting like that. C-Rom watched carefully and realized that this was not the pose she had seen so far. The hunter thought that Che Rin had chosen the wrong pose again. It was a way of grabbing and pulling the body, but it was not suitable for swinging the pole. Che Ren felt like a completely different person. He began to attack with the first unexpected technique for the opponent. Zig Skirm no longer seemed so confident and there was anxiety in his gaze. Strike after strike, attack after attack, he demonstrated his strength again and again. It seemed that the skillful hunter was unable to resist these attacks, and he deftly evaded them. C-Rom was very worried about the guy and compared what she had observed before and now. He moved very simply and clumsily. Yiming couldn't stop wondering again. She saw the skill. There was not a moment's hesitation in his continuous movements. He was properly trained. His only role model is his own father. He was his idol. Chae-rin followed his every move, trying to copy it exactly. During the fight, he thought back to those lessons. With what persistence and desire he strived to become a hero like his father. One day, his father noticed him watching him and tried to perform something similar. His father's face stood before his eyes. He was as if he were one with him. The same temper and tenacity was in his eyes. Power and indomitable temper. Chae-rin was thinking that there would be a hitch when the hunter landed. Although dodging his attacks is not possible at the moment, Chae-rin decided to do as the hunter planned, to meet him face to face. The girls watched with bated breath as the two incredibly strong and experienced warriors battled. In the end, the fight was again not decided in favor of Cha-Reina. Zig Eskerm recognized that he should have kept going and could have won. If he hadn't started using those inept pole techniques again, the warden wondered why he did it. Maybe he wanted to boost his self-esteem. In response, Charin said with a smile that he had just reached the very limit. In the end, he did get the worst of it. He thought it was a good thing, though. Zig Eskerm had a bad reputation amongst the rankers because of his difficult character. S.E. Ram was worried about Chae-rin and came running to them. But no one dared to cross him because of his superior skills. He told her to stop and be quiet. As it turned out, he had the gift of healing. He used his magic to heal the guy. There wasn't even a scratch on him. Her uncle reassured her and told her not to worry. His uncle said he'd be fine. 100 healed him and there would be no consequences. As he was leaving, he asked S.E. Ram what she called him, like Yu Chae-ren. The girl replied that yes, that was his name. Zig Eskerm was the holder of the white wound, of which there are only 10 in the whole country, and also the best healer in Korea. The name Chae-rin appeared to be familiar to him. He never thought he'd find his son here. Zig Eskerm went outside where his driver was already waiting for him and was nervous about why it was taking so long and why you can't text if you're running late. He could leave the car and go get something to eat. They were late for the briefing, and every time they're late, he's the one they blame for what happened. In response, throwing off his tattered jacket, he said he had business to attend to, and it was taking longer than he thought. The driver saw the jacket in such a state and realized that he was fighting with someone, and most likely the enemy was not alone. And also the driver noticed an abrasion with surprise, asking what it is on his face. Zig Eskerm confirmed that yes, it is a scratch and there is nothing surprising in it. He just couldn't believe he was seeing this. And if a kid who was studying to be a freshman could do this to him, he must be about 16 years old. He's 17 and wants to transfer to Hero High this spring. The driver pondered and remembered that it was possible to transfer there, but he couldn't recall a single case in 3 years when someone had been able to pass the exam. The driver was convinced that this kid could definitely get in because he didn't have a passport yet and he had already managed to scratch the face of Gozik Eskerma himself. He believed that young people in the current times are just scary and one should always be on guard. The driver made him laugh and he said that even though this guy wasn't his level, but compared to the driver, there was almost no difference. Unsatisfied with the words of the boss, replied that naturally his level was higher. Kang Gong-ho was the 19th ranked hunter in South Korea. He was the leader of the Knicks, Korea's first mop-up squad, both in age and ability. At the age of 21, graduated from Heroes High School 1 year and 7 months ago. After continuing to chat, they discussed the new car worth 3.5 billion won and hit the road. Meanwhile, at the group's Chinsen Institute, Cha-Ren regained consciousness after a hard fight. Looking at his hands, he didn't realize what was happening. The wounds were completely gone and he felt no pain at all. An overjoyed S.E. Ram brought them coffee and asked what he hoped for by offering to continue the fight. Was it to win? He didn't really answer. I just got angry and flared up because he started to bully him. She didn't believe it and said there's no way his uncle started bullying him. Cha-Ren seemed to start to realize what was going on when he found out who he was. He thought they had a good relationship judging by how much he cared for her. She was confused and didn't immediately understand what he was talking about and asked what exactly he meant. It looked like some guy showed up and tried to trick his niece. You can understand his concern. The girl tried to explain that he wasn't like that at all, just very strict. Yiming also stopped by to see how he was feeling and if he was in pain. She laughed and explained that even if it hurt, it was probably healed because her boss was the world's best healer. Chae-rin was very surprised. He was extremely strong in battle, and it wasn't even his specialty. Anyway, said Eamon, is good that he's fine, and his vitals came out clear too. She showed him the data, and in her opinion, it was just fine. He was taking measurements for the first time in his life and didn't understand what the numbers and letters meant, asking if it was really considered good. Laughing, she said to moderate, thinking that he's definitely an applicant since he doesn't understand anything. The prerequisite for becoming a hunter is a score of B or higher. But there must be harmony in the readings to maintain balance. Even if dexterity is at a high level, but it doesn't match health, it will all be useless. Also, if only muscles are developed alone, they won't be able to pull the other abilities. Also added SE-ROM. Amongst normal people, there are some. One of the indicators can reach the C level. However, everything changes when there are 2 or more indicators. There are 1 in 10,000 people who have 3 C rank indicators at the same time. They are capable of fighting alone. Those with 3 B rank indicators are only 1 in 500,000. They can become top-class hunters. C-ROM pondered his performance. Not matter what the balance is, it's just a crazy level. Muscular strength is B ranked and the other 2 are A ranked. There's a sweep among the freshman faculty and he's on the same level as that monster. She wondered what he was expecting. Yiming said that incidentally her boss, who he fought with, did not have a single A rank indicator out of 3. Indicators are innate abilities. They do not reflect skills at a particular moment. If a person has a score of 4 but doesn't train and grow, it won't make any difference C or D. And other factors are also important. For example, whether the technique he's learning is appropriate. Moreover, sensations and experiences cannot be measured with indicators. And also added Emin. There are many hunters who make up for their gaps in performance by their own efforts. C-ROM blushed and was embarrassed to believe Ye Ming was referring to her. Che Ren thanked the girls for saying such nice things, but couldn't say he was very disappointed since he didn't understand anything, adding that he had one good acquaintance and compared to him he thought he was missing a lot. Ye Ming couldn't believe her ears and said that such a person is not common. It means that such a person is very famous. Che Rin was referring to his father, of course, his idol and example in everything. SERM summarized. Measurements are complete and he did well, suggested we meet next weekend. Yiming suggested that she and Cha Rin visit the production department. She didn't know what to say. She didn't have any close friends there and she thought her uncle wouldn't allow it. Yiming clarified that she was probably just very nervous and didn't remember what her uncle had authorized when he left. How could she have missed that moment? SE-ROM was just shocked. He said to take him to the production office when he wakes up. Tell the manager that the guy's his guest. On his behalf, he told me to ask him to pick up a weapon, and no matter the cost. Having highly effective weapons and armor was every hunter's dream. It is necessary even if the hunters have outstanding abilities, because a low-quality armament will not provide any support to its owner. So, as a hunter's skills improve, you need a good weapon to apply those skills. He understood all this himself, but he didn't know if he really needed it. C-ROM indignantly replied that of course he needed it, because it was for school. He figured that's where he'd get it. Why pick up anything now? C-ROM felt guilty for not explaining anything, asked if he really wanted to transfer to her school. She explained that he would be correct in his reasoning if it were a regular hunter school. Every school must provide equipment that meets the standards, so that there is no discrimination among students. Che Ren didn't understand why it wasn't right at Hero's school. Why the school with the biggest budget needed this? Eamon explained that it's not about money. Their school itself is different from the rest. She herself was a graduate of Hero's high school. There's a significant difference in skill and ability, and preparing good equipment is part of the ability. That's why at the Hero School, students prepare all weapons and equipment on their own. She explained the basics to Che Rin. Che Rin realized one thing. Regardless of skills, who were born into a rich family are in the most favorable position, and it turns out not about him. Yiming did not deny this fact, but said, even without money, there is a way to buy good weapons. The School of Heroes enrolls those who are likely to become better hunters or ranchers in the future, and accordingly, there will be those who want to invest in these abilities. If a student manages to get into the school, he will receive various offers from businesses and rich people. And once finished, such hunters pay a portion of their fees or sign a contract and become a publicity face. In general, they sponsor them on different terms for everyone. It's individualized. Yiming decided to brag about her achievements as well. She received a scholarship from the Chinsen Group and is guaranteed a research position even after retirement. Che Rin had heard enough and asked me to end it. He realized that going to Hero School was a lucrative opportunity. Immediately, there are many opportunities to assess one's abilities. But it takes a lot of sweat to get into such an institution to begin with. The degree of difficulty of the transfer test is much higher than the regular entrance exam, including preparation of equipment. Eamon recalled that the supervisor said he would help him with this training. He's already made all the arrangements. All we have to do is go down to the underground workshop. Yiming said she would be rooting for him and that she hoped he would get in. She said goodbye and left. They went to the elevator to go down to the workshop, and then Cha Ren said that something terrible had almost happened. SE-ROM turned around, not knowing what he was talking about. He meant that she said she didn't know about her uncle's help. As far as he was concerned, anyone who wanted to transfer to this school would come super prepared. She said this naturally, so she wanted to help and pay for the guns for him herself. Not understanding his reaction, I said, the most important thing is that it turned out very well. It doesn't matter how much money will be spent. The most important thing is who to trust with the production. The production department of Chinsen Group has been quite high quality recognized all over the world. The elevator arrived at the forge floor. Cha Ren thought that for that kind of money everywhere would be acceptable and basically the same. They entered an underground forge, a dungeon that before the cleanup was called the Boiling Abyss. Seeing how impressed Cha Ren was, she asked how he felt about this forge. Money alone will not be enough to utilize this space. As they entered, someone was watching them very closely. He had a single but very menacing eye. Cha Ren turned around and saw something big black with one burning eye. He lost his balance in surprise. The creature thought he was being disturbed by Zig Eskerm and was very angry that he woke him up on the weekend and didn't come downstairs. It didn't take long for Che Rin to react. He thought there was a monster and prepared to fight. But S.E. Ram blocked his way, seeing how determined he was, and told him it was the head of the production department. The department head turned out to be a monster. He smirked and said he was both to humans. Arjas the Thunderbolt, the senior titan, he received citizenship of the Republic of Korea in a simplified procedure. He asked who exactly the Zig had told him about. He pointed to Cha Reina and asked if that was the little one in question, or his niece, adding that they hadn't seen each other in a while. She replied that they were supposed to send the measurements from upstairs. With a tired look, he said he didn't know anything about these human toys or the video data. It's all being handled by his employees, and they had the day off today. The frustrated girl sighed what to do and how to be now. Arjas calmed the girl down and said it didn't matter. Since Zig told him to do it in person, he could check it out himself. Seeing the weapon in the sheath that hung on Cha Reina's shoulder, he asked if it was the main weapon. On receiving an affirmative answer, he said fine, and that he would try to catch it. They were at a complete loss as to what exactly he meant. He didn't know how it was considered by humans, but in his tribe it was a common procedure. And for the sake of a warrior, he won't check personally. He won't work hard and make weapons. He remembered his first impression when he first saw him. He thought that Cha Rin was a little different from the usual underage boys. Arjas saw that look that was familiar from hunting. It felt like it was already trained. He asked Si Che Reina to demonstrate his skills to him. Che Ren replied that it was time for Arjas to learn that he doesn't turn down such offers. The girl watched the scene with bated breath, hoping for a better outcome. When Cha Ren pressed the monster's throat with his pole, Arjas was very surprised and asked where he got the weapon. Of course, the guy didn't expect this turn of events and thought about it. He did, after all, strike accurately, and it was a pure needle technique strike. Of course, there were many monsters that he couldn't take down with a single blow. But just then he felt like he literally felt a wall. He didn't realize what was wrong with his stamina, but it felt like the creature wasn't alive. Looking at the monster, he tried to figure out what kind of monster it was. Si Ram was also at a loss, but for a completely different reason. She knew that the danger level of monsters was indicated by stars. As an example, the flying mantis. It had a danger level of 1 star. If a monster had at least 1 star, R, it meant that it could kill a human. Even an ordinary middle-aged man with any weapon in his hands could deal with this. Next, the monster Clusteraptor had a danger level of 2 stars. It's something a trained military with firearms can handle. Titanium Monkey Mature Individual, danger level 3 stars. Here already required motorized infantry and the introduction of armored weapons. Democuras is a more serious monster with a danger level of 4 stars. In order to avoid numerous human casualties, it was necessary to evacuate the inhabitants as soon as possible while avoiding any confrontations with the monster. And after evacuation, aerial bombardment or long-range shelling was required. The maximum the military can do is eliminate a monster with a danger level of 4 stars. In the case of monsters with a level of 5 stars or higher, modern military forces are virtually powerless. Even if the battle is won, they'll have to expend a tremendous amount of firepower, and the destruction would be too great. So there are those who are able to defeat the monster with minimal loss of life. It's a squad of elite hunters. Arjas Thunderhammer of the tribe is a senior titan with a danger level of 7 stars. Once again, he turned to Cha Ren, recalling his question. Where did he get that weapon? Si Ram was terrified that something might not go as planned. Che Ren, deciding that one of the blows was painful after all, asked what he was picking on his weapon. Arjas was quite insistent, and with menace in his voice repeated for the lad to better answer his question. How surprised the guys were when they heard he made it. Having exhausted all his patience, he repeated his question in a rather threatening tone, specifying why it was in the guy's hands and not its owner's. The girl, realizing that if this weapon was made by Arjas himself, then its master is at least rank A+. She knew that the data was probably in the association's database and that whoever had the weapon was very strictly monitored. She assumed that such a weapon could not have fallen into the hands of a smuggler honestly. Si-Ram was worried about whether he had stolen it or taken it from some hunter. Cha-Ren replied that he doesn't want to say, or rather it's not about the monster. Unable to stand the tension, Si-Ram yelled at the guy to speak up and not act like a fool. Argus was extremely furious and replied that he should blame himself in such a case. At that moment, a thought ran through Cha-Rena's mind, the thought of death. It will be impossible to dodge, how to take the blow. The igloo move is not an option because he has no weaknesses. With the ripple move, he can't use his strength. Once he gets hit, he's done. He only had a third option left. The last technique Che-Rin learned from his father. The law of force is sobering. In a head-on collision, he who is bigger and stronger wins. But if he doesn't make a head-on collision, we need to calculate angle and position. And then, even if he doesn't win, he can at least dodge. This was the third Cha-Rena technique he used when necessary. Si-Ram was simply shocked at how he managed to dodge a level 7 monster. Kaka suddenly had an idea. He found the monster's weak spot where he could stab it with the needle. You just have to pick the right moment and pierce the eye with a needle. But apparently the monster was more agile and stronger. It grabbed him with its iron claw. Si-Ram didn't wait for the full reprisal and shouted that he recognizes that he looks suspicious, and that's why the monster is acting this way with him. She said that even so, he had no right to attack a man without finding out his circumstances. Reminded that those who have obtained citizenship in a special order do not have the right to harm people unless their lives are in danger. If he breaks this rule, he loses all his civil rights and goes back to being a monster. Argus replied that she shouldn't worry, and he remembers and understands everything perfectly. The monster immediately let the guy go without doing the slightest bit of damage. Argus wondered where the guy got his weapon from. The Zig had woken him up on his day off for that very reason. He apologized to Che-Ren and said he did have a right to those guns. As an apology, he said he'd give him a good reward. Argus decided to tell them a little about himself. It had been 30 years since the last time he'd been injured. They could not understand what he was talking about. He spoke in riddles. He asked Che-Ren if she knew why he worked for people. According to information she'd been told 30 years ago, a special hunting party had raided him. Argus wondered how people told each other this story. It wasn't like that because their swords hadn't even touched him. The boys listened very attentively and realized that he was defeated by man alone. He cut off the monster's arm and could have even killed it, but he didn't. Looking at Che-Reina said he meant his father, the greatest hunter. Being the eldest titan, Argus among the entire tribe of giants had reached the highest level. His life was close to eternity. The number of such individuals is extremely small. No more than 10 senior titans are known on Earth. Even in terms of physical performance, they have an unprecedented level. But their real strength is in their ability to make weapons and equipment. The innate ability of this tribe to create artifacts with special powers. Only elder titans and dwarves can boast such skills. But unlike dwarves who are friendly to humans and coexist with them, the elder titans do not see humans as beings worthy of companionship. 30 years ago, an operation was devised to capture Argus. Colossus B is an automatic puppet of Argus's presumed 4-star level. The team set up for the capture was not coping, and gunner Oh-Sun A from the 9th Special Forces team was trying to contact headquarters. Kim Yen-mo. The assistant in charge of the buffs tried to communicate through communication magic, but someone was deliberately creating interference. Pak Jong-man was a captain in the specialty tank, took all the power on himself. He held the monster back while his comrade took aim to strike. Their strength was extremely small in front of such creatures. They were very much hoping for backup, and suddenly, another special unit came to the rescue. It was a first-class organization that could be proud of its achievements in clearing dungeons of its time. However, they were unable to defeat the hell that was going on in the dungeons of Argus. This was the 7th one their team had encountered. They increasingly thought of running as far away as possible because even if this one was defeated, others would appear from somewhere else. The girl was horrified to imagine that other teams might have the same situation. The commander told her to leave immediately because they all wouldn't survive. Single-handedly went on the attack using the potential trigger technique. It activates the power without residue and allows the effect to last longer than normal. But when the time of the skill expires, the user loses the ability to even move, plus the shield strike technique. The soldier, realizing what was happening, tried his best to stop the captain. The captain reminded the soldier that all of them could not survive. He was well aware that his forces alone could not defeat the monster. But he may well be able to stall for time so the soldier can escape. Although showing optimism, he thought maybe he could win. Suddenly, some sound behind them made them turn and they saw him. Argus appeared before them in all his glory, muttering that he thought it was all over, but there were still bugs left. Here they realized they had no chance of survival. The captain shouted to the soldier to urgently run away and went to attack the monster. At that moment, there was only one thought in his mind. If he used all his strength, he could buy some time. Despite the captain's strength, the monster easily repelled his attack. When the captain fell, Argus said in surprise that they have completely worthless weapons that look like garbage and extremely weak bodies. In his opinion, all of the lowest quality. Wondered how creatures like humans could proclaim themselves masters of the world, and called planet Earth a very miserable place. As the captain fell unmoving, the unfortunate soldier stood in front of him and, struggling to hold himself up, pointed his weapon at Argus. Argus was impressed with the lad's loyalty and moral duty, though not for long. The soldier was full of doubts and repeated that he couldn't, because even the commander couldn't cope with this monster, and his magic wouldn't be enough. Suddenly, some young man appeared and said they shouldn't have come here. He continued that it was much safer to gather information a little at a time and then go in with a combined force. And what's the point of them attacking the monster first? The boy was at a complete loss and asked who he was. He was one of the volunteers and he received a call for help, so he was sent from the association. Yu Sung was 32 years old at the time. The soldier pointed out that he had no equipment at all, to which he replied that it was hard to run in his armor and that it was new and heavy. Argus was quite impressed too, both in that he was out of uniform and that he was all alone. Yu Sung said he came alone because the others couldn't come down. Without thinking long, he immediately knocked one of Argus's dolls to the ground. When the doll fell, it just crushed the floor, and the soldier shrieked at how strong it was. Yu Sun put one down and heard a noise upstairs and thought there was some commotion there too. Up until this point, he was a completely unknown hunter that few people knew about. And if he was a first-generation hunter, his name must have slipped in somewhere. But in place of fame and achievement, he focused more on saving others for that very reason and did not achieve fame. However, it was after that incident that it all started. The whole world found out who Yu Sung was. To begin with, I figured out one thing. Argus was watching Yu Sun very carefully, watching with caution, and he looked at Argus and thought of a plan of action, reasoning that this one was different and looked more complicated. The soldier, remembering the captain's words that only by combining all the forces of the team can catch the monster, with extreme surprise observed. He watched with utter amazement as Yu Sung took him down with a single punch without any unnecessary movements. As he prepared to attack Argus, he asked the soldier if he had any mana left. He only had enough left for a simple buff, which Yu Sonu didn't need. He told him to take the two comrades still alive and get out of here. Argus said it was unlikely that the soldier and his comrades had a choice. Yu Song didn't share his opinion and replied that he wouldn't touch a hair on their heads without his permission. The soldier had magic that lifted objects into the air and made them liverize. He took his own and looked at Yu Song and thought about the armor. It was 10 years after the merger. In that time, the hunters faced one problem: the released power and the increase in their physical abilities allowed them to approach the level of superhumans and also to master the technique of making equipment with the help of materials mined in the dungeons, which helped them develop their skills very quickly. But unlike the high-performance equipment, the weapons they used were not as skillful as they needed to be to survive. The answer that could break through that wall was human technology, a whole new combat system beyond what was accepted. In those days, few hunters felt the need for it. Explored the area and practiced. Yu Song was one of those hunters. The soldier turned around and froze in place. Could he really have won? Argus admitted that compared to the others, Yu Sona had a completely different level and knew how to use his power, adding that if his weapon had been even half able to keep up with his abilities, the situation would have ended in a completely different way. Since Yu Song was a completely unknown hunter at that time, he had no way of acquiring a top-ranked weapon. Making sure that the soldier and his comrades favorably leave the scene of battle continued the attack. Argus remarked that Yu Song's technique was the most outstanding of all the people he had met. His hammer, on the other hand, is of the worst quality and its durability has already reached its limit. Fully confident of his imminent victory, the monster struck. But contrary to his expectations, the weapon did not split but took the blow. It was a technique that Che Rin later picked up on, a technique called ripples. The skill with which the hunter took the blow and used its power. Physical strength, experience, and perfection of movement. Everything was on a completely different level. It was an unrivaled hero martial art that he possessed to perfection. Cheren and S.E. Ram listened attentively to Argus's story, heard at last the outcome. The hero had won. Argus summarized that at that moment, because of the technique used by Cha Reina's father, the monster that was him had died. And Argus' life no longer belonged to him, but to the conquering hero, the boy's father. He didn't kill him, though. In the end, the dungeon sweep that the special unit failed was declared his own victory. Many people were overjoyed, considering this victory a miracle. After that, something truly unexpected happened. The Elder Titan. This is a race of monsters considers the other races beneath themselves, so they will never be. to bow down before them, and one of them was Argus, who surrendered himself to the humans and asked for asylum. C-Rom recalled studying this great event. The whole world was stirred then. And then he was granted citizenship. It was believed that there were no casualties in this raid, although there were many wounded. But in the end, he was guilty, and so he had to work here until his sentence was fully served. And now he says he was defeated by one man. That was very different from what S.E. Rom taught. Argus personally made this pole, even though his father didn't ask him to. He was a warrior worthy of this weapon. Chae-rin was surprised because he had never heard about it from his father. As a kid, he thought it was just a sturdy pole with no special features, so that's why he didn't give it to the creditors. Yes, that's what it is, confirmed Argus with a grin. It's just a very hard stick that's good to twirl. C-Rom couldn't believe her ears. What creditors? What was the matter and what had happened? Argus asked Cha-Ren if he had ever wondered why his father used an empty pole. He had originally planned to give him the finished weapon, if he can get the material for the blade. But at some point, his connection was cut off and he couldn't come to him himself, so I had to send only the part that was already ready. He didn't know the details, so he decided there was no way to finish this weapon. Deciding that it's not bad in principle, he asked me to give him the pole. Argus offered to follow through and the weapon would no longer be for his father, but for him. Returning to the elevators, S.E. Rom asked him how he was feeling. Chae-Rin replied that he was fine. The last grab was not too strong. As they left, Argus pondered how long it would take to make it. He wanted it done as quickly as possible. But you should not rush, as the masterpiece should reach perfection. The S.E. Rom, looking at their schedule, said that Wednesday would be a day off, and they could take that day to prepare for the written exam. At the same time, we could do a trial test. Cha-Ren was not busy and agreed. C-Rom decided to gently inquire about his father. She said that he seemed to be a remarkable man. She had no idea that this raid was thanks to him. Cha-Ren replied that he is now retired and undergoing treatment in the hospital. The boy said goodbye and wanted to go for a walk to think. Today, he had received an incredible amount of new information and he needed to think about it calmly. On her way home, S.E. Rom decided to read the information on the Argus case again. On her phone, she opened the case summary. It said, on the 23rd of August, the first raid of the special unit to clear the dungeon took place. The 5-man team was able to successfully clear the dungeon and take her master Argus prisoner. And that's exactly what she's been studying. But if he's telling the truth, that makes those 5 hunters from the legendary task force taking credit for another hunter. It was hard to believe, but Argus had no reason to lie. Besides, if you remember the features that Cha-Ren showed, it is quite obvious that his father was a unique master. There used to be many cases like this. After all, there was no way to check what happened in the dungeon. Suddenly, she remembered an event. False Dragon Slayer Woo Song, South Korea's best hunter with excellent skills. Most of the achievements that are recorded in history. It was forged and prescribed through threats. It must have been after Yu Sung was injured that everything became known. On the phone, she still read the text, with a note to the other in which Woo Sun was recognized as the hero who single-handedly captured Argus. Se-Rom couldn't believe that he was Chae-Rin's father. And then she gets a notification from the school. Second semester midterm, the report card for the midterm exam. Hero High School, the teacher's lounge of the dungeon clearing department. Cho Si, a 27-year-old, was the classroom teacher of a class 1-2 magic tutor. She turned to Kanu's teacher. She apologized that he had to work weekends because of her. He replied that he still had to check the grading sheets of the freshmen. SRA was pleased with the results. It was better than she expected. It's about the work and the caliber of the students, not compared to when she was here. She laughingly asked him if he could have foreseen that the first place in the practical exam would go to a certain student, and the top 3 were impressive. When he saw who it was, he said this result was hard to foresee. Unexpectedly, all 3 were of mixed blood. Se-Rom couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the top 3. Currently, there were 3 students in the first year who are called geniuses. First, Chue possesses swordsmanship skills inherited from his white-ranked hunter father, as well as the magical powers inherited from the elf's mother. The second apprentice, Anisha Eskerm, has magical skills that even a pure-blood elf might envy. In the future, she will surely achieve great results and reach a high level. And the third genius student who won first place in the midterm exams, born from the union of a human and a dwarf. From the latter, he inherited strength and durability, and from man flexibility and agility. He absorbed the strongest qualities of both races. Tyr Belkason, Korean name, SOK Chul Gang, a rising star with the best physical data not only in the school but also in the world. It's not that the SEA doubted Chol Gaga's skills, but he is in no way inferior to the 2 steals. Usually the first places in the exams are taken by the leaders. Even though the difficulty level was low, he single-handedly took first place. Teacher ASD believed that loners have their own advantages and physical strength is not all of his strengths. The teacher said, to be honest, that's why she's worried. He's got what it takes to be a leader. However, he is not at all interested in any interaction with the other guys. Not only guys from the same department, but also from other departments are afraid of Chol Gang. And in the second year, you can't do much on your own. It would be nice to have at least one friend to share your thoughts with, but he doesn't seem to be interested. The ASD teacher said that maybe she shouldn't worry so much. In his opinion, it's often the case that guys aren't what they appear to be. He thought that worrying about the students was good, but it would be better to believe in them. Sometimes it helps. 3 days later on Wednesday at 11:30, some guys were walking down the street talking about something. Suddenly, someone walked by and hit one of the guys. He couldn't hold the glass and dropped it. The guy got really pissed off and turned around with the intention of saying what he thought. But when he found out who had hurt him, he abruptly changed his mind and became very nervous. It was Chul Gang. He apologized and said he accidentally hit it, but he was just walking and thinking. It seemed that the guys didn't even hear his words out of fright. Fearing for his life, he began to apologize himself. Finding him doused in his drink, the guys quickly fled the scene. Chul Gang was upset and wondered why he was so unlucky. As it turned out, he was formidable on the outside and very sensitive on the inside. He missed his mom very much. As a child, he was a normal, cheerful boy and enjoyed any interaction with his mom. So Kyu Bin was a Korean hunter working mainly in Europe and had an excellent reputation. She often told her son about her homeland, which she missed dearly. Therefore, Chol Gun felt sympathy for Korea from an early age. It's the atmosphere he grew up in, plus his personal outstanding qualities, allowed him to enter the School of Heroes on special grounds. If we're talking about the problems he had in school, it's that he's withdrawn. He was excited to talk to his classmates, but worried that he wasn't quite fluent in Korean and worried that others would make fun of him for his pronunciation. The peculiarity of introvert, even if he knows a foreign language, it is still difficult for him to talk to foreigners. He blamed himself for his temper and indecision. It made him very anxious. That's how the first trimester went. Without expecting it, Chul Gang had acquired the image of a majestic wolf. His hobby was walking alone on the street on his day off. One day, he decided to go to a computer club to play, but he was worried that all the seats were already taken. Remembering my mom's words about going to karaoke or computer club with her friends, when you play games, it is delicious to order and eat something. He went in and tried to register, but not knowing how the machine works, it took him a long time. He looked around, watching the whispers behind him that he had no concept of time at all. He decided he couldn't make it, so he decided to go home, but he was just in the way. But as he was leaving, he heard someone talking to him. It was K.A. Ren. He said that this machine can only be charged and the registration is done in another. He offered to show me how to do it. They approached the right machine. K. Ren explained what to do. You don't have to fill in all the fields, just the ones with an asterisk and press ready. If the registration is finished, you can go back to the machine and get infected. Select the location again, log in, and that's it. Che Ren sat down to play and wished him a pleasant game. Chol Gang thanked him for his help. Che Ren thought to himself that this foreigner guy speaks Korean well, and it seems to be his first time at the computer club. While he was playing, S.E. Ram texted him that she was delayed, but would be there soon. He lamented that if he had known, he wouldn't have gotten up so early. Go to the black market. Try to sell this item. He didn't know what it was. It was in that box of royal jelly, and it looked inedible. Then he thought when he had time to check it out, and back then, selling celestial bee-related items was tantamount to suicide. Only the blood and kill amulet could be exchanged for cash now. One of the 3 scourges of the Igarian jungle. Enkil is a reptilian tyrant. For the past decades, untold numbers of special forces have been assembled to destroy it. But unfortunately so far, not a single raid has been successful. All I got was a few broken scales and some blood. It is currently illegal to hunt Enkil, and the price for such items is literally sky high. He had planned to meet with S.E. Ram at lunch and then go to the black market in the evening, but now it's moved up. Suddenly, Chol Gon came up to him and said there were no seats. The peculiarity of introverts is to look around and be cautious even if it is not necessary. Che Ren replied that of course it's both of them now and it's a day off. I asked him to join us, as he was not waiting for anyone. Chul Gang thought there weren't many games like this, and he liked playing at home better. Cha Ren suddenly saw that he was playing the same game as him, and the level was almost the same. Apologized for being interested in such things the first time we met. He just didn't have any friends who played the same game. Cha Ren asked if he was playing alone if he would like to try to play as a couple. A little backstory. In the center of Seoul, there are ruins called scars here and there. A huge part of the city was destroyed during the merger, almost all of Seoul. Most areas have of course been restored except for the areas close to the dungeons. The space between the dungeon wall and the city served as some sort of shock mitigation, in case monsters got over this wall and an emergency was declared. But in the last 20 years, There hasn't been a single instance of the monsters themselves going beyond this wall. MGH-877, a special vehicle for transporting small and medium-sized monsters. The driver of one of these trucks was talking to a colleague on the road that he realizes reality every time in such moments. That while his so-called co-workers hunt monsters and make money, he gets pennies for driving a car. His colleague replied that if he didn't like something, he could always quit and go back into the service. A former gold-ranked hunter, retired at the age of 31 after an eyeball injury, asked what he came here for in the first place. Song Jang-woo is 22 years old, former bronze-ranked hunter, hands and feet intact. Cho Yen said he only has a license and no special ability to find a team. He knew he'd never get more than a job at the association. He just liked to grumble a lot. Suddenly, they felt something and thought the monster had gotten out of the rear compartment, but that was basically impossible. She went to see what was wrong and told him to call the center to warn them that they were stopping for an inspection. He started calling and said that the supervisor had ordered a stop and went to check it out, and he sat down to play on his phone, thinking that no matter what happens, the boss is there for her, so everything will be okay, because if it wasn't for her injury, she would have made it to the ranker. When she returned to the car, he complimented her on her promptness, but she looked a little out of sorts. He knew it wasn't her anymore, but he was afraid to do anything about it. She was looking at the clipboard, wondering about the list of monsters in the trunk. He stared at her as if mesmerized and dared not even move. Cho Yen, or already someone in her stead, loudly ordered him to push the pedal if he didn't want to die. The boys at the computer club at that time decided to have a snack. Cholgan liked the dish very much. Chae-rin continued the conversation and said he didn't realize they were the same age because he was so tall, big, and muscular. Cha-rin asked which school Chulgang went to. He was very embarrassed in response. Suddenly, their conversation and meal was interrupted by a noise. Everyone in the hall ran around shouting "earthquake." He thought the sound that came from the street was like an explosion. Everyone went outside and started filming. There's no way the truck was going that way. Eyewitnesses said maybe the driver got drunk and got behind the wheel. Some people thought that they should report the incident instead of filming it, but everyone decided that someone else must have already reported it. In that car were Ko Yen and Song Jang-woo. She must have done something to the driver on the road. She wanted to go to the center of Gangnam, but was told to go back. She was on the phone with someone. She was warned that the hunters were coming soon. She was sure she wouldn't get caught, so she said she woke the guys up. The roof of the truck was damaged, and someone's claws came out of it. Someone's about to get out. Eyewitnesses who were watching the accident were stunned when they saw who got out of there. They were unicorn monsters. Cha-ren had fought one of them earlier. Monster Horned Terror. The number of horns depends on the growth rate. The level of danger depends on the number of horns. Someone in the guise of CHON asked who bid on 50 people, and she wants to bid too, though she thinks 100 will probably die before rescue arrives. It didn't take long for the bloodthirsty monsters to rejoice. Chae-rin came to the rescue. He took one down with one punch, and he wasn't going to stop there. To the bystanders frozen in a daze of fear, he shouted to run away immediately. Uma thought he had met them somewhere else, recalling recent events. A horned horror with a single horn weren't much of a threat to his level. On average, these monsters live 5 to 6 years, and most of them die with one horn. However, a small fraction of about 8% of monsters can have a second horn and thus reproduce and a longer lifespan, and physical strength several times that of a normal individual. One of those monsters fell into Chae-rin's hands. It was fast and strong, but not so strong that he couldn't handle it. He'll get over it somehow, but there was one problem. It's the guy's durability. Compared to a Chae-rin tank, he's 3 to 4 times more durable. The pole would have been fine, but now he had nothing on him at all. Helmet, armor, weapons, accessories, shoes. At least a work outfit would have been nice. Horned Horror 2 Horned. Danger level 3 stars. Chae-rin had to fight it with his bare hands. He tried to think outside the box and decided to use improvised means. Eyewitnesses tried to save whoever they could by picking up the stunned along the way. Each monster classification has its own level of danger. The difference between 2 and 3 stars is enormous. The sheer destructive power itself goes far beyond the level of human ability. An ordinary human being would be destroyed by such a monster. Even for very capable hunters, it would be very reckless to fight without special equipment and magic. But speaking of exceptions, then to resist such a monster can only tank of the highest rank, with very pronounced innate qualities like Chulgang. He thought to himself that he was able to stop it with his strength, but dealing a killing blow to a rank 3 monster would be quite difficult. Cha-ren used the iron pipe from the road sign to strike the monster from behind with the needle technique. Chulgang was impressed with the technique the guy used without equipment. You could tell from their facial expressions that they both hadn't expected such abilities from each other. Cha-ren began to reflect that less than a minute had passed. And then, his thoughts were interrupted by Chol Gang. He thought it would be at least a few more minutes before the rescue team arrived. He heard the distress call, but it was still a very sudden situation. People could die while rescuers are on their way. Cholgan had another ability. He could use the provocative cry. This is a basic technique that can be used by any tank. This technique of attracting monsters with a piercing scream. Cholgan, who had always dreamed of being a hunter, was already prepared to divert the monsters to himself before the rescue team arrived. He turned to Che Rian and suggested that we start inside the building and stopped short, thinking how to offer some guy to risk his life together. After all they did together was play computer games and have a snack. Suddenly, Cha Ren himself suggested shouting Chol Ganu since he is a tank, and they have a technique that attracts monsters. Chul Gang didn't expect this from a guy he didn't know and said it would be very dangerous. Che Rin said it was fine because he was going to fight alone anyway. Cholgun asked him to think hard before, though he would not be alone. Che Ren says he's pretty good, protects people, and plays very well. Somehow he's been playing the hunter, but if he's going to do that, he's got to do it right. He turned to Chol Gang and emphasized that he had probably not had such experience before and suggested that he try his hand at it. Inside the computer club was a complete shambles, and the monster was bossing around picking up those who didn't have time to escape. Chol Gun proceeded to execute their plan and began to call out a cry. An incredible wave of sound illuminated the entire neighborhood. As the horned terror prepared to attack another victim, his ears were pierced by this sound. I didn't expect anyone other than regular people to be here. Chol Gan had accomplished its mission and prepared to take a massive hit. As expected, the cry worked well, and all the nearby monsters came to it. The monsters began to pounce on him all at once. There were so many of them on all sides. Chie Rian thought of a plan of action and noticed that there were two bipeds. Turning around, he watched the picture of the unicorns picking up the dead men and piling them into the truck. He wondered why there were no dead people on the street at all, fighting. He laid down monsters one by one, but their numbers were great, and Cha Ren decided that with the usual way of hunting, there was no chance of success. Chol Gon was in complete agreement. They both fought from a melee position. They did not only have no cover at a distance, but also no suitable equipment. It was like a team game with no chance to give their best since no one had the items. They might even get in each other's way. They had to divide the tasks. Chol Gang decided to take on those who were weaker but outnumbered as a tank, and Kuren took on those who are stronger but in smaller numbers. This weapon was a bit difficult for him to fight with. Compared to the needle, it lacked power. Argus's pole could have been handled in a few strokes. It wasn't known exactly what material it was made of. He couldn't fight with such an improvised material, i.e. a pipe from a road sign consisting of aluminum plus zinc coating. It was clear that it would not work exactly the same way, but he knew how to act. He remembered that Zig Eskern had also fought him only with his bare hands, and unless you counted 1-2 punches, they're mostly not that fast. But he's got some light damage that stifles movement like rain-soaked clothes. They fought in terrible conditions where a moment's mistake could cost a life. But as has been the case so far, CHA Ran has skillfully exploited these conditions to take your skill and experience up another notch. With each bout, he emphasized to himself flaws and new opportunities. As he fought, he recalled bouts with previous opponents both worthy and very strong. The fourth technique he was able to master and apply when necessary. It was called Downpour. It was as if he was on all sides of the monster at once and was striking again and again. But the monster managed to catch him by the leg and hurl him against the floor with tremendous force. Back on his feet, he said it was 2-1. He thought he looked a little pathetic, but there was no other way. After all, this fight wasn't any kind of fair fight with a mere human. There were some pretty powerful beings fighting him. The team's luck also counted for unrivaled ability. As it turned out, not all eyewitnesses left the scene of the battle alive and dead. 2 characters watched the fight from inside the club. And not just watching, but filming the whole thing on their cell phones. Marveling that these 2 heroes had taken down more than 10 horned horrors without any equipment. A 23-year-old student named Zhou Dong was the leader of the Dungeon Explorers Circle. He couldn't believe he was able to film this. He risked his life for a reason. The other observer did not share this enthusiasm. He was frightened to the point of numbness. Kim Jang-hen, a 23-year-old student who was also a member of the Dungeon Explorers Circle, couldn't figure out who they were. They looked younger than him. Judging by the numbers of dead monsters and stars, they're not below gold rank. Perhaps they are studying at the hero school, or they are unknown super beginners. And it wasn't really that important. Don Unknown asked his comrade if he could edit a little video. He couldn't wait to share it with everyone. If you do it after the news is out, it's too late. He expected to get at least 1 million or even 10 million views. Chul Gang was surprised at Cha Ren's actions. He thought they were just stalling until the rescue team arrived. He never imagined the two of them could handle the monsters together. Chae-ren humorously remarked that he was standing so well that it was even embarrassing to say, "But could he please give his hand?" Chol-gan helped him up, and seeing his condition asked how he was feeling. Cha-ran's condition was naturally not the best. It hurt here and there. Although compared to what he expected, it was good that he was in one piece. Chol-gang began to praise the guy in surprise, saying how good he was at taking down two monsters single-handedly. He answered that he had killed 9 of them himself, and that he had helped him kill the last one as well. The answer was that they were only second level. Chol-gang was curious about what school Cha-ren goes to and gently asked him. Said the rumors don't seem to match up, since it's rumored that students from other schools are much weaker than students from Hero High School. Thought I said something I shouldn't have. He apologized and said he didn't mean to offend him. Chae-ren immediately realized that Chul-gang was also a student at the Hero School, which is not surprising considering his abilities. Chae-ren asked where he stood and how many other guys among his peers were stronger than him. Chul-gang naturally found it difficult to answer, explaining that he was not close to the boys from the school. Clarified that he has tried his hand at exams a few times but thinks exams and aptitude are different things. Thought it was a middle ground. Chae-ren immediately decided that the bar was too high at this school, judging by Chol-gang, and that he would suddenly be kicked out before he even transferred. They noticed that one monster was still alive, standing on the roof of the truck and did not give in to the cry. He might be different from the others. If there was anything special, it wasn't in him, but in the truck. Chae-ren remembered the monsters loading dead people into it. Chol-gang suggested that they just watch him for now, because he was a one-horned man, and they would quickly deal with him before he could even hurt people. As suddenly something began to happen, some entity tried to pull the one-horned man inside the truck. This entity grabbed the immobilized monster by the leg and began to tighten. The guys couldn't believe their eyes, not realizing what was going on. The monster fought back hard, clawing at the car. It looked like something was trying to swallow it up. Chol-gan said that the Horned Terror are tribal-type monsters. 2 horned individuals were considered parents and heads of the tribe, leading small tribes of 10 individuals. When several tribes united, they became stronger and multiplied faster. However, this had its limitations. In the harsh world of dungeons, the Horned Horror was a below-average class, since the number of individuals was always regulated, at the expense of the top predators. However, at some point, this order was broken by the appearance of a mutant with 3 horns. He had already become more than just the leader of a small tribe of one-horned men, but king of an army of thousands that terrified everyone and everything. That leader was the Horned Terror Rex. The danger level is supposed to be 5 stars. What was their surprise when they were horrified to find that they had emerged before them? This particular monster, he used a bright scarlet-colored flow technique on the boys. Rex easily shattered Cha-ren's so-called metal weapon. From the way Rex easily deflected attacks and massively struck, it was clear that the guys just didn't have the slightest chance of winning. Chol-gan tried to crush him with his strength by applying a full girth, but that too was useless. Rex picked him up with ease and turned him over. They were running out of time. 2 young guys with outstanding abilities. They're bound to reach the highest level someday. But that moment will definitely not come today. Today, they are facing the strongest opponent of the monster race. Determination, courage, perseverance, and sense. Even if they use everything they currently possess, they can't make up the difference with his absolute numbers. And Rex wasn't going to stop until he finished his dirty mission. There's some suggestion that Rex had something to do with Chae-ren's father's illness. Currently, there was no one who knew exactly what kind of person Yu Song was before he lost his power and came down with a terminal illness. There was no one in this world who could tell exactly what he had left behind. At that moment, something began to happen to Cha-ran. 11 years ago, a confession made to journalists by one man shocked the world. He wanted to admit the mistakes he'd made and apologize. 12 hours before the decisive battle between Chol-gan and Cha-ren with the Horned Terror, Surome was in a real state of confusion. The truth that she had learned last Sunday was still in her mind. For 2 days, these recordings of past events tormented her. If Chae-ren's father had really been wrongfully convicted, she could understand why. Because he had lost his power. Surely there was no one else who would take his place. But there was one thing she didn't understand. When he was falsely accused, it started with victim blaming, submissions, and witness statements. Probably falsified. At the same time, there were contradictions in the media. Even with the fake evidence, Yu Seong's image wasn't so bad. C-Rom couldn't understand why he didn't fight to the end. But not only did he do nothing, on the contrary, he admitted everything and did not say a word against these accusations. After the press conference, the media calmed down and Yu Sung remained a fraud in people's minds. She kept thinking, how could it be that even if he was threatened to admit his guilt, it would be like pouring oil on the fire and setting himself on fire? She assumed she'd imagined it. but the look on his face made it seem as if he had to admit his guilt. Si-Rom was confident in her assumptions that something was amiss here. Suddenly, she came across his dossier in which she read with extreme surprise that it said he had no family. Parents are deceased, no spouse or children. Maybe Chae-rin isn't related, she thought, but then it would be in the documents, especially since they look alike. In her musings, she speculated that perhaps the admission of these charges had something to do with Chae-rin. Chae-rin couldn't figure out what was happening to him, what was happening to his body. But one thing was definitely clear to him. It kept moving all the time. And that was enough to counter Rex's attack. And then Cha-ren decided to use a technique called Destructive Rain. Their bout was quite impressive with a whole other level. Next, a ripple kick was applied, but it didn't destroy the monster completely. However, Cha-ren realized that after 2-3 such strikes, the monster had clearly become weaker. He decided that a needle stab to his chin in his condition would do him just fine. He was just getting ready to strike when suddenly something started happening again. Chae-rin thought to himself, what a coincidence! Where has this power gone? Rex regained his strength and simply flew into an attack on the exhausted guy, however. Having positions among hunters is necessary in order to allocate roles that suit each individual. Even if the hunter is badly wounded, he is still able to stand. This is the role and duty of the tank. So also sacrifice helps to gather all the forces and strike the strongest blow to the enemy. Chae-rin used the needle technique. It's a close-range fighter's job. The result of their amazing team was a complete defeat for Rex. The seizure of a vehicle carrying a captive monster, resulting in dozens of casualties among ordinary citizens. It wasn't even an hour before this shocking news broke everywhere. The guys were barely standing on their feet, backing each other up. And when they saw the help, they laughed at their timing. The broker was shocked by what was being said on the news. 2 guys, 2 heroes, had a huge impact on the world. One of them was Cha-rin. As a kid, he never worried about little abrasions either, and was against treating them. But his father was caring and insisted that even a small wound should be treated. He said if we leave it like this, it'll hurt more later. Then little Cha-ren asked if it hurt Daddy when he fought monsters and got hurt. It doesn't hurt when there are many wounds. My father said that of course when he gets wounded, it hurts. And if the wounds are severe, he gets scared too. Explaining to my son that he has to fight and endure because other people might get hurt. When Chae-rin was a kid, the same thought kept running through his mind, that he would grow up to be just like his father. But on the other hand, he realized that his father didn't want the same future for him. My father repeated every time that you can't, as if he felt guilty for saying it. Maybe that's why I told him not to, but he clearly knew that when he grew up. His father will be sure to tell him why he was so reluctant for him to become a hunter. But unfortunately now, it's impossible because my father didn't regain consciousness. Cha-ren woke up in the hospital and thought that this situation was very familiar to him. It had already happened to him a few days ago. Suddenly he heard a voice. When he turned around, he saw Zig Cern, who already knew him. He came to see him. Peeling an apple with a knife, he said that it was Chae-rin's fault last time. Naturally, he didn't expect to see him here. He asked in surprise what he was doing here. The Zig said the treatment was successful, but recovery from this injury is usually difficult. He will be able to move his arm in about a month. For now, he advised to think only of rest because he still has a lot to do. Chae-rin was very grateful for his help, but he was very interested in one question. In anticipation of the question, Zig himself answered that if he wanted to know if he knew his father, the answer was yes, they worked together. Suddenly, Cha-ren snatched the apple from Zig and thanked him, but Zig did not expect such an action and thought he wanted to hit him. Zig replied that he had simply not expected such a sudden reaction. Chae-ren, eating the apple that Zig peeled for him, said he didn't know what kind of reaction he was expecting, just to ask if he knew his father. Adding that today was different than last time, from which he deduced that Zig didn't just know his father. Suddenly, Chae-rin reincarnated and told him to get out, or he would take away his hand with the same knife he was holding. Zig didn't know what to say. Chae-ren added that Zig must have expected him to react this way. The guy said he chose the most appropriate expression and apologized if he was hurt by it. Zig replied that it was no big deal, especially since he had almost guessed, although he expected a more emotional reaction. More emotionally, Chae-rin interjected. He replied that if he had come a couple of years ago, he would have gotten what he expected, because at the time, his head was full of thoughts of who did this to his father, and those who saw and did nothing, and once wanted to make these people pay for everything. Zig asked why he didn't want to now. He couldn't say other thoughts now, just a shift in priorities. Whatever it was too much for him. He wasn't even up to Zig's level, and what could he do to hold them accountable? The only thing he could do now was pay for his father's treatment and keep living until a cure was invented. Those were his main goals at the moment. Even though he couldn't achieve them yet, he would try his best. Even if someone tries to stop him, he will surely find a way to stop him. The Zig said right off the bat that it wasn't part of his plan. He came to ask a few questions, the first of which was why he, being the son of Wayu Sona, was not recorded in the documents. After his father started having a mental breakdown, who looked after Nia, Chae-rin replied that his father raised him alone. He said that Zig was not the only one who asked such questions. He grew up alone with no one to look after him. Then Zig asked him if he knew Duganahi. He had never heard of him and didn't even know what country he was from. Zig explained that it was not a human name, but the official name of the Dragon of Destruction, the source of the poison that poisoned his father, and the most dangerous creature still alive and atrocious in this world. Until a few decades ago, all of humanity was gripped by fear of him. Since their appearance over the years, humans, along with other races, have built a wall to protect them from these monsters. Thanks to the merits of the hunters, dungeons and monsters no longer threatened the safety of humans. The only exceptions were creatures capable of destroying the wall. That's how strong they were. These creatures were dragons, beasts stronger, smarter, and more cunning than any race in this world. Although ancient races hostile to humans were rare, among the strong monsters, the danger level of dragons was at the highest level. They didn't just detest humans, they accepted them as objects meant to be dominated and exploited by dragons. However, they made the mistake of underestimating the strength and capabilities of the hunters, thinking that they didn't have to humiliate people, that people wouldn't be able to handle the dungeons and would die themselves. The dragons are going to wait for states and societies to collapse, to breed people like cattle and play the roles of deities for them in return for safety. Chae-rin thanked them for their futile plans. Zig answered correctly. After all, the hunters had stood their ground and learned how to mop up the dungeons. When the plan failed, the dragons decided to intervene personally, intimidating the humans with their unprecedented power. That's when Chae-rin's father showed up, the hunter who proved that dragons can be defeated with the right strategy and the strength to implement it. Thanks to him, dragon hunting was successful all over the world. That's when the changes began. Chae-rin knew that already. Then the dragons hid deep in the dungeons. Not exactly the Zig's answer, they just changed their tactics. They're very cunning, and they can take on the appearance of any race. The dragons realized that they could not defeat humans by force alone, so they began to change their appearance and dissolve into society. It was a secret, but Zig told him because he was Wayu Song's son, and also because you're going to be a hunter. Duganahi is the dragon leader that Yu Sung chased until his illness took him down. We need to catch him so we can make a cure for his father. If he is willing to do this, he must become stronger and rise to the top as a hunter. The Zig has promised to give him a chance to punish Duganahi. Zig gave him his card and told him if he didn't believe him or couldn't make up his mind, then he should live as if he had heard nothing or forgotten everything. Those words only made Chae-rin more excited. If it's true, even if the participation threatens him with death, he won't give up. Zig knew it wasn't up to him at this point because he said he had to level up first to get that right. Dragons are extremely cunning and hide quite far away. They have many faces that they carefully hide, waiting for their time to come. Even if they manage to uncover the evidence and make it public, it won't make sense until they personally destroy it. Once they're exposed, they'll just hide somewhere else. All that will remain is terror and lasting distrust in the hearts of all people. Therefore, it is imperative to get rid of them quickly, secretly, and dramatically. We can't leave them any chance of escape or resistance, with a single blow to the weakest point. To catch Duganaki, the Zig began training a special team several years ago. They are all very reliable hunters and are capable of taking down a dragon. If Cha-Reina's skills aren't enough to fight them shoulder to shoulder, no matter how much he wants to, he won't have a place on the team. When at least one member of the team is eliminated from the dragon capture plan, this not only means the failure of such a plan, but also puts the entire team in danger. Cha-Ren didn't realize how much time he had to prepare since they couldn't wait for him alone. Duganaha's identity has not yet been determined. The Zig anticipated about 2 years, but the sooner the better. Cha-Ren should have realized that they wouldn't consider his circumstances if everything was ready. When Zig left, he said he didn't care what Cha-Ren thought of him. If he didn't believe him, they might not see each other again. However, he could promise one thing. Whether Cha-Ren joins their team or not, he will surely ruin Duganahi. As he washed his face to regain consciousness, he thought about what it meant that there was a way to cure his father. He was shocked by this sudden and surprising news. He had strong doubts. Perhaps it was anxiety or fear that he would not be able to take part in the revenge. Although that wasn't the final answer either. He had decided he was going to be on this team. No matter what happened, he felt joy. He finally got a chance to grab an opportunity he never had before. It was quite possibly the first time in his life that he had felt such a strong desire that filled his heart to the brim. Suddenly, a girl came into his room to ask how he was feeling. I asked him if he had any pain in his arm or anything else. He wasn't really bothered by anything, just a little soreness in his muscles. All details should be given by the attending physician. Muscle discomfort will only occur at first. So they reassembled the arm, you might say. When the ambulance arrived, the arm was in a very serious condition. It would have had to be amputated, but during the operation, a high-ranking healer joined them and reassembled his arm. Chae-ren asked the girl what happened to the guy who was brought in with him. She said the other patient was discharged the same day. He had a pretty good recovery rate. He wondered how long he'd been here since Chul-gang had been discharged earlier. The girl really wanted to take a picture with him and asked for permission. Chae-ren was surprised, but did not resist and took a joint photo with the girl. Not realizing what was going on, he asked when he could check out. The girl was immensely happy to get the photo. He can be discharged, but I warned him he'd better go out the emergency exit. There are a lot of reporters at the hospital today, and they are waiting at the main entrance. They want to interview him. Cha-ren was quite surprised. Why would reporters want to interview him? The girl realized he didn't know anything yet. She showed him the video from her phone. The boys who watched the fight still posted the video on the internet. The girl believed that if it weren't for the two of them, there would have been several 100,000 victims. Everyone was just going crazy, trying to find out who they were and where they came from. She was holding a small bag that had been given to him by a friend, with the words, "If he doesn't want to glow, use this and go out the back of the building." He naturally thought of Chin Se Rom. Maybe it's an outfit with invisibility magic. After all, rich people have very different capabilities. But the contents were pretty basic. When he saw the contents of the bag, he was a little shocked. Climbing rope is cheap and strong. He turned his gaze to the open window. Aren threw off the rope and climbed down the rope with some difficulty. The girl shouted that he didn't have to worry about the photos. They were for her personal archive. But still asked when he becomes a famous hunter to post it on Instagram. Chia-ren gave the girl a friendly wave and thanked her for her help. By then, a car was coming to take him away. It was Se Rom's car. She decided to help him hide from prying eyes. Chae-rin wasn't happy with the escape plan she came up with. Couldn't think of anything other than rope. She was outraged at the guy's ungrateful behavior and asked if it might have been better to reveal his identity. There was another bag in the car. There were clothes and shoes for him. She didn't know the size, so she took it by eye. She also bought a smartphone for him, as his smartphone was probably broken. Such concern on the part of Se Rom quite moved him to tears. While they were driving, she decided to inquire, but she had so many questions she didn't even know where to start. She was quite surprised that these events had happened right where he was, and that it was the same monster that was there. Chae-ren realized that by that monster she meant the Horned Terror. Answering that life is a chain of events, asked where they were going. He'd really like to get some rest. But Se Rom said it would be nice, of course, but they only have time today. She had made arrangements, and today was the day to take measurements for the tailoring of the hunter's suit. The world's best top-tier atelier had decided to make him a suit of armor. There are 3 types of suits depending on the qualities of the hunter. The first one is fabric, i.e. sewn from material. The physical defensive ability of which is at its lowest level, but with the help of various techniques, it is easiest to endow the cloth with magical protective properties. Most often such are used by healers and magicians. The second kind is metal. These suits are pretty tough to say the least. But the problem is their heaviness. It is difficult to handle strong and high-quality metal unless you have outstanding physical and health capabilities. And somewhere in the middle is the skin, she noticed. Not too heavy and strong enough. For a long-distance fighter like you, it's a good fit. When considering a new smartphone, he agreed with Se Rom, as he was already convinced that fighting with bare hands is not very pleasant. Se Rom was very interested in how they managed to deal with the horned horror. Chae-ren replied that someone had filmed the whole thing and she could look it up on the internet. The video only got to the halfway point. All it shows is how they destroyed the one-horned and two-horned monsters. And there's no fight scene with a 5-star. He was surprised as a 5-star. He didn't know it at the time. He only felt that he was unusually strong. Even if he or Chul-gan were fully prepared to battle him, they still wouldn't be able to defeat him. Thinking back on recent events, he wondered where he had gotten this new power from. Se Rom didn't understand why he didn't tell her how they caught him. Chae-rin himself didn't fully understand everything and said it just happened. She didn't believe him. Such a dangerous monster could only be taken down by professional hunters with full training as part of an entire squad. He didn't look like he was lying, though. Still, there were doubts that the two of them could handle it together. Chae-rin, meanwhile, was admiring the gift. Anyway, he's got to be careful now. Reporters won't let him live his life in peace. She made a point, and not just the reporters. I guess he didn't realize that he and Chul-gan were both in trouble. And by the way, the other guy has already been fully revealed. In the last 3 days, he has already been offered more than one interview and even participation in the program. He didn't say a word about Cha-rin, by the way. The reporters asked him to give at least his name, but he said he couldn't say anything without consent. Cha-rin remembered what he asked Chul-gang to do when it was over. He asked not to say what happened and what he did. He didn't want others to recognize his face and his name. Chul-gang made a promise. Burning with jealousy, S.E. Ram really didn't like the boys being friends. He couldn't let anything happen until he passed the school exam. Chae-rin wondered why it was before the exam. S.E. Ram inquired about the exam and found out that it would be harder than she thought. If you look at the level of competition over the last 5 years, the odds are 100 to 1, and that's only when there are enrollees. It's customary to be intimidated by numbers on admission. In any case, they were weaker than he was. I mean, somehow she got in. Ram calmed down and agreed that he didn't say anything new and he's the best, no argument. But if you look at it differently, will those who have no ability pass such a difficult exam by their own efforts alone? Of course it was Cha-rin. Or did she mean that they would be grouped together for the exam? That's exactly what she meant. Over the past few years, most of the people who'd entered their school had come from a family of hunters. Naturally, their parents knew each other, so they agree in advance which team their offspring will be on. Members of such groups among enrollees, especially in the last 5 years, are 100%. If you tell everyone he's the guy on the news, he'll be a target and a major competitor. Their school doesn't provide such a thing, but it would be better to enter on special grounds for merit in destroying monsters. Chae-rin believed that if this is the way most people do things and not all, then there is someone who did it himself. He believed that he would definitely break through and get in. Ram was glad that he was so determined, but she felt that something had changed in him. Chae-rin, meanwhile, was looking for a place to change. Ram said she'd go first and wait for him after she changed. There was a girl receptionist sitting at the front desk, and Ram went to inform them of their arrival. Something went wrong and the meeting did not take place. The president of the company was absent and could not receive them. Ram was furious because the meeting was cancelled and not even rescheduled because it is very hard to get to them and there was no other time. The secretary explained that she would be compensated, but Ram was not interested because in 2 months she would be taking the exams for the School of Heroes. All the commotion and loud outrages were taking place not far from the principal's office. Someone behind the door was listening and peeking through the glass in the door. He remembered that he had seen this person somewhere, but he could not remember the name. Recently, hunters say that young people have become very different lately, even if not exactly now, but the hunters who came later. Always in better conditions than their predecessors, they had tactics for attacking monsters that the first wave hunters had developed at their own peril, as well as more advanced equipment and technology. However, the youth of today were those who were born in good conditions. The surviving pioneer hunters started families and gave their children everything they had. It was not only about ability, but also about the education they received from childhood. If anyone asks about the top of such a blessed generation, Ram suddenly saw the one who was in the director's office. The girl came out saying that the name isn't important. The most important thing is to be a first-year student in this school. Han Jia-yuen is 18 years old. She was president of the student council at Heroes High School. Asked Ram if she knew her. Ram obviously recognized her and was speechless. Jia-yuen said that the director of the firm was her uncle. She had an emergency, so she asked him for help, and he had to leave. But she could understand Ram's frustration over the cancelled meeting, so she came up with a brilliant idea. She suggested that the meeting was cancelled not because of her, but that Ram simply gave up her time. Allegedly, she just relented, for which Eunjae is very grateful to her. She didn't like that option, but on the other hand, she knew what it meant to be president of the student council of the School of Heroes, and also what a nasty and obnoxious character Gaunh possessed. Chae-rin came to Ram's rescue, heard the conversation, and said that this Son Bi from her school showed up and said that there was an urgent matter that couldn't be helped. She smiled sweetly at the guy and only wanted to say thank you as he interrupted her, and very rudely told her to stop scheming here and leave them alone. The unfortunate girl's secretary, hearing what words were being said to the president's niece, was simply dumbfounded. The boorish and masculine Gaunh was quite curious about who he was and how dare he talk to her like that. CRO tried to explain who he was, but she gagged her and did something to her. She felt something inside her like she had been stabbed. There was no visible wound, but she could clearly feel the painful sensation. Gaunh spoke very arrogantly to Ram, explaining that she had not been asked. She was told to sit quietly and be silent. Chae-rin decided to introduce himself and said he was 17 years old with type A blood. Residence Seoul, Gwanak District, Bongchon Street. Height 180, weight he doesn't know, hasn't weighed himself for a long time. Favorite food is fried rice with sausages. He clarified that that was it, but forgot to add that he was currently preparing to transfer to the Hero High School. He was a little disappointed that some high school trash ended up at this school, which is hazing like the army and behaving very inappropriately. Outraged by Chae-rin's insolence, she did the same trick she did to Ram. Gaunh said she's sorry she doesn't particularly dislike people throwing harsh words around, although it only applied to the one who was entitled to it, not everyone around him. She didn't understand how someone like him could be prepared for transfer. In her opinion, he was some defective product completely substandard. Chae-rin countered that he was just trying out what he'd learned from her, whether she liked it or not. Not expecting such a repulse, she decided not to hold back any longer and only prepared as she heard her name. Suddenly, her uncle came in and looked at her with a puzzled expression. Han Sung-woo is 42 years old, a former hunter and currently an armor designer. Turns out he was in his office. She made it look like he was absent on purpose. He was working quietly, and she came in and started making trouble. While he was on his cell phone, she dared to answer an internal call. It hadn't even been a week since she'd been there. Asked if she wanted to see her dad turn the place upside down. He apologized to his customers and said his niece was used to doing whatever she wanted. C-Rom felt uncomfortable and said there was no need for an apology. I thought to myself that if this whole situation was due to the stubbornness of the student council director, they could easily solve the problem. Seeing him reprimanding her, realized she adhered to strict superiority. If in front of her someone who didn't possess such, she wouldn't even talk. Chae-rin took Se-rom aside and asked her what she was doing at their school, because she didn't look like a simple sonbi. Se-rom explained student council president, what it means to be the strongest student in the school. Every student in a specialized school receives a temporary license. Rank source stone can enter the dungeon with an association license plus an escort, professional hunter's license. With this license, students have an opportunity outside of school hours. An escort to gain experience in preparation for professional activities in raids of low level of complexity. However, there are exceptions. Heroes High School Student Council. Within the school, groups are formed of students with exceptional grades, who are recognized as an unofficial sweep team. They are given the right to independently control and express their opinion on the board of directors. They can also team up with professional teams to participate in raids on monsters above 5 stars. Therefore, the student council is considered an unofficial team of professionals among hunters. The members of this team of professionals are called future rankers. Chae-ren clarified that means she's in her 3rd year, which is 2 years apart from them, and already student council president. According to the rules, that's the way it should be, but Song-bae was a sophomore. When Jae-rin heard that, he thought she was a sophomore. She took the presidency away from the man who held it before her. Chae-rin did not understand how a school could take away someone's position. Se-rom reiterated that she favors prioritizing skills and therefore only the stronger can put her in her place. You can become a member of the student council as early as the 1st trimester of your sophomore year. As soon as the UNGA, that is, SONB, moved to the 2nd trimester of her sophomore year, she joined and immediately drew her blade, wanting to challenge all the higher-ups to a fight. It was the loudest incident in the school's history. She started challenging all the seniors on the student council to a fight. As a result, at the end of her 1st semester, she won over everyone, including the president. This is how she became the youngest student council president ever. Tired of Uncle Jie's moralizing, she decided to leave, citing business. Chae-ren was not satisfied with the outcome and shouted after her that he wanted to make a bet. This fact did not please the Se-rom at all. She was adamantly opposed to it. But he went on. He said he'd heard that she was the strongest student in the School of Heroes, which she confirmed with her behavior toward those younger than her. He offered to make a bet to solve the problem. If he loses, he'll give in to her. Se-rom tried to stop this madness by saying he was just out of his mind. Her response was that if it's a bet, you need a condition, and in case she loses. Chae-rin appreciated how quickly she grasped the information. He'd heard there was a technique for retracing steps. Picking steps technique is a basic sparring technique between hunters based on ancient martial arts techniques. Touching or dodging is strictly prohibited. The one who retreats first wins. Chae-rin said if he loses, he'll give her his time tonight. There's no threat of injury in this method. It's sensory training. Agility and technique. This is one way of training that is often used. And if she loses, next year when he goes to hero school, she'll give him the student council president's job. Se-rom was sure he was in over his head. The president would never agree to such terms in his right mind. Sonbae was not a timid person, and she thought it was funny. In the end, she accepted the bet. Looking him straight in the eyes with confirmation of accepting the bet, she uttered Yu Cha-ren. They came to the testing room to test their strength and prove it to the enemy. Sonbi didn't doubt her abilities one bit and wanted to punish the impertinent guy. Cha-ren was also pretty cocky and wanted to punish the proud bully. Sar-rom tried to talk him out of it until the last minute, reasoning that the president is a reasonable man and it is enough to apologize. I mean, he'd have to be big, but with a hand like that. She thought that even if he won, no one would give him the student council presidency. Turns out he knew he couldn't win even if he was healthy. She's so much stronger than he is. That's when Se-rom became enraged. How initially assuming he would lose the argument he decided to. This is a waste of time. He knew SE Ram didn't understand how or why he was doing it, but he just asked her to trust him. All he said was that it would be a good exchange. Se Ram broke her head trying to figure out what he wants to accomplish in this doomed-to-lose battle. Maybe he was going to lose on purpose, but it's unlikely he'd humiliate himself like that. Uncle kept trying to understand how the person who heads the student council is unable to show tolerance and immediately reacts acutely to any word. He bowed and once again apologized to SE Ram for taking the time to come here, but she replied that he had nothing to apologize for in such a situation. She said that her friend was being stubborn for no reason, and that's why it all led to this result. He's being stubborn for no reason. He said he didn't know her companion, but he felt he definitely had a purpose. Sonbi said it's already clear, but will say out loud that she too will only use one hand to keep things fair. Che Ren didn't care because if she's preparing to lose, he understands. They began to fight, but without much gusto or animosity. When Se Ram and Han Sung-woo watched them, they were extremely surprised at what was happening, and there were two reasons for that. They both didn't tense up a bit and moved very fast. Se Ram didn't even notice when Ji Yoon launched a kick. The power of the attack and the speed were impressive. Picking steps is training for a defensive reaction. In order to touch your opponent, you must make sure that he does not touch you. There was no hesitation or fear in Han Ji Yuen's movements, only the urge to attack, and her excessive arrogance was accompanied by speed alone. How fast in such a posture of movement, as if between blows in Cha Reina's place, Se Ram would not have been able to react even to the first blow. Han Gun-eun was a former hunter-rancher, green color 31st place. He asked the question he thought she was always being asked. This young man is definitely getting ready to transfer to the hero school. Judging from the data sent by Se Ram, there was no doubt that the boy had outstanding ability. But what he was witnessing now was far more than he could have imagined. He had been a brave hunter himself until 10 years ago. That's why he was able to grasp Cha Ren's purpose right away. He did not act in such a way because of his pride and temper or to humiliate Jie Yuen. He just wanted to check out since Yuenjia is no longer in the top 10 in terms of ability. Once he gained a little more experience, he could easily handle a low-level ranker. He probably wanted to feel that personally. Recognize the goal he should be striving for, and most likely to calculate how much time he has left to reach that goal. Jie Yuen was quite pleased, for she had not met an opponent who would last this long in a long time. Praised him and said she didn't think he'd last that long in his condition. She realized it wasn't just his arm that was hurt, his movements and his physical strength. It was probably only half working right now. He didn't know what to say because she hadn't seen him in his full strength. As it turns out, she did. She said he moved a lot faster in the fight with the Horned Terror. I've watched that video 100 times in the last 3 days. I'd even say I'm kind of a fan of the hero, the unknown Mr. A. Due to his condition, I suggested we call it a draw for today and postpone the fight until next time. Jie Yuen offered to fight when he moved to their school and was in perfect condition. Se Ram was nervous not hearing what they were talking about. She felt sorry for him to end it like that, said he could go deal with his uncle now. Che Ran called her extraordinary and said she was unable to soberly assess the situation. He wasn't going to end in a tie. Asked if she'd already forgotten about being student council president. He urged her to get back into the fight, noting that he wasn't going to give up on the idea. Han Gang looked at what was going on and thought hard. All three of them thought he was bluffing. Everyone was thinking that even if they continued to fight, he still wouldn't get away with it. This chance to finish the fight unscathed was the best Cha Ren could get right now. Jie Yuen felt sorry for her because she likes brave people. However, just now he had not been brave, but foolish. She was even disappointed in him. He started first and surprised everyone a lot with his kicking, and Anja in particular. Inspired by Se Ram excitedly realized that he had been saving his strength all along. Uncle was in doubt. He was wrong in his assumptions. Cha Ren didn't just want to know the difference with GAUNH, which was a little over 30 strokes, and he completely adopted her moves, which means he didn't need the win. Being in amazement, his uncle thought he was a monster, because from the very beginning his goal was to steal Unga equipment. She realized what was going on too. She was surprised beyond belief. Of course she hadn't expected such a turn of events. He said with a smirk that he now understood how to dodge. Che Ren has been smuggling since he was a little boy, so whatever happens. He never made a bad deal for himself. Said she's frozen because he wants to see more. Technique isn't just a punch that has power put into it, it's a combination of many factors. In order to put all your strength and skill into this strike and hit the target, you need the most optimal posture and movements. You must also remember to watch your breathing and every even small step you take. It takes time to learn all of these elements. There are those who devote years to gaining experience by persevering towards their goal, going through different fortunes and defeats, learning from experience. This experience is passed on to the next generation, improving each time. And even the most talented genius can't do that alone in a few years. Thanks to his outstanding qualities, CHA Ren, though he was able to achieve amazing growth. But at 17, when his physical development had stalled, he finally met a wall that was blocking his development. In order to move to the next stage, he had to break it down. He kept insisting on continuing. He asked her why she was hesitant, because she had heard that he would definitely go to hero school and they would meet again, adding that he would love to help the future Hubie if he were her, which means junior. Though maybe she's just afraid in Cha Rena's opinion, and he understood her. GAUNH turned to her uncle because he had a request for her. He asked to see those units once. Who want to put her on a tentative contract even though she doesn't care at all? She will honor his request in return. He must not stop her. Cha Ren, she told him if he wanted to know how to duck, she'd make sure he only did it. Such an answer didn't exactly make him happy, and he tweaked something. GAUN kept his promise, and all he could do was duck. She made him sweat and regret what he had said a little earlier. There are connecting elements in human movements. Every second, our movements have a beginning and an end. Therefore, the beholder subconsciously assumes which movement will be next. Han Ga-eun used a technique that circumvented this very point. It skipped the intermediate stage, thereby deceiving the observer's vision. Not only did she move so that her next actions were impossible to predict, but also made the enemy feel her speed. It's the same technique he invented over 20 years ago. And it was his father who implemented it, and it's what made him famous. It's a technique called flash. Uncle Jia-yoon watched in amazement as Cha Ren repeated the flash 2 times in a row. He also used the same method that Jia-yun did not demonstrate. He began to think, if you assume that in such a short time he could understand the essence of the technique, but the flash cannot be repeated on just one understanding. You need flexibility and reaction, and most importantly, a sense of timing. If you lack any of these things, you will not succeed. He himself first adopted the flash from his brother when he was 20 years old. That's the age when all data is at its highest level. But even it took him then 3 months to just understand the technique. And Che Ren was able to adopt this technique during his bout with GAUNH and was able to master it in such a state, it was phenomenal. Han Sung-woo was right. Cha Ren was in terrible shape, considering all he had to endure. His strength was running out. But in spite of all this, he thought he could endure a little longer. As it turned out, his condition was better than ever. He knew he could be much stronger than he was now. He literally felt the joy of learning something new that he had never experienced before. Even though this training was not in the usual form, but he had a purpose and motivation to become stronger. And also came the realization of how it could be done quickly and correctly. He needed it as much as he exulted in the opportunity to fill in the gaps in himself. Now, for the first time, he felt the way of possibility and the joy of feeling it. He forgot about the pain and fatigue and moved straight towards his dream. At some point, the Daidas couldn't take it anymore and snapped to his niece's aid. Jia-yun was extremely unhappy that he intervened, but was glad it was over. They both said in one voice that they had lost. A question hung in the air. She wouldn't admit victory because she couldn't help herself and used her hands, even though she promised not to use them so they'd be on equal footing. He didn't expect her to do as she said, but she hit him anyway. Chae-rin realized that she should be ashamed of herself because no one was pulling her tongue, but she shouldn't overplay her hand. Besides, he doesn't think she's that strong, and it's not a case of hiding someone's victory or defeat. Uncle decided to take a responsibility because he is a grown man, did not stop the fight, considering the condition of Cha Reina, and it is difficult for him to win. He asked how they both felt about the fight being a draw, and the real fight should be held next time. He suggested a full-fledged fight when Chae-rin is fully recovered. Showing that he didn't really want to agree, he tried to be sarcastic and said that if Han Sung-woo said so, he could accept it. Gaun was very firm and said they would see each other next time at school and if he failed the exam, or lose to someone else before they meet her, that is, before their battle. She won't leave him alone, he can be sure of that. For Cha Ren, regardless of the outcome, today's battle was a very important and valuable experience. After all, he had met a female peer with unprecedented abilities. Sean turned to C-Rom and asked her what her name was. Realizing that she was helping him, he said he wanted to apologize to her. She didn't know if SC-Rom had hunter abilities, but she didn't seem to be completely clueless, and not a bad judge of character. Today, it was not only CHA Ren who felt a sense of joy filling his heart for the first time. The guy complained to SC-Rom about how bad he was feeling, to which she replied that no one forced him to do anything. I'm surprised they didn't take him to the hospital. Still, she found it all surprising, the result of the battle and the fact that he had admitted defeat. In her opinion, he had won. Even considering the rules he set up, the student council president used her hands. In his opinion, if you talk about the rules, he won, but if you consider that he took off the bondage and started fighting, it was clear that the two of them didn't intend to hurt each other a little. but he crossed the line. So she didn't think he'd changed at that moment. At the last moment, he put all his strength into it. If he had hit her, it would have been painful. Even he, in such a situation, would use his hands. It was inevitable and fair as he thought. Si-ram was curious what would happen if they were both in perfect condition. Chae-rin didn't understand her. At first, she asked why he went into the fight. He was just inwardly fully immersed in the fight, and he even liked it. While they sat resting and chatting, Han Sung-woo ordered them lunch. He ordered snacks and drinks for everyone, figured he'd make it up to them. He started apologizing again for his niece for causing them trouble, and so he decided to treat them to something tasty. Chae-ren said thank you for buying at least something expensive food. He's not used to expensive food, he just wants a lot of it. The caloric expenditure of a hunter, and especially melee players, is at least 5 times higher than that of a normal person. Si-ram didn't even think about it, but in the 4 days he was unconscious, he didn't eat anything. Han Sung-woo decided to get down to business. Their workshop is not leather, but a fabric that is far superior to leather. They don't use plant fibers, they use strands from high-risk monsters, like the spider bandit, which has a 4-star rating. Gigamos Kochi, with a post-hatch danger level of 6 stars. These clothes are made with special technologies that they have a permit for, and mixed in different proportions, depending on the characteristics of the user. And when finished, the resulting fabric is much stronger and lighter than leather. In the case of Cha Reina, they had already made a plan of what clothes and with what proportions to make. Besides, all of his data is already in the Chin Sung Group's lab. Most importantly, Han Sung-woo personally verified his data today. One detail, however, kept him on his toes. The final step in fabric manufacturing is coating. This is the process of impregnating the fabric with oil and increasing the durability of the material. Si-ram interrupted him and said that's why she asked him to do the best coating regardless of cost. Currently, it is impossible to find the highest level of oil. In general, they use deep-sea whale oil. It's not easy to get, but they had an exclusive supply contract. However, due to the sudden anomalous phenomenon, the miners were unable to catch more than one whale. Of course, there are alternative materials, but despite the small difference and could not guarantee exactly the same effectiveness. And it already turns out to be a breach of contract, i.e. his blunder, which should not be. And if they refused his services, he would understand. Si-ram was of course worried because they didn't have much time. If they refuse, he can introduce them to a master possessing a high level of skill. He produces armor using standard techniques. Naturally, all the costs of production he will bear. Chae-rin replied that it didn't matter to him and if it made almost no difference. Besides, he had never used any expensive equipment. And most importantly, he wanted to wear the clothes that Han Sung-woo would make. Chae-ren speculated that he was the same teacher who taught Gaun the fighting techniques. Cha-ren didn't know anything about equipment, but wants to use what is made by the hands of a strong man. Si-ram, being a customer, decided that since he said so, she didn't really care who did the outfitting. She thought it was a very strange day. Han Sung-woo bowed in response to the praise and said that he had not been a hunter for over 10 years. He was embarrassed to hear such words. The director promised that he would produce a product of the highest quality and would definitely justify the trust. After that, Han Sung-woo began to regret more and more what had happened last week. It was the big hunt he had been waiting for. He was hoping to get some of the materials he'd been wanting to try for a long time. Suddenly, he asked if they had heard of sky wasps. Si-ram thought of the royal jelly. She had heard that it was a valuable trophy. The director said right, it's the most famous. But there is another material that armor makers among themselves call fantastic. It's black beeswax. Beeswax is black in color, which is produced by the celestial wasps. If the royal jelly feeds the uterus, the black wax protects the adult queen. Even among wasps, there are a small number who are able to produce this material, which they use to lubricate the uterine body. If these waxes could be coated on the material, it would be a first-class product. Chae-rin had a picture, but his phone crashed and he sketched a picture on his new phone. Han Sung-woo even jumped up from his chair as he was surprised. Since Chae-rin had a picture, he must have seen the sky wasp in person. Of course, he couldn't say he stole it and smuggled it out. Then he came up with the idea of saying he saw the thing at Si-ram's house. Rich people are different from ordinary people and what they don't have. Chae-rin decided to contact the broker and arrange a meeting with him. He was visiting his father. The broker didn't have much to do today, just wanted to check in before Cha-rin came. They agreed to meet in about an hour. The broker suggested a snack. Cha-rin replied that fed-en, if he wanted to, he could keep company. The broker saw the door to the ward open and told Chae-rin he had to go. The man with whom this broker had arranged the meeting entered the room. It was Zig Azurm. Zig said hello and said they hadn't seen each other in a while, and the broker offered to leave the chamber. There was no noise because Tha Ren's father had just taken a sedative and fell asleep. Zik Eskerm is currently ranked 7th in South Korea as a former Venus Squad healer. 11 years ago, the so-called legendary one-man cleanup squad was disbanded. And now, the two who once called each other comrades have met again. And there was no joy in the meeting for either of them. The broker started sarcastic that he was so happy to see Zik's face after 10 years. The broker's name was I.M. Jai Hwan, and he was a former hunter. He was formerly ranked 5th in the South Korean rankings and was the main fighter of the Venus Squad. Zeke asked him to be quiet and follow him. C-Rom, meanwhile, remembered that black wax was probably in that chest, asked her to warn her about such things in the future. But he really didn't know what the subject was himself, and thanked her for playing along in front of the principal. C-Rom resented that he couldn't just sit still and was bound to get into something. He had no time at all. He was in a hurry to get to the meeting. C-Rom was very interested in where and who he was meeting with, so she offered a ride. When she got a sudden call on her phone, it was her uncle. She stepped away to talk. Cha-Ren stood still for a while, thinking that it was getting colder, and suddenly he was called out. It was Han Song-woo, who heard him muttering and added that it was only September and it was already so cold, so it would be a cold winter. He asked about Se-Rom. Chae-Ron said that someone called her and she went out for a while. Han Song said nothing, he just went out for some air. Han Sung-woo decided to share his impressions today. The unusual moves that Cha-Rin demonstrated was a real breakthrough. He decided to share with the guy that the flash technique was invented by his brother and Ga-Un's father, but he also had a hand in transforming it. Cha-Ren was very ashamed. He said that they had created this technique with their own sweat and blood and he should have thought about it. The guy apologized for using it without his permission and that it would not happen again. He replied that he had misunderstood him. That's not why he told you about the tech. Hunter Tech doesn't have any copyright. Although, of course, there are almost no cases when this technique is passed on to everyone. But when a person has mastered it himself, it is not considered a crime. If Cha-Ren was able to easily learn and adopt the technique, then he was at a high level from the beginning. But still, his movements were not exactly the same. The director laughed that the conversation had gone the wrong way again. Cha-Ren had no experience in learning any techniques properly. At first, Sung-woo thought he only knew the basics. But during the battle, he looked at Cha-Ren's face and concluded that such a spunky guy couldn't have learned only basic techniques. Sung-woo did not have the right to ask how and why Cha-Ren had learned it. However, I would like to give one piece of advice that will hopefully be useful. He said that Chae-Rin has a true talent. If you put effort and time into this talent, it will definitely shine brighter than others. Sung-woo was confident that he would have no trouble entering the hero school and becoming a top hunter. That was about his personal skills. In their world, and especially in the hunter's world, no one is going to just rejoice in someone else's success. Naturally, many will recognize his abilities and will look up to him. But there will be many who will be jealous. They'll want to get it, and if they can't, they'll want to destroy it. He probably realized that himself. Cha-Rin decided that Sung-woo's advice was to hide his abilities so as not to attract the attention of the dangerous guys. Cha-Ren misunderstood him again. You don't need to hide your talents at all. In addition, such skills are not easy to hide and because of the unnatural modesty of Cha-Rena, may be considered a weakling. The best way to show your talents in all their glory is to be yourself. A genius that's not easy to be friends with. You gotta do what you can while you can. Adopt any other techniques that come to your attention. And if anyone makes a claim, he should apologize like he just did. On the contrary, you have to be confident, because it's not his fault, it's the one who showed the technique. Only he himself can decide whether he does the right thing or not. And to put it more precisely, the right to choose belongs to the one who is stronger. He may have learned a technique, but if he uses it correctly and can rise to higher levels from that moment on, those techniques will become personal. Sung-woo knew how Cha-Rin felt. It's not the kind of advice an adult should give, but they live in a hunter-gatherer world where survival of the fittest. Chae-Rin has obviously noticed how abrupt his niece's temper is. As an adult, he should be reprimanding her, but he doesn't want to break her by force. She's a ruthless genius. As long as she's feared by those around her, they can't look down on her or harm her in any way. Just like you, Chae-Ryong. We need to stick to the same line and don't turn around. A very agitated Se-Rom came over and asked Chae-Rena to take her phone and answer it. They both looked at her in bewilderment. Chae-Ren didn't understand why he had to answer her calls. On the other end was her uncle. He knew she had brought him here and asked me to put him on the phone. Zik apologized if I disturbed him and said that something unexpected had happened, asked him to come as soon as possible. When I heard that Zik was worried about something, I went to him immediately. Chae-Rin showed Se-Rom the secret passage to the dungeon to get down faster. They are not only here, but also in the abandoned subway, and each of them has its own owner. He started to tell me what this one belonged to and suddenly stopped when he saw who was waiting for him inside. Zik Isern, and some guy were waiting for him inside. They looked pretty shabby. Zik hadn't planned to summon Chariena here, but rather than heal him and drag him along, it was better to die right away. Charen didn't know what the relationship between them was, but they didn't look very friendly. If the guy knew Tha Ren was coming so soon, he would have asked me to grab him a t-shirt. He scrutinized Che Ren and muttered that he was the one who had hit Ziku Sonbi in the face. I found out that Cha Ren is quite famous in their squad. He was nicknamed the teenager who was scarier than a high-level monster. This guy told Ziku that their leader wants to meet Che Ren for once. He's probably looking into it beforehand. With the words that he and S.E. Ram had to leave, he said that he was done with business and that it was not worth staying here long. They started to leave, but S.E. Ram was worried about what would happen to Che Renome and asked him to call back later. Che Ren went inside and saw the broker there, which I didn't expect. He thought something serious had happened. Zik was talking about support. The broker replied that it's very serious. Both his body and his self-confidence are just shattered. He thought Zeke was pathetic. So obediently, he followed the broker, and he wasn't alone. Broker asked Cha Ren for a lighter, but if he didn't have one, to bring a fire from downstairs because he couldn't even move himself. Che Ren, looking down, asked what could have been done here while they were fighting. He didn't understand what could have happened to have such consequences. The broker was surprised that Zik said they fought. He was so angry he was ready to literally set him on fire. I noticed that the guy who was with Zik is a pretty good fighter. He's not even a tank, but he's good on defense. 10 years from now, he's going to be a great hunter. Che Ryan had a question for him, but he interrupted because he knew what he wanted. But if he wants to drop the contraband, he'll allow it. But if there's a condition to becoming a hunter, within 1 month, you must master what he teaches you. If you can't do it, it's better to give up the idea. And it won't be easy since it's very different from Charena's skills. He couldn't believe his ears. He couldn't even imagine such a thing. The broker decided to teach Cha Rin magic. The boy wanted to ask what magic had to do with it, but he decided to listen first. But right now the broker was feeling really bad. He was all cold and it wasn't just fatigue. Cha Ren took him up on it. At that moment, the broker was reminded of the past and Cha Rene Yu Sun's father. The reminiscence started with making coffee. To be more precise, it was personally ground and brewed by Yu Sun himself. At that time, he was already suffering from an illness and did not believe in a better outcome. The broker, that is, I am Jae Hwan, was 26 years old at the time. They worked in the same team. Yu Song was mentally saying goodbye to his career as a hunter, and he was discouraging him and trying to give him hope. But to do that, they needed to catch Duganahi, and Yu Sonu wouldn't have to do anything if they could formally announce the purpose of the raid and assemble a squad. Yu Song felt that even so, it would not be possible to raid him. Duganahi knew Yu Song's condition and needed to wait it out to win. Jaehwan was furious at such words. Would he just stand there and watch the dragon win? It wasn't just about Duganahi. There were silly rumors, and if it wasn't for Yu Seong, they would have all died. Jaehwan said he was willing to do it all by himself, if only Yu Seong would get well. He himself is ready to gather a squad and find the dragon and make all the ingrates kneel before him. Suddenly, a little boy entered the room where they were talking. It was Che Rin. Yu Song introduced him as his son. Jae Huang did not know about his son and was very surprised. The father introduced the unfamiliar uncle to his son and told him that he had nothing to fear. The father asked his son to play while he and Uncle Jaehwan talked and said they would have dinner together tonight. Yu Xiong was sure he wouldn't last long. Even though Zik had prepared a prescription for painkillers, he would soon become resistant to them as well. Pain was not the first priority. He realized that his ability to make decisions, memory, and perception would all gradually fade. 3 to 4 years at the most, and he won't be able to recognize people. Jae Huang really wanted to stop this from happening, but Yu Sung interrupted him with a request. If anything happens to him, he asked to take the place of Cha Reina's father, to take care of the child in his place. Not like himself, but so that Che Rin can have a normal, happy life, so that he can become something other than a hunter. This may have happened for the first time in his life. Yu Sun, who has never, under any circumstances, shown his weaknesses, made a request to another person. How could Jaehwan refuse his request? Of course he said yes. Back to the present time, Jae Huang woke up at Jae Ren's house. The first thing he asked was what time it was. Che Ren replied that it was not very late, about 11:30. He was surprised that it had only been 3 hours since he had been unconscious, thinking that Zik had treated him, which he didn't want to do. At first, he wanted to take him to the hospital, but thought there would be questions, so he brought him back to his house and gave him an injection. The memories came back again. Jae Huan gave Jae Rin a syringe with some kind of serum inside, a gift for a part of the beginning of work. He was 14 years old at the time. Chae-rin thought that this syringe should be injected into the monster. But it was an emergency potion. It's not the best, but it helps in many situations. It can even remove poison or temporarily restore strength. It was a luxury for hunters whose lives are precious, but it could be used once. The next time Cha-Reina had to buy it herself. As he left, he said thank you, but Jae-hwan decided to clarify. If he's changed his mind but just can't say, he'll cancel right away. Besides, it was an inexpensive order, but once he starts, he can't stop when he wants to. Jae-hwang had the benefit, of course. He wouldn't have to pay for his father's treatment, but he was a little uneasy about making his son a smuggler, to which he replied that it didn't matter and that his father hadn't even left any money to the broker, and no one could know what would happen in the future. Ji-hwang thought Cha-rin didn't trust him, but the thing was, he needed the ability, so that in the future, he could protect his father in any situation. Thanked him for the potion. He'll use it where he really needs it. Ji-hwang knew that he would conserve the potion, but he couldn't even imagine that it would last so long that it would save his own life. He praised him for not putting the potion on the black market. Chae-rin was glad he understood that. Ji-hwang said that it may be hard to believe his words, but if he had quit smuggling halfway through, he would still be paying for his father's treatment. Chae-ren knew this, although he couldn't say he was 100% sure. But he realized that if something happened to him, Jae-hwan wouldn't abandon his father. And because of him, he was able to do this job. His conscience told him inside that since he had made a 14-year-old child a smuggler, it already meant he had betrayed his father. Cha-ren asked not to blame himself and said it was his choice, and if it wasn't, he would have found another way anyway. Still, he was curious why Jae-hwan had agreed to help him so easily. Yu Shang asked him not to make a hunter out of his son, but he didn't do it just because of his words. He had never listened to him especially much. He couldn't see Yu Song's son's abilities disappear in ordinary life. He honestly admitted that he hates this stupid world he thinks he's in, hates all those who drove his father to such a helpless state, and all those who unquestioningly believed them and forgot the hero, and even bystanders who knew everything but justified these low acts. I wanted them all to be held accountable for their actions. Chae-rin thought Zik wanted to help, but Jie-hwang didn't think he could catch Du Ganahi. Sincere intentions, but the methods are too naive. Not only hunters are suitable for catching a dragon, because dragons are not stupid. They knew the nature of dragons, but they just wouldn't let themselves be touched. The dragons had made it so that their absence from society would cause great loss. Naturally, Zika has his units and both sides realize it, but all the others who betrayed Wayusona are scum. They have no idea that even if the world collapsed tomorrow, they wouldn't believe in facts they don't want to admit. As long as Zik is bound by laws and society, they will only hinder him by helping the dragons. In the end, everyone will pay what they deserve. The same horror that destroyed your father 20 years ago will reappear, and all those pacifists who cheerfully acquiesced to it will disappear. This is the reason why Jae-hwan did not advise him to become a hunter. He handed him a number he had written on a piece of paper. It was his bank account number. Jae-hwang had been putting away everything Jae-ren earned since day one. He decided right away that he would give him all that money, so that Chae-rin could start his own business when he became an adult. Once he was going to teach him techniques and knowledge even more dangerous and practical than those learned by future hunters. When he left, he told me to call him when his cast came off, said he'd teach him magic in a month. In the meantime, he'd get him ready for college. Didn't see the point, though. Cha-ren decided to ask if he didn't think he should become a hunter, why he gave him another chance. Zhou replied that he was correct in what he said, but it was just his thoughts, which is not that important. That's what he said 3 years ago. He needs to decide for himself what he wants to do. And now the most important thing remains only this and only it. Depends on him what choice to make. Somewhere in the old Yongsan neighborhood, a familiar girl was walking around. She thought about the fact that every time they gathered, she wondered if it was time to get her own corner and finances allowed. A certain masked man said he found it funny that she brought it up since she doesn't come to half of their meetings. Although was in complete agreement with her because if they had a permanent place there, you could take a warm shower. Cho Yen asked him where his comrade was because they were inseparable, as if they couldn't live without each other, and now he was alone. The mate had another assignment and didn't know where he was. Choen encourages him by saying that she thought he would whimper like a puppy without a guardian, or he's just holding back tears to look serious, which made him mad. He said that if she said another word, she'd die. She laughed at his anger. Laughing, she remarked that he was scared without his master, so he barked at everyone. He couldn't stand it and jumped up, not thinking he'd be punished for fighting with her, and one might even call it self-sacrifice. Cho Yen accepted the challenge to make no excuses. Their emotional battle was interrupted by someone ordering them to immediately stop there. Cho Yen said Haron and the guy said Guesoki. He wasn't going to get involved in their squabble, but he wanted them to know that they were here for one thing, and he didn't relish the prospect of doing it alone because they were fighting. The guy admitted he was stupid and fell for Cho Yen's teasing. She answered that he was alive only thanks to the fact that a man had intervened and asked him why he didn't pick up the phone when she called. He said if it was 3 days ago, it wasn't necessary. Said, why would he listen to all that crap about her coming back and getting revenge on the rescue team? It was a successful operation and he didn't want any unnecessary risks. The guy disagreed with the phrase successful operation because only 12 people died and it didn't even result in proper attention. 4 days in a row, the news has been all about these two boys. Not much about the civilian deaths, but no mention of the hijacking of the truck. He understood why. After all, if it weren't for these two hunters' associations, disaster would have been avoided. Guarding the transportation of a 5-star level monster was so unreliable, and as a result, ordinary people died. They must have attracted all the media and made arrangements with the families of the victims to throw the attention of people for their mistakes on those two boys. Cho Yen wanted to deal with them all, but he said as soon as they were found out, they'd be labeled terrorists. It's not the association's miscalculation that's going to worry everyone. It's the race to the bottom. The association won't collapse because of this one case. But if such blunders are repeated someday, it will lead to its downfall. So it's important to keep throwing in accidents. Suddenly, another one showed up at their meeting. Resenting the fact that he had not been warned, they asked how long he had been expected. Their leader knew he didn't like to be disturbed while practicing his hobby. Kyo Yen shouted a greeting to him. Eungel said he didn't do his favorite hobby, but just worked. But he really enjoyed it. He didn't know Eungel and was seeing him for the first time. He said he was a pretty well-trained guy and asked if he was a hunter. He was a hunter, though not a high-ranking hunter, but his name had been on the rankings lately. He was going to sneak the items from his comrades. Last night, disguised as a smuggler, wanted to sell trophies and the main caught him. OGA 8 guy, 23 years old, main tank of J team. The secret refuge of hunters inside the space where monsters cannot penetrate there is a place to rest medical center and various necessary items. Some people do things there if they want a secret place that few people know about. Tonight's party will be leader and civilians. Perrin clarified as leader and civilians. The guys from the elite squad will be having a corporate party with the smugglers. G.A. Heck said it won't be boring. The party will be in the shade with lots of people. The prisoner said he would be the leader of their team and bring his acquaintances with him. The lineup always varies between rich people who like to party and businessmen. They gather to drink or drink potions that have a relaxing effect. Choen was very tempted by such an event. Their ringleader got a rough idea of what kind of people they were. Various abusers who are no longer satisfied with conventional drugs. They're thrill seekers, though there is no place safer for them than there. They are guarded by hunters and can enjoy themselves secretly from the outside world and prying eyes. The prisoner said that when he first got there, they said everyone was doing it and he had no choice but to join. And they're not the only one. G.A. Heck tried to calm him down and praised him for telling everything. Their leader said it was time to release him and used magic on the prisoner. And he said there won't be a living soul left here tonight. Tomorrow the whole world will know the news. About hunters abusing illegal drugs and ordinary people being killed by monsters. They were planning a hunter hunt and this hunt would involve just the 4 of them. This is the first time G.A. Heck has seen that a case like this won't involve the boss. He's given them permission to do whatever they want. It's what they've wanted for so long, unrestricted massacre. Their target was a known hunting party, 2 of the Gold Elite and 6 ranchers. The opponents are quite strong. Once their bodies are discovered, the stench of decomposition will finally wake the world. Soon enough, it will be their squad's time, Scar's time. A month passed. Chie Ren was riding in a cab and talking on the phone. He's a couple minutes late. They took the cast off this morning, but his arm is still weak. They told him to go for treatments for a week or two. A week or two, well, and soon the making of the outfit should be completed. Si-Ram was already waiting for him and greeted him cheerfully with a wave of her hand. He wondered why she'd have made him ride in an expensive cab for an hour. Could it really be all they had at their disposal for 2 whole days? Si-Ram reminded him that he only had this weekend to study for the exam. I thought he said he was going to train with the director. And she has to study for her credits too. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by someone. They met in the morning at the hospital when Chae Rin was having her cast removed. Chae Rin explained that they talked about training and he said he wanted to help. It would be good to share their knowledge with each other. And most importantly, he said they'd be in the same class. And he asked if she was okay with it. The main training area also includes a swimming pool, as well as a large, spacious room for practicing and showing off your abilities. A lounge area where food and drinks are free to take, although here the composition is more important than the taste. Gym. All exercise machines with special weights and designed for hunters. The men's dormitory on the 5th floor has a shower in every room, and if you want to have a proper bath, there is even a spa on the 4th floor. Chae Rin asked in surprise if it all belonged to her uncle. S.E. Ram replied that there was nothing to be surprised about. There are high-level ranchers who have completely bought out several mountains and made a training field in their place. Uncle often comes here with his colleagues to train, and on other days they can train in peace. By the way, she asked if he knew what it was. He wondered why she looked at a classmate and called him that. Se Ram asked her to keep her voice down so he wouldn't hear. She didn't know what Chae Rin had said to him since he agreed to come, but she doesn't think he thinks she's his classmate. He was surprised and asked if she had ever talked to him normally. She did, and she wasn't the only one. She was willing to bet that no one from their class or even the faculty had ever spoken to him. Everyone knows he thinks too highly of himself. If he ignores even the excellent students in the faculty, he ignores her even more so. Chae Rin called out to Chul Gang and called out to them. He reminded them that they didn't come here to have fun. Chul Gang happily ran to them. They will look at the inventory later. Chul Gang apologized and said he had always wanted to try something of that brand. Chul Gang called out the name Chin Si Ram and realized who was helping Chae Ren. When they were in the cab and talking to Se Ram, he noticed that Chul Gang was worried. He asked him if they had a bad relationship and just told him. Chul Gang explained that there are no guys at school with whom he has any relationships, and he is a little afraid of Se Ram, but at the same time, she's cool. Chae Rin decided to see if there was another Se Ram at the school. If so, it wasn't the one he thought it was. She's not the quick-witted type, but from freshman year, it was immediately apparent that she was disliked by many people and she didn't care. He has never once seen her falter and always keeps her head on straight. He didn't know about her grades, but he thought she was very strong and unwavering. Chae Rin suggested to Chul Gang that the three of us study together. Siram was indignant, but he had to study for the practical exam. Chae Ren said it's just memorizing and analyzing, not putting skills into practice. After all, she said he needed to analyze. All the examples that came before, where the exam was held on what topics and so on. It's important, of course, but since the three of us are in a place like this, you could have had a much more effective training session. Siecha Ren thought he had grown more in the past month than ever before. He has personally encountered strong people and learned things he would never have learned on his own. He would like to practice properly with them. They would share their special knowledge and give each other feedback. It would be good for everyone. Not for him to say, but they're both considered outcasts at school. Chae Rin believed that if he entered the School of Heroes and found reliable friends, he would definitely share his knowledge with them. He didn't know how things worked there, but it seemed to him that the rest of the students did. Se Ram couldn't say she had never thought about it. And it wasn't just his exam that mattered now, it was her. It seemed to him that the School of Heroes was not an easy place. Se Ram herself said that you have to be specific about your final session. He thought he'd probably get in. She could be a sophomore. Or even expelled. She realized he was trying to say she wasn't the one to teach the two of them anything. Chae Rin argued that she could use magic, but Chul Gang had only listened to the theory in class so far. He noticed that she was excellent at using magic, though her ability to combine it with other actions was poor. Chul Gang said if so, he'd like to learn how to use it. He's going to do it someday anyway. 15 minutes later in the fight room, Chul Gang said he had to call his parents. Cha Ren was just breathtaking. There was just everything, even all sizes of clothes. He asked if he could take one home. Siram asked if Cha Rin was purposely patronizing them. She's the one about the three of them practicing. She thanked him and said she didn't think she'd ever be friends with anyone else but him. Chae Rin thought that Seirim had realized that Chul Gun wasn't so scary and decided to tell her one more thing. But they were interrupted again. The one that Se Ram never expected to see today had arrived. Her cousin Anisha arrived at the same time and was not happy to see them in the hall. She said she had had a bad feeling about them since morning. She and her friends came to practice and didn't expect the gym to be busy. Ram explained that her uncle allowed them to come and practice when he was away. Anisha should have heard this too. She decided to mock Se Ram and pretended she hadn't heard that, but sneered that he must have a special relationship with her. Ram introduced Chae Reina to her cousin Anisha Eskerm, and even though she calls her she, they are the same age. Anisha said a hypocritical hello and hissed how happy she was for her cousin to have a friend. She introduced one of her acquaintances. This is John San Yen, who is a sophomore. She invited friends and sophomores to socialize and practice. So far, only those who had time to practice have come. She thought it would be even better since Se Ram came here too. She supposedly didn't care, but her cousin didn't like crowds and decided that now she would want to leave, but if she's going to leave in front of everyone. The people around her might think that she was being kicked out. Anisha asked not to be stubborn, and she is free to join the team. It would be a good chance for her. Chae Ren, hearing the proposal, said that there was another comrade with them and if they could join them too. A sophomore asked if Cha Ren was from freshman year and from what school. He explained that he was not from any special school, but from a very simple first-year school and introduced himself. This year, he is going to transfer to their school and Se Ram is helping him to prepare for exams. Anisha didn't appreciate her cousin doing that. Che-ren explained that he's been doing other things for a long time, so he doesn't know much. The guys thought he was crazy or just a naive dreamer. The sophomore threateningly advised Cha-ren to get in his car and leave before it got dark. Anisha turned to her cousin with a sneer that she didn't realize he had lied about starting late or being embarrassed to go to a simple school and had made up an admission for that. They were all students of the School of Heroes, and a normal high school student isn't at a level where he can keep up with them. If he stays, he risks embarrassment and ultimate disappointment. He was advised to go back and look for a tutor of his own level. The sophomore snapped and punched Che-ren in the face, but he didn't expect it. The sophomore snapped and punched Jae-ren in the face, but he didn't expect it to happen. Even those who weren't official hunters couldn't offend ordinary people outside the dungeon. Besides, it was considered a criminal offense. He just wanted to wave his fist in front of his nose with a menacing look and make Cha-ren feel the difference in levels. Not realizing how it happened, I began to think that I kept the distance, and with a normal reaction he should have dodged, and he instead leaned forward on purpose. But to do so, he needed to calculate his intentions and calculate the movement. Cha-ren said grudgingly that he just wanted to practice with everyone, but it looks like he'll have to defend himself. Depending on the scale, cameras were usually installed in the hall for the hunters' competition. From different angles, they recorded everything that happened inside the halls. And then the hunters would go through those tapes and analyze their techniques. Ram realized that Che-ren deliberately succumbed to not understand why, but now there is insurance that will save from unnecessary problems in any situation. Because his crazy act must have been caught on camera, a scene in which fists were thrown for no reason, the sophomore asked as self-defense. He meant no harm just to scare him. Che-ren pretends to be a reserved and cautious person by nature. When trouble happens, he thinks about it all the time and can't even sleep. The sophomore apologized for touching him, but he just touched him. He didn't even have any wounds, so why exaggerate? Che-ren, continuing to play the victim role, said, "Did Ram see that he first started hitting him and now says he's exaggerating? He even offered to report it to the police." The sophomore understood and asked what Cha-ren wanted, perhaps money, or to train together. He repeated that he would defend himself, and if he didn't return the favor, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. The sophomores thought he was just crazy. He suggested that Che-ren try to hit him too. He thought to himself that if he could get away with it that way, he would win. He's in a regular school and he's unarmed. As agile as he is, he has his limits. But the sophomore, seeing the force with which Che-ren was striking, decided to dodge. The fellow sophomore was not impressed with the decision. In his opinion, he should have just taken one hit and it would have been over. Sang-en dodged Cha-ren's punch and thus circled him. This is how it looked from the observer's point of view. However, from Sun Young's own perspective, the situation was such that he could not help but dodge. If he had not done so, the picture in his imagination would have come true. Didn't he plan to put his face in harm's way from the beginning? If that's the case, Che-ryong was hurt. Anisha decided to speak up and suggested that San Inu come clean. Not only was he the first to make a mistake, but he also made the wrong decision to take a hit in response to his own. She thought it would be proper to apologize and make amends, because this is not a contest, it's practically violence and fighting. In the first place, San Yen recognized that he had overreacted a bit and wanted to continue, but Cha-ren interrupted him. He offered him the choice of putting up a fight or settling the matter with a brawl. Such a challenge made Sun Yen very angry, and he did not hold back and rushed to attack. Che-ren used the flash technique and tried to make a good effect, a punch that has a special power invested in it. Che-ren had a look that said since he had an answer, we could end it there. But that was enough to hurt the hero school student's ego, and he used the flow technique. Che-ren dodged and threw another punch, saying, let's say several punches were thrown. San Yen was clearly unprepared for battle and unable to defeat Che-ren. Everything that was happening was clearly not in the minds of the observers. The others thought that San Yen was purposely giving in just to appease the guy. Sun Yen didn't ask about the bullying. He was just curious if Cha-rin was studying at the hero school. He replied that what he had experienced in this battle was very different in feeling. He really wanted to fight so that no one would be seriously hurt. As a gesture of reconciliation, he held out his hand to help him up and thanked Sun Yen for playing along. He had no personal animosity. Che-ren also clarified that it does not intend to distribute the camera footage on the internet. Seeing Ram look suspiciously, said that it turned out kind of awkward. He thought it would be like last time with the factory manager's niece. If he could have guessed it would turn out this way, he would have ignored it. Cha-ren asked Se-roem to take back the camera footage, to which she replied that she thought that what had happened was enough. But he just wanted her to take them for herself and revisit them. He thought there were surely movements to be seen there. Cha-ren tried to simplify them and move as slowly as possible, even though the enemy was much weaker than he thought. Si-ram realized that everything that was going on here was just to record a video for her. Chae-rin confirmed her hunch, but he wasn't the one who started the bullying, so it wasn't planned. Asked about the girl in the dress, the one who's always putting obstacles in her way. You can see it right away, even though she didn't hide the fact that she disliked Si-ram. Cha-rin didn't know how her life was going at school, but from what Chul-gang said, it doesn't seem like she's adjusting to everyone. But he decided to express his opinion, and he won't keep quiet and tolerate everything like she did. Not out of self-esteem, but he won't allow himself to be humiliated. Despite the fact that she had approached him with the request, these were valuable school years for him too. He didn't think it was good for their growth to be outcasts. Their conversation was interrupted by a humiliated and quite angry Sun Yen. He could not keep his temper. In a fit of rage, he wanted to pounce unexpectedly and swooped down from the back. Anisha was very disappointed by the act and warned that she could not watch it. She decided to intervene and applied her magic to Sun Yen. It was as if she clenched him in tight, fiery fists. When she asked him to come along, she didn't expect anything grand, but she thought he had the basic qualities an older man should have. Anisha thought he made her look second-rate. Si-ram was far away, but she was breathtaking and worried that her cousin was not changing. And not worry about such a small thing as wasting magic power at all. At the same time, something amazing began to happen to Cha-ren again. Cha-ren began to remember unpacking the box of items left over from the fight with the Horned Terror 3 weeks ago. There were his tattered belongings, his broken cell phone, his papers, and the ankle blood. He decided it was no longer usable. In life-threatening situations, it generates and absorbs magical energy. The medallion had exactly those properties. He remembered the moment he felt something activate in his pocket. It was probably the thing that kept him alive back then. But the power that came later was probably no longer the effect of the amulet. He had no other explanation. But I didn't think it was some mysterious power. The item was originally worth $2 2/10 billion. No wonder it has such an effect for that kind of money. He had the same feeling now as he had then. But why was it manifesting now? Maybe it wasn't the Enkill blood. Anisha called out to Cha-ren and asked how much money his cousin had promised him. She didn't think it was much and suggested he change clients. Anisha offered a dash of twice the amount plus liquidated damages. Si-ram was furious at such an offer and shouted what nonsense. She didn't think it was bullshit, just a business proposition. After all, she was stronger than a sophomore at their school, even if not of the highest quality. She allowed the thought that Chae-rin couldn't get into the school. But the fact that no one knew his name was strange. In her opinion, there must have been circumstances that prevented him from enrolling. In reality, however, most of these problems are solved for money, and money was the biggest advantage of the Si-ram. If not, she's got nothing else to brag about. Maybe her abilities, or her ability to make friends, or her reputation. Anisha snapped at her. If that didn't fit either, she couldn't remember what else. Chae-rin couldn't take it anymore and stood up for Se-rim. He must have been patient. He hasn't personally observed it, but it seems she's got some weird thing going on that's ruining her best years at school. Figured Anisha wouldn't understand. She doesn't have the guts to say what she thinks to a man's face. Going behind her back was her specialty. Chae-rin used some kind of technique. He asked her if she was in pain and said there was nothing to be done and had to cancel the exchange this week. The girl who was there also resented what to do with the others. Okay with the classmates, but they'd already invited the upperclassmen. Anisha called the girl simple-minded and went on about which high school students she was thinking of after such a spectacle. Just look at the level of their leader, which means the rest are no better. Anisha clarified that it was just a way for her to make connections with the student council. It was a shame about the time wasted, but there is always an alternative. Chae-rin suggested to Se-rim to just forget what happened today. They're not sisters who are the same age as each other. Anisha said that if his aim was not only his sister's money, he should be more discreet from now on. After all, it's directly related to school life. Chae-rin didn't understand how she could be called a mage. If you hurt her ego a little, she'd be ready to get into a fight. Si-ram didn't want Anisha to know more about Chae-rin. She is not a kind person, but she cares about her sister. She must have found out all the information about him by now and is trying to harm him. It's natural for her to spread this information to the newcomers. Chae-rin looked at his hand in surprise, realizing that he was not feeling anything right now, but stopped the moment the fire giant disappeared. That Anisha summoned. Accordingly, this power doesn't come from the blood of Enkill. It comes from magic, a power that comes in response to magic. Si-ram didn't understand why Chae-rin was so strange and what was going on with him. He realized it would take more effort than he thought, meaning magic. Anisha and her comrades defiantly dumped Sun Yen in the audience. Chul-gang approached him and waited for him to wake up. When he woke up, he was very surprised to see him, because he recognized him as the hero from the video on the internet. Sen Yen knew that Chul-gang was a freshman who had handled the three-horned horror, but how did he end up here? Cha Ren once again apologized and said that he just wanted to hit back once, but he got a lot more than that. San Yen admitted that he was at fault and that he behaved badly. The hero of the Quanok tragedy, he admitted he didn't even know who he was dealing with and behaved like a pig. He was glad he didn't fight with all his might. But Cha Ren wasn't sure if San Yen would have won in that case. There was no hiding the sophomore's surprise. Cha Ren continued that there was almost no difference in strength and speed as well as in the basic stats. There was a strong feeling that he couldn't control his emotions and his attacks were monotonous, and his fighting habits were showing. Sang En was curious about his habits. Cha Ren said while he was unconscious, he analyzed the security camera footage. The first thing he noticed was the center of gravity. Before the arms could move, the support legs shook slightly. Cha Ren decided that he basically knew everything himself, but wrote it all down in his notes. Ram realized that San Yen himself was surprised at his own shortcomings in battle. Such an analysis of the battle cannot be bought for money, although with Cha Rena's insight and observation there is nothing strange here. San Yen wondered how he could notice all this and more. He was saddened by his behavior. It didn't matter to Che Rin. He thought that Sun Yen had paid for his mistake and that he had no residue left in his soul. He came here to train, and with these notes he shouldn't be too upset. Che Ren asked to leave a phone number after it is familiarized, or you can write down the number and he will send all the information later. The boys were surprised at his comrades for leaving him and running away. He must have been very hurt. Ram having summarized what has happened today, and so much has happened, I decided to first talk about the basic concept of magic. If to explain in simple words, magic power can be compared to fuel for magic, and the quality of this fuel depends on its indicator. Chae Rien has always believed that quantity is more important than quality. Chal Gon explained that if we look only at the amount of magic power between races, including humans, and there's not much difference between the elves. Ram added that this comparison is just like a mountain of newspapers is no substitute for coal. The amount of magic power determines the amount of magic. Its scope is what they can use. She has a magic powers of level C. This is the lowest level to become a mage. Starting at this level, they can use magic to attack the enemy, or put buff on the skills of your comrade. But for similar non-mages, it will also be useful to learn how to put buff on their own skills. Cha Ren caught a buff that he could put on his skills. It could be applied as well as the blood and kill. A question arose. Is it possible to learn it in a weekend? Ram was surprised that a novice wanted to learn magic in 3 days. In that case, she couldn't say he could do it. It usually took 1 to 2 weeks just for the customizations. Plus, she had only studied long-range buffs. San Yen offered his help because he was a professional. He was a close-range fighter specializing in hand-to-hand combat. He was the best in this area of self-buffs in his course. Rank F Fire Spell mixes the user's magical power with air and causes a 400 and 500 degree fire. Used while camping or in emergency situations. Cha Ren was delighted. Sun Yen said not to exaggerate. It'd be weird if he couldn't do it, unless it's due to a complete lack of skill. Anyone can use it if they just know the way. Che Rin wondered if there was more to come, or if he could summon water. Sun Yen explained that he had to keep that light on and focus on himself. From the first meeting, telling him to feel magic was like trying to catch a cloud. You can't feel something you've never used. But this is a different situation. It's just a small spark, which is hard to call magic, but he still managed to use magical powers. In other words, he didn't even notice that magic had already activated inside him. This is the initial stage of sensing one's own abilities. He needs to make sure the spark doesn't go out and focus on his inner feelings. If he feels something, that's the first step. Sun Yen didn't think he had even such basic concepts. If all went well, he would spend the weekend doing it. He felt something tickling and tingling, as if a current were rising in his stomach and spreading throughout his body. That was it. San Yen was shocked. How could he grasp the feeling in less than a minute? Che Ryan realized it was amazing. It was like his whole body was filled with these wires. He tried to grasp how many 50 or even more than 100 of them there were. There are 2 parts of the human body that are responsible for magical power. The core, which is located just above the navel, produces mana, and the electrical circuitry coming out of the core spreads this force throughout the body. There are about 127 threads in the circuit. While Cha Ren was practicing, Sairam decided to ask Chulgang if he could play any instruments. Until he was 10 years old, he studied piano, although he had no special talent for it. Then according to Ram, it will be easier for him to understand because it is like playing the piano. For example, this. The G-rank spell, Thunder Fist, creates a ball filled with lightning that can be launched at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour. The killing power is rather weak, but due to its wide range of action, it is suitable for disarming several opponents at the same time. Ram made the orb without saying anything or moving in any particular way. Contrary to popular belief, magic is not such a noisy endeavor. Most magic techniques come from within without any special movements. It's like playing the piano by pressing certain keys, in a certain order and at a certain time. You have to imagine that the system inside your body is the piano keys that need to be pressed, and thereby produce a melody. Among these 127 strings, certain strings must be selected in a special order and at a special time. Cholgon wondered if time and order would be disrupted. There would be a risk of improper exposure. If the errors will be small, it will not affect the magic, although its effect will certainly be reduced. But the stronger and more complex the magic, the higher the probability of failure even with the slightest error. Naturally, the danger from an unsuccessful throw increases. Che-Rin also tried to grasp what Se-Ram was explaining. This Thunder Fist is only at the D rank level, but a slight misstep can electrocute the user and disable them for half a day. If you take A, B, or even C rank magic, one mistake can be fatal. Therefore, it is very important that the front line covers mages. After all, it is very difficult to maintain concentration in an emergency situation. Se-Ram asked if he could feel magic. Chol Gang had been practicing but couldn't distinguish the threads of the system yet. They decided to start with the simplest thread first. Because he's so aware of the whole system, you don't need to know about it. We need to find the ones used for the buffs. Cha-Ren has seen that they're doing well. A comical situation occurred, and Cha-Ren decided not to continue any further for now. Sun Yen protested because he needed to practice constantly as long as there was a sense of magic. He thought he understood the sensations. He could count the quantities and also realized where the system was. Sun Yen did not believe that it could be felt so quickly. Che-Rin began to describe what he felt. There are 2 threads in the right arm, 1 in the wrist, and 3 in the elbow, making a total of 6. A little more in his left hand. He counted 8, and if you count from the shoulder all the way down, he counted 10. Sang-En resented Che-Rin for pretending to learn everything in 5 minutes. Se-Ram suspected that he was up to something again. Che-Ren asked to be shown the next move if he thought there was any pretense here and turned to San Yen, nicknamed Hen. San Yen behaved rudely, and Sanbi can't be called as Che-Ren has not yet joined their school. There is a slight difference among people, but usually the arrangement to the number of threads of the system is the same for everyone. Therefore, each thread has its own number from 1 to 127. San-En continued by saying that Cha-Ren has already realized what his fist is like without magic, and now he will put one basic buff in it, i.e. apply a spell of E-rank muscle tension, increase agility, increase stamina, and took a swing. The power of his fist and speed immediately increased. Che-Rin replied that if a punch was thrown, a broken nose would not be out of the question. Sun Yen thought about why he hadn't even blinked and remembered that before his freshman year in high school, he himself had been among the laggards. In his basic and physical data, he was confident but lacked a sense of how to properly utilize that data. That's why he used buff. Instead of looking for something that wasn't there, San-En started to think about what way was left. Luckily, he had the ability to use magic and began to learn and practice the techniques he could. That's how he came up with this amazing method. Buffs have an amazing effect depending on how you apply them. If one made the impact much more powerful, what would happen if you applied more than one? The buffs were much bigger than Cha-Ren thought. It was San-Ina's way, but those with enough ability aren't interested in self-buffs. They master a maximum of 2 or 3 types. But no one collects a few dozen like him. As a result, he was able to improve his grades in his sophomore year and even became a team leader. Although the high school kids still don't think he's using cheap tricks. Maybe that's why he reacted so violently today. When a freshman was the first to suggest a swap meet, in his opinion, sharing experiences is an attempt to network, but he is glad. He thought he would be recognized for sharing his experiences with the younger ones. He behaved this way because he wanted to impress those he came with. They say that he who has been despised the most tries to prove himself. So, albeit belatedly, he offered his deepest apologies to Cha-Ren. Che-Ren asked him to stop apologizing and told him that for 58 hours he would look forward to a good lesson from him. 3 days later on Monday at 6 hours and 49 minutes. Their company left the training center after they finished training. Che-Ren thought that the fresh morning air was the best after training. Si-Ram complained that instead of sleeping, they had to study, and looking at the comrades wondered if no one was tired. Cha-Rien replied that they are full of vigor because they are young and strong and healthy. Despite the fatigue, Si-Ram noted that the 3 days were still valuable. The kind of training where they helped each other is extremely useful. The guys were very hungry and longed for a bowl of soup. Chol Gang clarified that he had never had Korean soup before. Sun Yen hailed a cab and offered a ride if anyone was on their way. The school only had a practice session today, so he decided it wasn't worth stopping by. Cha-Ren responded that it could be brought to any second-line subway station. He thanked the guys and said it was the coolest weekend he'd had in a while, or even since he was 5 years old. He thought that they would not see each other before the beginning of his exams, as they would have exams and he would have no time. He said goodbye to them with farewell speeches. Si-Ram reminded her that she couldn't fail her exams because everyone would laugh. She'd been listening to him all weekend. Chulgana asked me to help her, even though it'll be difficult, but at least say hello to each other once in a while. Si-Ram also thanked San Yen and called him Sunbae in farewell. He had done a good job and taught her something new. He praised her too. The guys were left alone to wait for a cab, and they were still uncomfortable being alone with each other. Cha Ren said goodbye and thanked San Ina once again and said that he had learned a lot from him. A lot of buffs, and he also learned a special thing. Sun Yen recalled that the technique was just an idea. He had never had to put it into practice. It is quite possible that it will not work at all. But according to Cha Reina's feelings, it will be of great use to him if he just gets used to it and can use it in a rematch. Sonbi was curious about the rematch, but Che Ren decided not to release the information yet. But if everything works out, he will tell. In parting, Che Rin suggested that we have lunch together sometime. Sun Young's answer didn't surprise me. He said that then the boy would have to go to a better school than his own, and he didn't have time for a regular school student. Cha Ren laughed and thanked him for his support, realizing that he had decided to have a last sharp word. When he got home, he felt very tired and even thought about skipping school today. Suddenly, he saw someone. His boss was waiting for him at home and said he didn't have to go there at all, even though he wouldn't have time to sleep. Cha Ren tried to refuse because it was a school day, but the boss had already taken care of everything. He called the school and said that he would not be able to study for a month. He was very surprised when his boss asked him to take a whole month off, but he had to get ready for hero school. And if he wasn't going to distinguish himself for 100% attendance, it's time to pack it in. The warden somehow figured out that Che Rin had learned magic. It's still early stages, but the horror circuit has been activated. Che Rin justified himself by saying that he knew what the lessons would be about, so he practiced a little. The boss praised him, but thought he would not need it. He was puzzled as to why it wasn't useful. Im Jae-hwan asked him not to misunderstand, and he even praised him, but he thought it was a waste of time. He wanted to convey the understanding that the magic he would teach was not some private lessons, but an exam. He thinks Charan should be ready to become a real hunter, and Jae-hwan will do anything to test it. He has to learn one thing, the realization that his abilities weren't all that great. So we should pack quickly and take only the essentials. If you need anything else, Jae-hwan will give it to you. Che Rin wondered where they were going. Was it to the training place the boss used to use when he was a hunter? Unfortunately, this place has long since been sold. Now Jae-hwan has decided to give him something. He was sent a weapon for Cha Rina. When he opened the case, he called him to look at it and check it out. If there is, he will sue the manufacturer. There was a weapon Cha Rihanna promised him to finish and a letter for him. He liked the improvements. The gun was lighter and the grip was much better, but he had to try it out to see. Ji Huang offered to try it out at once and they set off. Che Ren didn't know what kind of challenge it would be and was quite surprised when he saw it. It was carnivorous end with a danger level of 4 stars. If you encounter a 3-star monster, you should try to run away from it. And to avoid encountering a monster of the 4-star level or higher, it was better not to create such situations. Che Rin remembered at that moment what he had been taught. Jae-hwan pointed out that these are rules for smugglers, but not for hunters. And if he can't move or appears to be about to die, to call for help. Jae-hwan first saw Cha-ran's abilities in person 6 months ago. If his skills remain at the same level, he'll probably die. Carnivorous End is especially dangerous in close-range combat. At the same time, if Cha-ren asks for help, it will be a total failure. He was as focused as he could be, but if he'd reacted a second later, his head would have fallen off his shoulders. This was Cha-ren's second battle with a 4-star level monster. There was a slight difference between them, but the main factors were the same. Neither offensively nor defensively was he allowed a hint of error. And now he had no comrade to cover him, so any hiccup meant death. He needs to fight as hard as he can and destroy the monster as quickly as possible. Cha-ren chose the needle technique. The biggest difference for hunters between 3 and 4 stars is intelligence. Individuals may vary, but most monsters are as good as humans in their ability to assess the situation. And especially gifted monsters can even attack the human psyche. The monster could have defended itself, but it created a delay to lure him in. You can't break through that with a needle. Jae-hwan thought so too and tried to help. Suddenly, something happened to the weapon. It misbehaved. While he was distracted, the monster disappeared. Jae-hwan assumed that Che Rin had somehow activated it. He replied that he didn't even know how to use it yet. The warden didn't sense any magical powers in him. Most likely he was just using physical strength as a source of energy. There is nothing unusual in this mechanism. On the contrary, a slightly outdated method. After all, in the end, the use of such weapons is not given for nothing. In order to maintain the sword, one must expend one's own strength. In the past, it was difficult to find good materials. Now it is more profitable to make a real sword. However, that punch that Je Huang had just seen was quite powerful. And if it wasn't for this subject, he would have taught Cha Rin a lesson. The guy admitted that it could be considered a loss. The boss admitted that initially he didn't believe in winning, and he didn't mean his abilities, but even the exact opposite. If you look at it objectively, Tha Rena has pretty good qualities. Perhaps only one combat power reaches the gold level. But is the word not bad praise? If you count his father, Jae Hwan had only met a little more than 10 people stronger than Che Rin. And among them, more than half died because of monsters weaker than themselves. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a monster. Che Rin thought it was another butt. This monster has the super regeneration ability. It regenerates most of the physical damage. Cha Ren used the flux technique and dealt serious damage to the monster. But then something unusual happened. His weapon turned into a hammer. Jae Hwan has figured out how it works. User position. Most likely the weapon perceives the situation and changes according to it. Perhaps this feature is perfect for this particular monster. Ji Huang believed that no matter how good a weapon is, without understanding the basic method of attack, it is impossible to defeat it. The monster, with its super generation, seemed to be completely unaffected by anything at all. Jehuan was indignant at the fact that he couldn't even dodge or defend himself in his condition. Che Rin thought he had broken all the monster's weaknesses, asked for advice on how to proceed. Zhou Huang thought that it was necessary to run away and lure the monster to a place where it couldn't regenerate. This is a plan of attack that can be used to win. There are 3 ways to attack the carnivorous end. The first and most effective. We need to lure the carnivorous enda into an environment where it can't absorb nutrients. As long as it is on the surface of the ground, it feeds off of it will regenerate without end. And if you lure him to the rocks or an abandoned building, you can destroy him at least 5 times. Unfortunately, Che Rin didn't think of that. He was trying to find his weaknesses and find the right moment to crush him, since it was the only way he knew. Suddenly, Che Rin saw the monster break Jae Hwan's protective barrier. The second way to attack carnivorous end is to cast a spell on it. Fire spell of at least rank C or higher and burn it to the ground. It sounds pointless, but it's called futility. A mage who can control fire can effortlessly draw it in and destroy it. This is one of the reasons why this 4-star level monster's vulnerability from fire is too unreliable a weakness. If he can't use fire and uses the first method, the difficulty level of the sweep will drop dramatically. But before he realizes it, the monster is already wreaking real havoc around him. Sounds easy to say. Summon C rank fire, but you can't do that with regular fire. Even an army bomb doesn't come close to that kind of power. In the first generation, when there were no good magic spells, they used other ways to attack. As a result, many hunters lost their lives. These were the very hunters that Jehuan was referring to earlier. Because of the monsters that could have been easily defeated if they knew how to attack properly, but they were never able to develop their skills. Because you were born a little earlier, Jae Huang realized Cha Ren's despondency after losing to the monster for the first time. Che Ren replied, "It's not like fighting a human. Every hunter has to experience it and pay for it. If you are lucky, you will be slightly wounded, and if not, you will be retired. Worst case scenario, another man's life, after which he will consider himself the last person to survive." Jae Hua didn't want Che Rin to suffer the same fate. Paying dearly doesn't mean you'll learn more. They were done for the day. The warden told them to take a bag and warned them that they would have to run for an hour or 2. The area of the dungeon is very different from the original area. From the outside, it looks appropriate to the area and feels small. But when you get inside, it can be several dozen times larger. What at first glance looked like roughly 4 Seoul neighborhoods, including Yoedo Island on the inside, could be compared to an entire Korean peninsula. After a couple hours, they reached the place. Jae Huang said to admire the scenery, the first thing to look at is the amazing scenery. Dungeon Old Sindorum Danger Level A. It's actually a true 3-star level food chain hell. The beauty and silence of the place was simply mesmerizing, but alone you can last about 30 minutes there. For 2 weeks, Jae Huang will train during the day and protect Cheche Rina at night, but after 2 weeks, the daytime classes will continue. For the remaining 2 weeks, he will have to try to survive on his own at night. If he survives a month using the knowledge he has gained, he will pass the exam. Ji Huang decided to clarify once again if he had changed his mind, he could cancel right away. Che Ryan replied, only regretting that he would only have a month. 1 month later, November is the day to take the exams to move on to hero school. Si Ram was worried because Cha Rin hadn't answered his phone all month. The exam starts at 9 o'clock and he didn't remember. Suddenly, Che Rin appeared in a completely inappropriate manner, barefoot and in tattered pants. Si Ram was just pissed off, screaming where he was and why he was like that. Che Ren apologized for not answering. He had been in a place where there was no communication for a month. Not only did he look like a homeless man, but he cut his bangs himself because they were in the way without the help of scissors. He apologized again for making her worry and went to wash and change. She asked him to wait, wanted to say something in the car, and touched him inadvertently. Cha-Ren's self-preservation instinct automatically kicked in after his long training, and he inadvertently pushed her away with a little force. Se Ram was shocked by this reaction. Naturally, he apologized immediately, explaining that he was in the habit of reacting if something approached from behind. There were clothes for him in the car. Chae-rin had forgotten what he looked like. He bragged that he had gotten a new weapon and had been using it for a month. Se-Ram felt the ominous aura from the man for the first time, but that was not the true cause of the fright. The energy she felt from Cha-Rena was very familiar to her. Se-Ram was frightened and may have misunderstood the situation, but for a split second she felt an aura coming from the monsters. On the way to school, Se-Ram asked how the new suit that was made especially for him was. Chae-rin really liked the way it fit and almost didn't feel. If there was more time, you could do a functionality test and customize some parts. The better the equipment, the more functions are available. Cha-Ren decided there was nothing to be done and waited impatiently for them to arrive at school. Se-Ram thought it was a good idea not to let your guard down, even if it was just an exam. But what Chae-rin meant was not the exam, but the school itself. After all, he'd never been to the school. He had spent the last 9 months talking so much about the School of Heroes, and he couldn't wait to see it. 270 meters above the sky, the place where the park and the mountain were located in the past. Seoul City between Yongsan and Cheonggu, Namsan Mountain. North latitude 37-32-41. Mount Dravig is 8,781 meters above sea level. Past danger level A+, transformed into the highest mountainous terrain in the entire Korean peninsula. If you looked closely, it was adjacent to the large-scale Igara jungle dungeon in Seoul. In reality, it was a separate dungeon. With this in mind, 30 years ago, the state teamed up with the Hunters Association and drew up a plan to clean up the dungeon completely. At that time, all known hunters in Korea were gathered. They held a briefing during which not one of them refused, although participation was completely voluntary. Preparations for such a large-scale raid took about a year. Astronomers and physicists were involved because the plan was bound to succeed. And as a result, in an hour's time, Mount Dravig in Namsan's past will once again become South Korean territory. Completely clearing a dungeon above rank A. By world standards, it was a momentous achievement. However, after that, the minds of most Koreans were busy with happy thoughts. There was more than one mountain peak on Mount Dravig. The mountain range itself was quite extensive. How to utilize this terrain? It may not seem real to some. Then some unexpected words were spoken, which cut at the root of the problem of the dispute over ownership of that land. There was a proposal to build a school on this site. There was already a need for some kind of educational institution for hunters, but no matter how you look at it, and for the systematic education of a huge number of gifted schoolchildren, a wide space was required. It was not easy to prepare it. Therefore, these plans were constantly postponed. At that time, the Dravig dungeon had no master, but the real right of possession belonged to the hunters, who risked their lives for the cleanup. Only a few people knew then or now, but if the hunter who contributed the most to the operation. By Sweep not setting an example for others and not sacrificing his right to possess then today, the School of Heroes would simply not exist. Cha-Ren reasoned that even if he didn't study there, he had always dreamed of going there at least once. And if they sold souvenirs there, they could make a lot of money. They traveled outside of Seoul, but he thought the school was in the north. Se-Ram explained while he was out of contact a lot had happened. Asked if he'd heard of J. It's a famous dungeon cleanup team. Cha-Ren has heard of them. Among his friends are their fans. Se-Ram gave the sad news that they all died. The lock on their shelter broke. Apparently, a high-risk monster was in the neighborhood at just the right time. But medicines were found at the scene of the tragedy, as well as the bodies of famous personalities. Chae-ren imagined the scandal that erupted. Se-Ram confirmed that a public apology began immediately. She heard about the 7, starting with the Hunters Association, and public opinion of all organizations related to hunters has plummeted. To assuage this sentiment in the community, the Hunters Association has announced various innovative projects, and the changed exam field is one of them. The Fangji Labyrinth is the second place that has been completely cleared after Mount Dravig, a dungeon above a rank. It was once home to the nest of the famous dragon Vazuka. At the same time, in the Chinsen Group's lab in the underground forge of Zik Eskerm was chatting with the former monster about wine. Zik was outraged about the difficulty of delivery, and he wiped it all out in one night, to which Argus complained that he hadn't rested in a long time. He drank honey wine 25 years old. Dwarf wine is very, very strong. Argus lamented that elves that people can't make anything properly, especially wine. He asked why Zik had come and if he wanted to tell about the boy. Zik couldn't say that his visit had nothing to do with Cha-Ren. He asked about the Wazuki maze. About 20 years ago, the Hunters Association asked Argus about it. He confirmed it and said they wanted to make it a place of intense training, but he refused and kicked them out. Zik asked him to explain why he thought that. Argus explained that he knew that dragons were passionate about one thing. The object of their lust may be different for everyone, but if it happens, they show an obsession and desire to possess it. Wazuka was a known lover of mazes. Even for dragons, he was considered quite strong and spent a lot of effort to make the nest mysterious and intricate. He used titans and dwarf technology, even human and elven. Anything that could help was used. Humans can't handle such a monster, but they say that in 20 years they have completely eliminated all dangerous elements by hiring dwarfs from other countries. The number of dwarves that Wazuka had kidnapped and forced to work was over 1,000. Argus didn't understand how the humans had managed to capture Wazuka, but he was sure it wasn't inside the labyrinth. Maybe it was taken out somehow. If he was inside the nest, no matter what means you used, it would be impossible to catch him. Whatever had been destroyed there in 20 years, Argus was sure it was just the tip of the iceberg. Most likely, no dangerous traps were found in the depths of the dungeon. Assuming there was no problem in the search, no one really knows how the maze would react if hunters went inside. Judging by the fact that Zik came personally to ask him about it, it looks like these not-so-smart people have done something. You can't just take it in a negative way, though. If we're lucky, maybe nothing will happen, even if something happens inside the labyrinth. With these wretched creatures, it'll teach them a lesson. But who knows, maybe they'll have some bright kid with them. Who can win? Fangji Training Center, former Fangji Maze. All those who take part in the transfer exam are required to obtain a pass and contract in Zone B1. The field is modified as a labyrinth, where there are zones with varying degrees of difficulty and themes. C-ROM said this is the first launch of such a trial, so there is no information, although it could be profitable for Cha Rena. Che-Rin noticed that a lot of people came to the exams. He remembered his cousin Se-Rom and thought that she had to sweat a lot, because he noticed the fierce stares of about 20 people. He didn't know what she'd said, but they weren't just wary. Se-Rom didn't share Cha-Ren's concerns and didn't think Anisha would do anything about it. But he wasn't just talking about looks. He'd learned to sense a lot in the last month, and it felt like he was in the crosshairs. An unpleasant, sticky sensation. He risked his life in a high-difficulty dungeon for a month. Thanks to this experience, he learned many things. And among them was the ability to avoid dangerous situations to avoid being in the crosshairs, however. The sensation was several times sharper. He'd expected this, but for some reason he was still embarrassed by this increased interest in himself. If he does find himself in such a situation, he should at least say hello in the same spirit. Under no circumstances should you show your opponent your weakness. 55 minutes before the start of the practical exam, Fang Integrated Training Center, Conference Room Number 1. The floor was taken by Si Sung-ho, a 58-year-old former hunter, director of a Hunters Association, 12th in the ranking of South Korea. He thanked everyone for their support and especially the school principal. Go Dok-soo is a former hunter of 65 years, 4th place in the rankings of the Union Pacific. The director felt that he need not be thanked as he had never supported such a rash and crazy plan. According to the director at this time, it is foolish to think that such antics can attract public attention. People don't want new adventures. They want those who defend them to be sincere, although there are almost none here. But as an employee, he has to follow the majority opinion. And if you want to thank him, you should thank the person sitting across from him. It is she who is the present principal of the school. Seo Yura is 61 years old, chairman of the board of directors of the School of Heroes. She understood that the director didn't mean it, but asked her to refrain from expressions to avoid misunderstandings. It took all the board members a long time to come to this decision. The director clarified that time is a relative concept. Even well-planned sprints may seem too long to a first-class player. Though it is unknown if the ranking achieved through connections in politics has value in this world, the girl present was worried about what was said. Cheo Yong-gil, a member of the board of directors and founder of the 7-Star Squad, was very indignant at the director's words, and felt that he was letting himself go too far. After all, this is not a general exam, but only an additional exam for a few outstanding students. The principal did not let the attacks go unanswered and replied that he'd better sit quietly and remember himself 30 years ago. There's not a single one of the guys outside that he could treat like that. So Jura realized that they would not be able to reach a full agreement, and she understood the director's feelings, however. If he tries to cause a conflict, she is ready to respond accordingly. They've been at odds for a long time. Everyone present expected this boil to burst at some point. But no one could have imagined that unforeseen circumstances would occur, namely the appearance of one applicant who had nothing to do with the situation. Sun Ho urged everyone to calm down, thinking that the director had done something unnecessary. but the object of his criticism should be him personally, and there is no point in them quarreling. The director didn't understand why Seung-ho should be criticized. There is no hunter in Korea who does not know that the chairman of the association. She's a pet puppy of So Yuri, and accordingly, she is the root of the evil. The principal asked the Kana teacher if his words were too harsh. The teacher confirmed that the words and tone were certainly very rude. The director understood that when you have power and authority, you want to use it to the fullest, but aren't they overstepping their bounds? Every school tries to attract alumni by inviting them to the squads that are most suitable, and they guarantee alumni special treatment and an annual income. So Sura lures students who only want those privileges. Achievement is not through effort and ability, and at the expense of fame and fortune and glory. In a few years, there will be no young hunters with potential left. How can the fish in the well resist the heaven that provides them sustenance? They'll just keep swimming in that confined space, not realizing they have nowhere to go. The headmaster realized that this time too, it wasn't just the chairman's request. They must have found out the information about the dungeon, known only to a few members of the association, and those people are most likely the parents of the children who will be taking the exam today. The principal asked the Kana teacher after all that was said if he really thought his words were rude and aggressive. There aren't enough kids who left the school, so now they're trying to pressure those who stayed. That means he and their whole school mean nothing. The ASD teacher didn't think that would happen. It's impossible to pass this exam using terrain information. If there's anything to worry about, it's safety. The exam is quite dangerous and is conducted at a poorly tested site. The director felt that if something were to happen and it was necessary to act quickly. Also, neither of them gave a hoot, but ASD must have felt it too. No matter how spoiled, it's hard to miss that aura. In Kana, Cha Ren's opinion, he was immature and not very bright, and considering the time and place, even stupid. The director only agreed halfway. Although he didn't know him, he thought that he couldn't be called immature and unintelligent. It's probably on purpose. But ASD himself knew it, because he is known for being stricter with talented students than with the rest. The principal hoped Cha Ren would be able to enroll, although as an official, he couldn't allow it. It had been a long time since he had felt the urge to personally take care of a student. The topic of the exam for those wishing to enter the School of Heroes was finding and transporting treasure. 20 minutes to start the exam. The training center in Fang, briefing room number 2. To pass the exam, they need to find the treasure hidden in a chest inside the dungeon and bring it outside. All of the dangerous elements within the dungeon are basically aimed at neutralizing the participants so that they cannot engage in combat. They were given a release of liability agreement to sign asking them if they wanted to become hunters to be sensitive to the safety issue. Straightforwardly negotiated. The condition for passing the exam is 1 treasure per person. If everyone present successfully passes the test, there will be treasure left in the dungeon. There is also no limit to the number of people who pass the test. The applicants whispered that if only a quarter of them got in, that was over 100 people. They hoped the conditions wouldn't change. Che Ren thought about such rules Se Ram didn't talk about, but judging by the reaction of those around him, these rules only appeared this year. At the end of the briefing, they were asked to proceed to the examination field, follow the numbers on the tickets, go to the exits, starting with Group A. To go to the storage rooms, there is the equipment they gave up. Seiche Ren thought he had given up his cell phone and had no way to even make a call. Suddenly, a conflict broke out in the lobby. Everyone was on edge and going in their thoughts, so there was a clash of incoming during the exit. The guy resented them for swooping in and berating him and why he had to listen to all this. They saw that he hurt his leg, so he's walking slowly. In a place where there are a lot of people, you can accidentally bump into each other. Don't get angry and blame others. But he got angry companions who called him names and did not recognize that they were behind him. Che Ren picked up this kid's notebook and asked everyone not to act like this. The place was crowded as it was. This got the bullies even more worked up, and one of them decided to latch on to his words. Che Ren warned that although they are minors, there are laws for them, and he will not do anything before an important exam. But Cha Ren's ego was naturally hurt, and when they met on the exam field, they would probably allow themselves a little too much. The boy thanked him, even though he didn't think he should have done it, but thanks to Cha Ren, he had avoided trouble. He pointed out his broken leg and skeptically wished him good luck on the exam. Che Ryan thought it was weird when he saw his textbook that a guy who wants to be a hunter is studying for his SATs. That meant he had no hope of passing. P.E. Dojin is an 18-year-old sophomore at the School of Heroes, placed second last year in the overall freshman assessment. Che Rien didn't even realize the kid was already in hero school. Apparently, you couldn't tell that from him. Everyone approached the entrance to the labyrinth with 10 minutes left until the exam. They were asked to follow the instructions of the assistants and each go to their own entrance. Everyone was in awe. It was like a science fiction movie. They were impressed even before the exam began. Each of the capsules was an elevator with which they needed to get into the maze. Those who had already made it to their pod were told to wait for the exam to begin. While they are waiting, all applicants will be transported to the test site. At a set time, the doors will open and the exam will begin. K-Ren looked at his equipment with interest. Equipment 1, Tactical Bracelet, notifies you of the time, monitors the user's condition, sets the location, and makes a call for help. But when a call for help is used, the participant is removed from the trial. The Fange Maze was once called the Baskin Abyss. There were a few hunters who had questions about the safety of this place as a training ground, but even they couldn't guess what might be lurking in this maze. And no one could imagine that the labyrinth had a will of its own, and fooled people who tried to use it. There was no way to locate the applicants. At last, the maze has been rewarded, sheep for him to devour as prey. However, all these people who turned out to be prey never realized that they themselves had entered the predator's lair into this dragon maze without a master in hopes of completing a task and passing an exam.